Our protagonist, Juyeon, was the one who defeated the Demon King in another world and became the hero who protected the continent's peace. He was happy to see the people of that world relieved, but he was even more glad that he could finally return to his original world. The god then spoke to him, praising him for doing a great job and for choosing to save the world once again. However, he responded that every time he saw her, it was always about choices. Due to the resets, he always had to start from scratch, which meant he had no choice at all. He then asked the god if she was really going to send him back to his original world this time, and she confirmed that she would. He reminded her that she had kidnapped a talented person from another dimension and made him work for 20 years. He then asked her if she wasn't going to give him any compensation, like letting him keep his memories or retain some magic. She told him that while he was there, time in his dimension had stopped, and that his time had remained the same, meaning he hadn't lost anything. He clenched his teeth in frustration, but all he could do was sigh and agree with her. He then told her to just hurry up and send him back. Yet, she assured him that compensation for the time and effort he spent there would surely be given, though, like before, he wouldn't remember it himself. The god then gave him a god's fragment and told him she would give him a piece of her power as a gift. Depending on his choices, the flow of the dimension would change, and the world would shift according to his will. This left him speechless for a moment. He asked her if she could at least give him a hint, but she simply replied, "No." Irritated, he asked her why everything was always a no, and shouted at her to at least let him keep his memories of the continent. She only stared at him with a smile and pointed her huge finger at him. Then, she told him to go. Panicking, he tried to tell her to wait because he wasn't done talking. However, she didn't listen, and proceeded to send him to his original world, telling him to return to the place where his journey began, the world that would determine his fate. She informed him that she would continue to watch over his journey. As he fell through the space between worlds and felt his body slowly dissolving into the air, he tightly closed his eyes. Later, he woke up because of the bright light coming from his window and sat up, yawning in exhaustion. He wondered what was happening as he felt strangely refreshed. He checked his phone and saw a text from his manager asking if he was coming, if he was asleep, and if he knew that the morning shift started at 7 a.m. He panicked upon seeing it and rushed outside, knowing he was super late. A moment later, he arrived at the convenience store. The manager angrily scolded him, saying that if he continued being that late, it would be hard to keep working together. He respectfully bowed his head and repeatedly apologized to his manager. He felt down, wondering why his life was always this broken. Hours later, during his break, he ate bento as usual and sighed, realizing that his job at the convenience store wouldn't last long either. With overdue rent piling up, 1 or 2 part-time jobs wouldn't be enough. He then wished he had awakened. But then he was confused when a panel suddenly appeared in front of him, showing that he had activated the unique trait Skill Master, which shocked him. Awakened individuals are commonly called users, and it's been 5 years since augmented reality, like something out of a fantasy novel, enveloped the world. Along with the fields that began appearing across the earth, the world has long since started revolving around the new resources that come from them. Users are granted the power to conquer and pioneer these fields, which are dominated by monsters. Even menial tasks within these fields can generate income, which is why everyone wants to become a user, even though it means stepping into the unknown, because rewards more tempting than the danger are scattered everywhere. However, not all users make a fortune. While some awaken with high-grade unique traits from the start, others do not. At the pinnacle stands the world's #1 ranker. The first to reach level 70 and possessor of the SS-grade unique trait Dragon Speech was Muhammad Al. One day, Al uploaded a video to his personal channel. Countless people clicked on it out of curiosity, and they couldn't look away for even a second. In the video, Al was facing a swarm of monsters. Calmly, he activated his power through his staff, and viewers witnessed the dream of all mages, magic that anyone who had read even one fantasy novel would admire. Al then released a barrage of powerful meteors, obliterating the monsters without breaking a sweat. The viewers were stunned, unable to believe they were witnessing such a spectacle with their own eyes. They thought it was insane. This was an A-grade field after all. No one could believe that a level 70 user could cast such a devastating spell. The meteors destroyed everything in their path, and even a monster capable of wiping out a city couldn't withstand them. Everyone wondered how a mere monster could ever oppose the wrath of nature itself. At the end of the video, Al stated that the skill they had just seen was the SS-grade Meteor Rain. He then announced that exactly 1 week from the video's upload, if anyone could showcase magic more splendid and powerful than Meteor Rain, he would give them a ring artifact as a gift. Everyone knew the ring he was referring to, the Elemental Ring, the first and only publicly revealed SS-grade artifact, and the ultimate accessory every magic-based user dreamed of possessing, even in their sleep. However, not everyone was impressed by Al. A man asked a woman why she thought so, since just offering such a prize was already a huge deal. The woman replied that Al was basically declaring he wouldn't give the Elemental Ring away at all. She questioned where in the world there could be anything more powerful than an SS-grade skill. She then showed the man how Al had set a trap by making the condition of winning based on magic, with Al himself as the judge. Irritated, she added that the judging was subjective, meaning Al had no real intention of giving away the ring. She then shouted that she was jealous, and that Al was infuriating. Though people couldn't help but envy Al's flex, the video became a hot topic. Yet in the end, it seemed like a story from another world that no one could ever catch up to. Or so it seemed. A few days later, Juyeon headed into the forest. When he felt far enough from the city, he stopped. With a single motion of his fingers, a meteor rain even more powerful than Al's dropped from the sky, annihilating the ground around him, except for the patch he stood on. Shocked but amazed, Juyeon laughed in awe and shouted excitedly that Al's skill was awesome. He then uploaded the video to social media under the anonymous name user034512, making sure his face wasn't visible. Everyone who watched it was left speechless, their mouths agape. As the comments poured in, one thing was certain. Al had lost, and now the world was left wondering, who was that person? Users upon awakening are typically granted one unique trait. A unique trait enhances the effects of specific skills and is commonly understood to function similarly to a class in games. The well-known unique traits revealed to the world are Dragon Speech, Miracle, Regeneration, and Lethal Strike. A user with Dragon Speech becomes a mage more powerful than a dragon. A user with Miracle becomes a healer, said to be capable of reviving even the dead. A user with Regeneration becomes a tank, who can regrow limbs and continue fighting. A user with Lethal Strike becomes a warrior capable of defeating any enemy. However, Juyeon didn't know what his trait, Skill Master, was truly about. A moment ago, Juyeon had been busy at his computer, searching for answers. He knew that when evaluating unique traits, the first thing to look at is the grade, because the higher the grade, the better the effects and the more subtraits it has, or so they say. Among users, known grades range from F grade to SS grade. When he opened his status window, it revealed that his trait was an X grade unique trait, an unknown category, but he was sure it must be an incredible cheat ability. However, his stats didn't agree. They were so low that he wondered sadly whether high-grade traits weren't supposed to come with stat boosts. He found it hard to believe. Getting all stats at 1 wasn't easy even for a normal person. Still, he comforted himself by thinking at least he still had the trait. The system then explained to him that Skill Master could use all skills. One of its passive abilities was Passive Income, which stated that every 24 hours at midnight, it would generate 10 SP up to a maximum of 100 SP. Juyeon asked if that was all, just 2 subtraits, and began to wonder if he was right in thinking that users could learn any skill using a skill book. He also wasn't sure what SP even was. He didn't yet know whether Skill Master was good or bad. Then the system presented him with his first tutorial quest. Try copying a skill so the EX grade skill copy would activate. The reward was 20 SP and an event video. The system further explained that skill copy allowed him to replicate a skill, but it would be deleted daily and each use would consume 1 copy attempt. A quest appearing immediately upon awakening was news to him. He knew that to copy someone else's skill, he would have to go to a field. But with level 1 stats, that would be a one-way ticket to the grave. So he decided to ignore the quest for now and instead looked up skill videos. That's when a video of Al appeared. The system analyzed it and confirmed that Al's skill was Meteor Rain, grade SS, and displayed all its details. Then the tutorial event triggered, a linked event from the tutorial quest, and the system informed him that a special tutorial map would now be opened. This was a one-time opportunity. It explained that copied skills could only be used within the tutorial map, and while inside, all of Juyeon's stats would be increased by 999. The system then asked if he would like to copy Meteor Rain. Juyeon was shocked. It could even be copied from a video? That's when he tested Meteor Rain in the field. Back in the present, Al was watching the viral video while calmly humming and sipping wine. Someone then picked up the remote and turned off the television. A woman asked Al if giving away the elemental ring was really that great of an idea. But Al just responded by asking her what the odds were that a skill obtained less than a week ago would fall into someone else's hands. She replied that there were plenty of similar skills in the world. Still, he pressed, what if it was an SS grade skill with the exact same name? She argued that there was no confirmation that it was SS grade, and it could have been staged to look similar, especially since no trace of such a field had been found. But Al firmly stated that he was sure it belonged to at least an SS grade unique trait. He then instructed her to pass along a business card with the ring. Finally, he informed her that they would stay cautious for now, so it was best not to approach directly, only to say the ring was a gift for someone he hoped to become friends with in the distant future. Meanwhile, at the convenience store, Juyeon was excited as he watched the insane view count on his video and remembered that the system had even recorded a video for him. A child nearby was asking him how to spell Tukbing jelly, but he ignored her, too absorbed in his excitement. He was relieved that the system ensured anonymity since his face wasn't shown and thought not uploading it would have been foolish. The kid tried to get his attention again, but he ignored her once more, busy thinking that if he kept growing like this, there wouldn't be a trait more broken than his. Suddenly, he snapped to attention when he heard a deep male voice calling him, irritatedly telling him that his kid was asking if they sold Tukbing jelly. Juyeon immediately acted as if he hadn't understood the child earlier, though he had purposely ignored her, and told the man that he would sell it. When the customers left, he sat down with a sigh, thinking there was no way they'd actually give away an SS grade item. Still, he hoped that by some miracle, they really would. He dreamed of earning enough money to live comfortably forever and becoming as strong as Al, basking in the attention of the entire world. He smiled, realizing that just a short while ago, it was something he couldn't even imagine. Then, he stood up and stretched, feeling like he might actually be able to do something. Just then, he received a comment on his video. It was from Al. Al commented that he would give him the elemental ring with no conditions attached. Other viewers responded with disbelief, asking if Al had gone crazy for offering an SS-grade ring, while others were simply amazed. Juyeon stared at his phone, frozen in disbelief. He then read a comment stating that Al had once claimed he'd give anything to someone who brought him an S-grade staff, and when someone actually did, Al paid 200 billion won in cash. That reassured Juyeon. The ring would truly be his. Soon after, without expecting anything more, Al's secretary, Lee Soo-yeon, met with Juyeon regarding the delivery of the elemental ring. After handing it over, she escorted him home, informing him that Al would like to meet him at least once. Juyeon remained stunned in silence the entire time, up until he was back home, wearing the elemental ring on his finger. He asked himself if the ring was real, and the system confirmed it. It was the elemental ring, grade SS, which significantly boosted many of his stats just by wearing it. The reality of everything finally sank in. Suddenly snapping to action, he sat up, realizing it wasn't the time to lie around. His magic stat had gone up by 40, and he thought he should head into a field immediately. He opened his status window again, but upon seeing his stats, still at 1, he concluded it was probably too much for him. He knew he needed armor, but that required money. He headed to his computer desk and checked his video views. He guessed that the ad revenue might be enough, but he wanted to avoid verifying his identity through the channel. Staring at the screen, he wondered if there was a better way. Then an idea came to him. He remembered that just doing emergency healing near a field could earn hundreds of thousands of won. He knew healing skills were the real deal, and even those who looked down on healers admitted that fieldwork paid well. He then set himself up on the sidewalk with a handwritten sign offering C-grade healing that could treat amputations, fractures, and F-grade or lower status ailments. His pricing? 500,000 won for amputation, 200,000 won for fractures, and 700,000 won for status ailments. He thought it would be a jackpot if even one person came per day. He was sitting outside the D-grade swamp field at Seoul Grand Park, since all the prime spots were already taken. While checking his phone, he made a mental note to bring something next time to help pass the time. Without noticing, someone carrying a severely injured woman rushed toward him. Trying to stay positive, he told himself it was good news and reassured himself that there was no danger outside a field, so nothing serious could happen. But then, the man stopped right in front of him. When Juyeon looked up, he saw a blood-soaked man glaring down at him. Juyeon froze, stunned, and sweating in fear. The man then ordered Juyeon to get his skill ready, which immediately irritated him. He wondered what the man's attitude was about, using informal speech right off the bat. He was reminded of a customer at the convenience store who once barked at him to hand over a red cigarette and wondered if this man thought he was still some part-time convenience store clerk. He was annoyed because even though the healing skill was a copied one, it was a C-grade skill with some impressive effects. He felt he had to say something. Angrily, he told the man that the price was 2,000 up front. But before he could say more, he noticed the man's expression remained completely unchanged. Feeling defeated, Juyeon reluctantly softened his tone and guided the man toward the treatment area. As they walked, he caught the rotting smell of blood in the air, and anxiety kicked in when the man suddenly pulled out the woman's severed arm. The man slapped the arm back against the woman's shoulder and shouted at Juyeon to hurry. Juyeon panicked. He had only seen scenes like this in movies, and this was his first time dealing with something so gruesome in real life. He nervously wondered if the skill would activate properly, but reminded himself he had to pull it off. Then he activated his copied skill, Light of Recovery Grade C. Doing his best, he attempted to reattach the woman's arm. Later, his work complete, he finally lay down, completely drained. But then he recalled that the man had demanded healing 3 times. He couldn't believe it. He knew that if he hadn't had the elemental ring, which restored 20% of his mana, he would have been in serious trouble. He looked at his hand, recalling the severed arm, and wondered what on earth was happening inside the fields. Still, he decided not to think too much about it. He was sure of one thing. He could make a lot of money and could now quit his part-time job. He began thinking about what he should do with his new income. Investments, stocks, or maybe even crypto. He opened his luxury strawberry yogurt, tossed away the lid without bothering to lick the excess yogurt off it because he figured he was rich now, and enjoyed it in his huge bed. He wondered if this was what luxury tasted like. Still, he reminded himself that he needed to earn more SP for growth. Just then, the system displayed a new tutorial quest. Raise the level of a subtrait. It explained that this was one of the key methods for acquiring SP, which was essential for growing the Skill Master trait. The reward for completing the quest was 100 SP and the activation of 2 subtraits. However, the system warned him not to forget. Raising the level of passive income was the top priority for growth. He found it strange that traits could have levels, but thanks to the system, he figured out that traits could be leveled up by spending SP. It would take 100 SP to level up passive income. Since the quest reward was also 100 SP, he considered it basically free, especially because leveling up would unlock a new subtrait. That meant he absolutely had to complete the quest. Opening his SP window, he saw that he had 70 SP left. He calculated that since passive income gave him 10 SP per day, he could complete the quest in just 3 days. As he was thinking through what to focus on next, someone knocked on his door and informed him that his room service order had arrived. Excitedly, he responded that he was coming, convincing himself that this was research on skill combinations, not a hotel vacation. He let the staff bring in the food, and once the table was filled with delicious, expensive dishes, he turned on the television and began eating. From a video, he learned that S-grade and higher skills were practically extinct. He realized that even if he copied them, they would vanish after midnight. He gave thanks to Al for casually revealing an SS-grade skill, which was extremely rare. Then he changed the channel, wondering if someday he might be able to keep copied skills permanently by leveling up. He decided to organize his skills, dividing them into categories for immediate use and for later, and saved them into playlists. He then placed Meteor Rain, Explosion Shot, Ice Spear, and Ice Wall as his top 4 skills. Just in case, he added Body Hardening, and also included Teleportation Technique because it looked cool. As he kept adding more, he thought to himself that internet skill shopping was the best. Bro is shopping skill, like it's clothes. A moment later, he had finished all the food, enough for a whole party, and leaned back on the sofa comfortably. He had registered as a healer with the user association and had taken care of everything. Happily, he lay in bed wondering how much his value would skyrocket if he could use healing, buffs, and magic. He even fantasized about some stunning beauty sending him a love call. A few days later, he was back at his usual spot outside the D-grade field. The woman from the other day approached and told him she was really grateful for what he did back then. He looked at her, speechless and confused. The woman asked if he didn't remember her. He replied no, and added that she was far too beautiful to have had any connection with him. She then reminded him that her brother had brought her to him for healing a few days ago, pointing toward the same arrogant man. He finally remembered and realized she was the one with the severed arm. He had thought the woman was the man's girlfriend, since he had spent so much on her. But now he knew she was his sister. She shyly told him she was glad she could thank him in person because if he hadn't been there, she might have actually died. She then asked if he was currently in a party, to which he simply replied no. She asked again if he belonged to any guild, and again he replied no. She smiled and said that was perfect, because their party needed a temporary healer. Her offer startled him. He wasn't ready to step into a field yet, and he knew he needed to decline. But then she sweetly asked if he'd like to grab a coffee and chat if he had time, adding that if he gave her his number, she'd contact him later. She really tries to riz our boy. He blushed and was about to agree, but suddenly, both of them were shocked by a loud scream. A man was dragging another severely injured man, shouting that they'd gotten wrecked in the field and needed a healer who could treat status ailments. Hearing the sound of money, he rushed to them and activated his healing skill. After treating the injured man, the comrade handed him payment. Juyeon then glanced back at the woman. With tears in his eyes, he apologized and explained that joining a party was just too much for his level right now. She laughed awkwardly and reassured him that they could carry him. They had an S-grade tank and an S-grade mage. But Juyeon quietly collected his money and folded up his mat. Confused, she tried to stop him, but he sprinted away while repeatedly apologizing. He didn't dare look back, haunted by the memory that even S-grade users had barely escaped from a D-grade field just moments ago. He kept running, face flushed with embarrassment and regret, wondering when he'd ever get the chance to party with a beauty like her again. He swore to himself that he'd quickly gather money and SP and become a true golden spoon mage. Later that night, Juyeon lay on the balcony of his hotel room gazing at the city lights and thinking that this was finally the day he had been waiting for. Just then, the phone next to him rang. It was exactly midnight. The system popped up, informing him that he had obtained 10 SP and asked if he would like to upgrade passive income to level 2. He agreed. With the upgrade, passive income increased to level 2, boosting his SP gain every 24 hours at midnight from 10 SP to 50 SP. Amazed by the 5-fold increase, he wondered if he should check his quest rewards. The system then showed that he had completed the tutorial quest and received 100 SP as a reward, along with a unique trait subtrait and trait bestowal level 1, which grants one random F-grade unique trait to a copied skill. He understood that unique traits represented a user's tendencies. While users could all use the same skills via skill books, the power of those skills varied significantly from person to person, fundamentally due to the differences in their unique traits. This naturally placed Skillmaster at a disadvantage. Without unique traits, copied skills would always perform worse than those of the original user. However, Meteor Rain in the tutorial map had been an exception. Now he wondered if copied skills from this point on would also come with unique traits. It felt like a cheat, though the word random still bothered him. The system then presented his options. Light of Recovery. Heals severed and fractured areas, restores 15% health, and cures E rank or lower status abnormalities. Mana requirement, 25. Mana cost, 250. a unique trait that increases magic attack power by 10%. He knew he'd have to test things himself to be certain and wondered what to try first. Thinking it was about time to graduate from being a healer for hire, he was suddenly presented with a new tutorial quest to hunt a minimum of 20 monsters using copied skills, level up to unlock more diverse skill copying, and access additional skill master content. The rewards included 200 SP, an upgrade to skill copy X grade, and sub-trait level 2 activation. He stared at the quest window, speechless. It truly felt like someone was watching him in real time and assigning quests. Glancing at his phone, he wondered whether he should copy that flame magic video for practice. Playfully, he thought that since the traits were random, he couldn't expect anything amazing. But before he could think further, skill copy activated on its own. It copied Fireball, grade E, a flame orb that could be thrown within a 20-meter radius. Mana requirement, 10, mana cost, 70. Along with the skill came the unique trait Ignition, grade F, which applied a grade F burn effect for 60 seconds to any target hit by flame-type skills. Juyeon couldn't help but wonder if someone really was behind the quest window. The next day, he arrived at the entrance of the Daegwalyong sheep farm in the Cape. He stood at what felt like the boundary between reality and the field. He calmed himself, reminding himself that he had spent all his money on gear. Even if it was cost-effective, it was still decent enough. Regaining his confidence, he shouted a proud farewell to his days as a healer for hire and welcomed himself to the hunting field. A few days later, people on social media were buzzing about a psycho who was massacring mobs with fireballs at the sheep farm. Some guilds had even tried to recruit this fire psycho, but he turned them down, leading many to wonder if it was because he didn't like the nickname. Juyeon, however, remembered the 3 no-name guys who had asked him to join their guild. That wasn't why he declined. He reminded himself that he had once rejected an offer from an S-rank beauty. He then questioned if he really laughed while hunting, which might have been why people were calling him a psycho. Checking the video, he saw a monster rushing at him while he repeatedly threw fireballs. He remembered smiling and even laughing out loud as he eliminated them. Watching himself, he was speechless and slightly guilty at how excited he'd gotten over how easily the mobs were dying. Having completed the tutorial quest to kill 20 monsters, he received 200 SP and unlocked skill copy EX grade and sub-trait level 2, efficacy level 1, which reduced the mana cost of copied skills by 10%. He also gained 800 SP. Though he was running out of mana, the reduction in mana cost kept him going. Then, he noticed a boss raid post in the beginner user group. The comments were asking if the Fire Psycho was the one who had done the Obsidian Bear raid, an event where only users level 15 or below were eligible for rewards. People were talking about the insane damage, recalling the bear going berserk. The memory hit him suddenly. He immediately stood up and then dropped to his knees in front of his computer, worshipping the #1 ranked user, Al, while replaying one of Al's past videos. A few days earlier, in the field, the Obsidian Bear had appeared, throwing users into a panic as they faced the massive monster. At that moment, the system presented Juyeon with a new tutorial quest: defeat a field boss monster with a reward of 500 SP. Realizing the system wanted him to kill a boss, he focused. The bear charged at the users, but before it could reach them, Juyeon launched a barrage of fireballs in its direction. The bear stumbled back under the relentless assault, and the other users turned to see who was responsible. They saw Juyeon calmly playing with a fireball between his fingers, completely unfazed by the stares. He continued to ignore the crowd, visibly excited as the bear roared in pain and fury. Eventually, he stopped casting, and the bear was no longer visible through the flames. When the smoke cleared, everyone was shocked to see the bear lying motionless on the ground. A user asked if it was really over. Was it really that easy? But just then, the bear stirred and transformed into its berserker phase. It roared, activating Obsidian Bear's Roar, grade A. The roar reduced the stats of everyone in the area, all attributes by 3 and strength, agility, and vitality by 2. The users were stunned, trembling in fear. They couldn't even lift their swords. The team leader tried to rally them, but before he could, the bear furiously swung its claw. Fortunately, the tank managed to block the strike with his sword. Meanwhile, Juyeon stood to the side, staring at a new additional tutorial quest. Copy a boss monster's special skill, with rewards including 200 SP and sub-trait level 3 activation. The system explained the skill. Obsidian Bear's Roar, grade A, triggered when HP dropped below 50%. It reduced all lifeform stats by 3 within a 30-meter radius. If the affected stats were lower than the caster's, they'd be further reduced by 2. Additionally, for every 10 lifeforms exposed to the roar, the caster's stats increased by 3, no mana cost. Juyeon was astonished by its strength. He activated skill copy and successfully copied the roar. The system also applied Oblivion, grade F, a trait that removed the berserker trigger and instead added another +3 to all stats per 10 lifeforms exposed to the roar. He couldn't believe he could use such a skill without any conditions, and without any mana cost. It was completely broken. But he reminded himself that copied skills vanished at midnight, so if he didn't use it now, he'd be a fool. He immediately activated Obsidian Bear's Roar and unleashed it. However, the users around Juyeon were affected as well, and all of their stats were further reduced by 3. It shocked everyone. Trembling, drained, and unable to move. They mistakenly thought the obsidian bear had roared again, not realizing it was actually Juyon. Meanwhile, his strength, agility, vitality, and magic power continued to rise, fueled by their suffering. He walked calmly toward the bear, while the users behind him remained unable to stand. He raised a finger and summoned a fireball. Without hesitation, he hurled it at the bear. The creature let out a deafening scream as it burned to death, leaving everyone stunned in absolute shock. With that, Juyon defeated the bear, completing both the additional tutorial quest and the main tutorial quest. He leveled up twice and received 700 SP along with the activation of Skill Copy EX, grade subtrait level 3. Yet he simply stood still, a huge smile spreading across his face, thinking how exhilarating it all was. The bear collapsed, dead. Juyon was startled when the users behind him suddenly began cheering. They shouted that it was incredible. Embarrassed, he quickly pulled up his hood to cover his face. Somehow, the cheering users looked familiar to him, leaving him wondering what that strange feeling was. Just then, the system announced that it was beginning the process of absorbing the obsidian bear's soul. All users present received a permanent +1 stat boost across the board. Juyon was amazed. He could feel the change and asked if this was the legendary boss monster soul he had only heard about. A field boss's level was typically at least 10 levels higher than the field it appeared in. If players tried to overcome that gap by bringing in high-level users beyond the field's level limit, the contribution system would prevent them from gaining anything. The boss's body would vanish, and no items would drop. It was a cruel system designed to ensure fairness, but also high risk. Despite the danger, users still hunted field bosses for one ultimate reason: item drops. Field boss corpses yielded valuable materials and could drop gear worth hundreds or even thousands in currency. Their bodies were, in essence, made of gold, but Juyon wasn't interested in that. He was just thrilled that his strength stat had finally reached 2. The soul absorption bonus allowed all raid participants to permanently boost their stats, and for him, that was worth more than any drop. Suddenly, the other users approached him, praising the raid's success and congratulating him for his role. They admitted he was the MVP of the battle, alongside the raid leader. But then one of them jokingly shouted that it was to be expected from a psychopath, startling Juyon. The raid leader stepped forward, explaining that they had prepared for injuries once the boss went berserk, but Juyon's overwhelming damage output had allowed them to get through safely. Everyone had worked hard, but his contribution stood out. The leader then opened his item status window. It displayed the pitch-black dragon gauntlets, grade F, with E-grade defense. They increased strength by 3, and if health dropped below 30%, they activated berserk grade E, increasing all stats by 2 for 24 hours. The leader commented that the gauntlets were excellent overall, though the activation condition was a bit risky. Juyon agreed. Being under 30% health meant walking a razor's edge. The leader then explained that the boss item and materials would be distributed through the player association and asked if anyone had objections. But before anyone could answer, a voice interrupted. A man stepped forward with 2 enormous bodyguards and offered to buy the boss item for 90% of its appraised value, in cash. The leader asked who they were. One of the users whispered that those men were known as boss item hunters. They showed up like ghosts whenever a field boss dropped loot, always ready to buy everything up. Apparently, they snatched up all the valuable items these days. Still, the leader thought to himself that if they were offering cash up front, it might actually be a sweet deal. Juyon considered that there were all sorts of strange people in the world and wondered what the suited man and his bodyguards were really after. When the man snapped his fingers, one of the bodyguards opened a suitcase overflowing with cash. The man stated that payment could be made immediately. Juyon stared at the suitcase, stunned, his mouth hanging open at the sight of the shining stacks of money. In that instant, his thoughts shifted. Whatever those men were up to didn't matter anymore. Cash up front was unbeatable, and now all he needed to do was hunt like crazy. Only a few days later, though, he found himself back at square one, sitting outside a dungeon, selling healing services, and feeling utterly defeated. He questioned the value of having earned nearly 10 million won when the armor he needed cost 63 million. The price left him in disbelief. The saleslady, seeing his shock, informed him they had only 2 sets left in stock. In a panic, he turned and ran off, shouting over his shoulder that he would definitely come back. Juyon thought that if only he still had access to the obsidian bear's roar with the oblivion trait applied, he could focus solely on hunting. Fortunately, thanks to the tutorial reward, he could now copy boss monster skills. Still, requiring his health to fall below half just to activate the roar made it impractical. At least he had some fun with it in another field before it disappeared. With no customers around, he decided it was a good time to spend his saved stat points and SP. Opening his status window, he saw he was level 8, with weak base stats and 7 unallocated points. He reflected that while a swordsman fit the fantasy archetype, this world didn't allow for do-overs. With no other choice, he assigned all 7 points to magic power, increasing it from 41 to 48. Next, he turned his attention to his SP and used 500 to upgrade his skill copy subtrait to level 2. As a result, his daily copy uses would increase from 1 to 2 at midnight. Before he could fully enjoy the improvement, a system panel appeared with a new tutorial quest. The objective was to complete various types of quests, highlighting that daily quests were one of the key ways for skill masters to gain SP. The reward included 300 SP and the activation of unique trait subtrait level 3. The system explained that daily quest level 1 granted 1 F rank or higher quest every midnight. His current task was to use skill copy twice, which would yield 80 SP. He wondered what would happen if he copied the same skill twice. Choosing Healing Light, he activated his copy and immediately gained the conservation unique trait, grade F, which reduced mana usage by 5%. Curious if the unique trait would change on a second copy, or if he would simply receive another version of the same skill, he decided to test it. When the system told him the skill was already copied, it also asked if he wanted to create it as a new skill. Without hesitation, he agreed, and was stunned to receive an exceptionally rare trait. Excited, he wrote on his board an offer for a 5% experience buff lasting 5 hours, priced at 1,000,001. Though it caught users' attention, no one approached at first. Taking a deep breath, he loudly promoted the offer, claiming that such an opportunity was limited and wouldn't come again soon. The users began to move closer, intrigued. Some questioned whether experience buffs even existed, as they had never heard of them before. One skeptical user speculated that he might just take the money and disappear. Juyeon held his calm, smiling outwardly despite his inner impatience. He mentally urged them to rush him like a pack of wild dogs and help him make 60 million won. Just then, someone stepped closer and stopped in front of him. Juyeon looked up, confused. A woman pulled down his hood, greeting him warmly. She reminded him it had been a while and asked if he was still uninterested in hunting with them. Juyeon instinctively covered his face as the aura of the beautiful woman hit him, but he managed to compose himself enough to explain that, as she could see, he was currently open for business. She smiled brightly and, with a knowing tone, guessed that he hadn't yet gotten his first customer. She then casually stated that she and her brother would take the offer. Juyeon gasped in disbelief but quickly collected himself, respectfully welcoming them and guiding them to the right position. The man, slightly unsettled, felt a sense of déjà vu and wondered aloud if it was just his imagination. Juyeon began casting Healing Light on both of them. As promised, it increased their combat experience by 5% for 5 hours. After the effect was applied, the woman paid him and handed him her user card, which identified her as an S-rank illusionist known as Flames of the Apocalypse. Her name, Kim Hyeji, and contact number were also listed. She encouraged him to call her later, explaining that their team was in real need of a skilled healer. As she walked away with her brother, she told nearby users that Juyeon's buff was real, and personally guaranteed the 5-hour duration and 5% experience increase. Her confident endorsement immediately drew attention, and users began rushing toward Juyeon, eager to receive the buff. He felt deeply grateful for Hyeji's support, and we can see it clearly on his face. With renewed energy, he urged the crowd to form a line, promising he would cast the buff on each of them as soon as his mana recovered. Meanwhile, Hyeji and her brother walked toward the field. Her brother remarked that although she once called him a complete pushover for helping people, she was now doing the same, approaching a newbie player with no visible gear. She reminded him of what she had already said before. With her handling burst damage and him being reliable as a tank, their offense and defense were already solid. The only missing piece was a healer. She added that Juyeon's rare experience buff hinted at the possibility of a highly useful unique trait. Her brother pointed out that Juyeon was still just a beginner, but she argued that this made it even more meaningful. They needed to act before anyone else realized his potential. As they entered the field, monster lizards charged at them. Before her brother could step forward to tank, Hyeji unleashed her firestorm, instantly incinerating the monsters in front of them. Her brother sighed in relief, and she responded with a wink, noting that no one could predict whether a player like Juyeon might someday become an incredible ranker. The next day, outside the user shop, Juyeon hummed happily. He was now wearing his dream set, Recta's leather armor, grade S, which increased all his stats by 2 and was considered top-tier gear. Shouting with joy, he celebrated the reward of all his hard work. Yet, he also wondered whether passive income wasn't actually better than earned income. Opening his status window and checking the system, he saw that passive income level 2 now granted between 50 and 200 SP daily at midnight. Screaming in excitement, he declared that this was exactly what he needed. He felt relieved knowing that SP would accumulate even if he stood still. Still, he reminded himself that trait bestowal level 2 required 2,000 SP, daily quest level 2 needed 3,000, and skill copy level 3 cost 4,000, totaling 9,800 SP. Doing the math, if he earned the maximum 200 SP per day, it would take 49 days to reach his goals. He was speechless at how steep the cost was, but decided not to let it weigh him down. As nearby people stared at him talking to himself, he glared back and refocused. He needed to raise his stats smoothly and told himself that a field boss run was the next step. Pulling up his hood, aware that his identity as a healer was becoming known, he wondered whether it was time to resume playing the role of a hidden master. Soon after, he arrived at a new field, only to find the ground thick with mud. Cursing loudly, he lamented how the dirty terrain was ruining his expensive new armor. He questioned why this particular field had to be situated inside a mudflat. Eventually, he reached the entrance to the F-rank field known as Garorim Bay. Judging from the conditions, he concluded that melee DPS and tanks would be nearly useless here. He suspected this location was popular among newly awakened users, remembering how the sheep ranch had been much cleaner and more pleasant. He thought that if field-level restrictions didn't exist, he wouldn't have to struggle this hard just to collect boss souls. Juyeon recalled a community post that lectured newbies on the most important rule when participating in a field boss raid, a rule that applied to all raids. It warned that field bosses were especially dangerous and carried a high risk of death. Therefore, the #1 rule was to never apply to a random recruitment post expecting an easy ride. Despite the clear warning, he had ignored it, reasoning that things had gone fine during the Pitch Black Bear raid, so this one should be manageable too. However, just moments later, he regretted it. Watching users flirt with each other on the side, he bit his lip in jealousy. He wondered whether he had come to join a raid party or to watch a group date. A man then approached him, seemingly mistaking him for a woman, but quickly realized otherwise. Juyeon grew frustrated at the man's disappointed reaction. He had simply reversed his name for his nickname without much thought, but now people assumed he was a girl. Looking to the side, he noticed that he must have unintentionally taken one of the female spots in what appeared to be a 5 versus 5 matchmaking raid. Seeing another man silently sulking nearby, Juyeon felt like shouting at the group that they should have checked more carefully before recruiting. The raid leader then announced that the briefing would begin, since everyone had arrived. Juyeon sarcastically noted to himself that it wasn't going to end as just a group date after all. The leader went on to say that although some might already be familiar with the strategy, he would explain it again just in case. He explained that the Garorim Bay boss, the mudflat crab, increased its speed every time it was hit with a debuff. Therefore, no one should apply any debuffs, not even self-inflicted ones like bleeding. The goal was to kill it without causing wounds as much as possible. He added that debuffs raised the crab's stats, and if too many stacked, the boss would trigger a special skill. The leader, sounding overly confident, claimed that he had defeated the mudflat crab 8 times already, and that there was nothing to worry about. The woman next to him, seemingly impressed, flirtatiously expressed her trust in him. Juyeon began to wonder if the supposed special skill was actually the stat gain from debuffs itself. He suspected that in this crab's case, debuff might as well be synonymous with buff. Smiling to himself, he guessed the encounter might be more rewarding than it seemed. Moments later, the leader moved swiftly to kill a monster. However, turns out the monsters were only clam-sized, which left Juyeon stunned. He watched in disbelief as the others enthusiastically crushed them, acting as if they were facing lethal threats. He couldn't believe they were posturing so proudly while hunting monsters that looked like ingredients for clam noodle soup. The leader then proudly declared that, as a seasoned veteran, he would protect everyone. The users cheered for him, but before long, a long, segmented monster burst from the ground. Without hesitation, the same confident leader who had positioned himself at the front sprinted backward. Juyeon felt the urge to ask where he was going, especially after just declaring he would shield them. The leader then shouted that the mudflat crab would only appear once a certain number of monster corpses had piled up, so they needed to kill all the trash mobs too. The users coordinated quickly, aiming their arrows and unleashing them in unison, successfully killing the monsters before they could get close. Juyeon was impressed. The users really were executing their skills like professionals, though he reminded himself that being flashy in an F-rank field wasn't anything to brag about. Still, he wondered when the main event would finally arrive. Suddenly, the ground split open as a massive, sharp mouth lunged out of the earth, devouring the long monster corpses from earlier. The entire field began to tremble violently. The leader announced that the boss was coming and that the raid would begin immediately. He urged everyone to focus and gather information. The mudflat crab finally emerged. The leader explained that the crab only moved left and right, so they should always keep it directly in front of them and only move forwards and backwards. Juyeon stared at the towering crab in awe. The system then presented its data. Change resistance, grade A. The crab could resist all stat-altering effects from buffs and debuffs. Each buff or debuff stacked would increase its stats by 1. If 5 or more buffs or debuffs were active, all of its stats would gain an additional 5 points. Juyeon grinned wide as he read the system's analysis. From his perspective, he had hit yet another jackpot. The crab crawled sideways, causing the users to retreat in a rush. But then, without warning, it changed direction at high speed and began to pursue them. While his party was busy engaging the boss, Juyeon was deep in thought. He recalled the skill description and deduced that, since no conditions or duration were listed, the crab's stat-boosting ability must be a passive skill. The more buffs or debuffs applied, the stronger it became, and that possibility excited him. However, his excitement quickly deflated when the party leader issued an order for everyone to use only physical attacks. Juyeon stared at him, questioning why the main tank was making strategic calls. He then remembered the earlier explanation about how debuffs increased the crab's stats. It dawned on him that even continuous physical attacks could cause bleeding, which was itself a debuff. As the users loosed another synchronized volley of arrows, he realized the strategy. The tanks would draw aggro while ranged attackers slowly chipped away at the crab. That was likely why the leader had recruited so many ranged DPS members. But Juyeon knew it was too slow. He wondered how they were supposed to defeat a monster of that scale without inflicting any wounds. The party leader then stepped forward with dramatic flair, proudly declaring that it was his time to act. Juyeon simply wondered if the man should have stepped up sooner. The leader turned to Hyoju, asking her to cast a buff, which she happily did, pouring her heart into the spell. Watching the two, Juyeon couldn't help but think their role-playing was cringeworthy, but decided to let them carry on. He had already figured out the real solution. The crab needed to be taken down with one decisive burst of power. Then he sensed a powerful magical energy near him. Opening his eyes, he saw a complex magic circle forming beneath the leader's feet. It shocked and confused him. The system displayed information about the skill. Radiant Power, Grade SS. It applied 4 buffs with an additional 1 per 50 mana at the cost of 1000 mana. If the user possessed an S rank or higher buff type unique trait, the duration was doubled. If the caster's mana exceeded 150, the skill would apply only A rank or higher buffs. And when used on oneself, the duration doubled again, and the effects increased by 50%. Juyeon stared at the leader and Hyoju, stunned that an SS rank buff skill was being used in a place like this. A memory came to him from a few days earlier. While buying his dream armor at the user shop, the saleslady had asked if he recorded videos or broadcasts. Flustered, he had shaken his head quickly, nervous that she might recognize him. But she had simply mentioned that field footage uploads were becoming popular, especially among users roaming the field. She explained that they had just the item for someone like him, a recorder with cutting-edge OIS anti-shake functionality that allowed for clear, vivid battle scenes. She had added, a bit too cheerfully, that if he ever found himself in a massive, overwhelming field battle, he could record his final moments in HD, something for future relatives and acquaintances to remember him by. He had been left speechless and even asked her to repeat what she just said. Now, adjusting the glasses recorder he'd bought that day, he couldn't believe that what he'd brought just to capture boss skills was actually turning out to be useful. He understood now that combining the crab's change resistance, which increased stats with each applied buff or debuff with Radiant Power, a multi-buff skill, could be devastating in the right hands. He glanced over at Hyoju, who stood looking cheerful, and wondered how a powerful buffer like her had ended up in such a low-rank field. The leader then dramatically unsheathed his sword and announced that he would draw the crab's aggro. Juyeon watched silently. When the leader finally called out for everyone to focus their attacks, Juyeon stepped forward and launched a powerful fireball at the crab, hitting it squarely. Though apologetic for interrupting the leader mid-pose, he knew he couldn't let the moment slip. Once he confirmed that the fireball had hit, he clenched his fist and activated his trump card. Explosion. The skill detonated embers within a 20-meter radius, causing the crab to burn severely from the inside out. A savory aroma began to fill the air, catching the attention of the users. Some asked aloud what it was, remarking that the smell made them crave rice mixed into a crab shell, topped with leg meat, ready for a big bite. They didn't seem to realize they were describing the field boss itself, now perfectly cooked and transformed into a golden-orange delicacy. The raid leader stood frozen in fear, sweating and speechless. Still unable to relinquish his ego, he shouted for everyone to fall back, warning them that the crab might activate a desperation phase. Rushing to the crab's body, he began slashing it repeatedly, until item drops spilled from its remains. The system then displayed a notification to all users. The soul of the field boss, Mudflat Crab, Grade D, had been absorbed. As a result, their mana increased by 1. The leader turned to the others with a smug expression, while Hyoju clapped and praised him for his amazing performance. The other users, however, looked on in stunned silence, clearly embarrassed on his behalf. Juyeon, watching all this unfold, found the scene painfully pathetic. Suddenly, the system interface appeared before him, notifying him that change resistance, Grade A, had been registered to his boss skill list. He was elated. He had secured exactly what he wanted. Now all that remained was to test the synergy between Radiant Power and change resistance. Eager to leave, he told the party that they should wrap up and head home. But when he turned to them, he was met with puzzled stares. They asked if their assumptions were correct, that his unique trait must be at least A or S rank, and praised him for his incredible hard carry. They also thanked him for making it so easy to claim the soul reward, and to his surprise, one of the women asked if she could get his number. He responded awkwardly, clearly flustered. Before things went further, the leader yelled at the group, telling them they were getting too excited and reminding them to return for the item distribution. He glanced at Hyoju, hoping she would at least remain loyal to his side, but to his dismay, she suggested that since Juyeon was the one who had carried the raid, he should receive the biggest share of the loot. The leader stared at her in disbelief. Even she had been impressed by Juyeon. The other users quickly agreed with Hyoju, saying they were fine with giving everything to Juyeon. Since none of them had contributed much, they felt he had earned it. They reasoned that if Juyeon received the reward, they could consider their own share settled. Unbeknownst to any of them, a man in a black suit stood watching from a short distance away. Silently observing the raid group and the defeated leader beside Hyoju, the mysterious man reported the entire incident to his superior. He also confirmed that no boss items had dropped in the Gororim Bay field boss raid and decided to relocate to the next raid site. Meanwhile, Hyoju is blankly looking at the sky with an unreadable expression. Days later, Juyeon found himself in the field again, roasting a boar into steak using his fireball. After completing his daily quest, he received 300 SP and collapsed onto the grass, exhausted. He questioned how long it would take to get Sample to level 3, recalling that the combination of Change Resistance Grade A and Radiant Power Grade SS produced incredible buffs. The problem was, with Sample only at level 2, he lacked enough skill copies to make use of those boosts. His stats kept increasing, but he still had very few skills he could actually use. Staring at the steep cost, 4,000 SP, he concluded that leveling Sample to 3 was the only viable solution. Frustrated, he waved his arms and legs like a child, shouting that he needed SP. He grumbled that earning SP from daily quests was painfully slow. It just trickled in. He then went quiet, deep in thought, and jokingly wondered if some administrator might give him a decent quest. But no answer came, and he scoffed at himself for even entertaining the idea. Surely something like that would never happen. Then, to his shock, a swarm of panels appeared in front of him. He sat up stunned and wondered if this was the answer to his request. The system displayed a new tutorial quest, a main quest with a reward of 4,000 SP. He tried to read more, but before he could finish processing it, a deafening noise echoed through the air. Something massive began to materialize above him, visible to others in the city as well. Everyone looked up in stunned silence as a colossal pillar formed in the sky. The system identified it as F-Rank Special Field, Sky Island Canal, with an entry level of 1 to 39. The system confirmed that it was tied to his main quest, which required him to clear the special field. The rewards were significant: 10,000 SP, 1 sub-trait upgrade selection ticket, and a random skill master reward box. It also issued a warning: Sky Island Canal was strictly monster territory. As more special fields emerged, the conversion of Earth into a field world would accelerate. The system stressed the urgency of the mission. Clearing the special field was vital for the survival of Earth and humanity. Just a day later, a news reporter informed the public that a massive F-class special field named Sky Island Canal had appeared over Seoul and Gyeonggi province. The reporter added that the visible pillars of light were presumed to be portals leading to the island, and that the user association was currently operating under emergency protocols. Due to the island's sudden emergence, flights at both Incheon and Gimpo airports had been indefinitely suspended. Citizens residing within the field's influence zone were also beginning to report issues with insufficient sunlight. The broadcast then featured an interview with a man named Kim First, a C-class user, who stated that the field's entry level was set between levels 1 and 39. He voiced the opinion that the user association should expedite the portal access authorization process. 3 days later, the reporter returned with breaking news. Special fields had begun to appear simultaneously in various locations around the world. In one shocking development, a landmass half the size of South Korea had attached itself next to Tokyo overnight. Juyeon watched the news unfold on social media. Nearby, he overheard one man telling his friend that Japan's special field wasn't a sky island, so at least they didn't have to worry about losing sunlight. Others were murmuring about a B-class special field and level 70 monsters crossing over into Tokyo. He saw videos spreading panic, with some declaring it the beginning of the end of humanity. An unprecedented evacuation order had just been issued for Tokyo. Putting his phone back into his pocket, Juyeon waited for the traffic light to change. When it turned green, he crossed carefully. On the other side of the street, he passed a man shouting that the situation in other countries proved that special fields were entirely disadvantageous. The man added that their own user association was receiving active support from the government to conduct raids quickly. After enough information was gathered, they intended to devise strategies to clear Sky Island Canal, possibly by offering a bounty. Juyeon simply walked past, stopping in front of the user shop with a sigh, thinking that the world had turned into a complete mess. He waited there, staring at the quest panels, wondering if he could somehow receive an SP advance. He checked his upcoming quests and their respective rewards, calculating precisely how much SP he would have. He confirmed that it would be just enough to raise all of his detailed traits by 1 level. Swearing to himself, he promised that he absolutely had to clear the special field. Soon after, the sales lady arrived and thanked him for waiting. She handed over the item he had ordered. Upon opening it, he was amazed. The purchase, worth 70 million won, included a cursed mana ring, grade E, which increased his mana by 100 but decreased his strength by 1, and a cursed mana bracelet, grade E, which also increased his mana by 100 while decreasing his agility by 1. When worn together as a set, they added 200 mana in total, but decreased his stamina by 2. The saleslady asked if she was correct in assuming he had been looking for those specific items. He confirmed it, accepting them with satisfaction. With the set bonus, his total mana would now reach 1,510. Even though some of his stats would decrease temporarily, he considered a full focus on magic to be the safer path for now. Curious, he asked how much it would cost to buy armor as well. The saleslady explained that a D to C class armor set would cost approximately 400 million won. She politely asked if he would like to purchase it too. Juyeon nodded at first, but then awkwardly replied that he would just take the accessories for now. Embarrassed, he quickly walked away while covering his face, internally groaning at how expensive it was to wear a whole house just to go fight. Still, the saleslady respectfully escorted him out and thanked him sincerely for his patronage. The next day, Juyeon arrived at the entrance to the special field. Instead of upgrading gear, he had spent his remaining money on a body cam, deciding that glasses were too cumbersome. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been ripped off and wondered if he should have just bought it from the beginning. Before entering the special field, he pulled out his phone to check community reviews. Scrolling through the forums, he read several alarming comments. One mentioned that the attack power of the monsters inside was insane compared to the designated field level. A high-level user he knew had been completely wiped out and forced to retreat. One user, named Out of the Bed is Dangerous, a C-class user, warned melee users to stay away. The comment explained that the field was called Sky Island for a reason. Half the monsters were airborne. Even ranged attackers were struggling, as tanks couldn't properly aggro the flying enemies. Another comment noted that perhaps because the island floated so high in the sky, the oxygen density was lower, leaving users winded from just a little running. Reading all this, Juyeon considered that based on reactions, this didn't feel like an F-class field at all, more like a D-class. Still, he dismissed the comments, reasoning that people who failed and ran away often exaggerated. He told himself not to be swayed by their negativity. He shouldn't have read the comments in the first place. Upon entering the portal, he was startled to find himself suddenly falling, something he figured he probably deserved for ignoring the warnings. Fortunately, he landed safely on soft grass, surrounded by cute slimes. The environment amazed him. The sky was clear, the setting vibrant, and the slimes didn't attack immediately. It felt peaceful, and for a moment he considered sitting down to enjoy a packed lunch. Just as he started thinking the place wasn't so bad, a scream shattered the calm. He looked up and saw a shadow blocking the sun. High above, an enormous eagle was carrying a man in its talons. The man was crying and begging for help, but the eagle soon let go. Juyeon watched in horror as the man fell to his death. More eagles circled overhead. Juyeon instinctively prepared himself, casting a fireball immediately. Knowing he only had fireballs to rely on, he glared at the sky and mentally swore that if they came for him, he'd roast every last one of them. But then the eagles flew past him. Confused, he turned to see where they were going and spotted Hyeji and her brother under attack. The eagles launched themselves toward them, stabbing at the brother's shield with sharp claws. However, the shield held strong, bouncing the birds back, though the eagles refused to retreat. Hyeji raised her staff, summoned her flame, and unleashed Firestorm, engulfing the enemies in intense magical fire. Juyeon was stunned by her power. He had expected her to be strong, but not to that extent. Her magic damage was formidable. After the fight, Hyeji stretched her arms, casually commenting to her brother that it hadn't been as difficult as she thought. Her brother agreed, but reminded her not to let her guard down and risk getting hurt like last time. At the same time, Juyeon was considering whether he should copy Hyeji's skill as well. So far, he'd only copied Fireball. As he pondered this, one of the slimes quietly approached from behind and began to mount his leg. Hyeji, meanwhile, brought up the incident again, telling her brother that if they'd had a healer back then, she wouldn't have gotten injured so badly. The more she thought about it, the more she regretted not recruiting Juyeon when they had the chance. She admitted that hunting would be much easier if he were with them now. Just then, her attention was caught by Juyeon's panicked voice. He was stuttering and pleading with the slime to get off his leg. He abruptly stopped when he noticed Hyeji and her brother watching him struggle as he shook the slime off. Hyeji remarked that it was a pleasant surprise to see him there and noted that he seemed a little busy. Juyeon gave an awkward laugh and silently cursed himself in embarrassment. The slime cried out as the man pried it off Juyeon's leg. Juyeon too had tears in his eyes, not for the slime but for his expensive shoes and the money he had sacrificed for them. He thanked the man for his help while quietly mourning the damage. The man tossed the slime aside and then recognized Juyeon as the healer he had previously met in the park. Glancing back at Hyeji, he assumed she wouldn't go out of her way to add Juyeon to their party. But then he saw her smiling brightly. So brightly that he was certain she absolutely would. Hyeji approached Juyeon and casually remarked that they kept running into each other. Without hesitation, she latched onto his arm and cheerfully said it felt like fate was nudging them to team up. Juyeon, however, remained silent. He had come to hunt solo that day. Attempting to maintain some distance, he asked her if she could let go of his arm. Surprised by the request, Hyeji didn't let go. Instead, she began swinging his arm playfully up and down, assuring him that she would carry him through the hunt today. Juyeon sighed, realizing he had no choice. He decided that if this was happening, he should at least copy Light of Healing as his final skill. He agreed to party up but explained that he needed to step away briefly, offering the excuse that he needed to find a restroom. His words confused the siblings, who asked where he expected to find a restroom in the middle of nowhere. Juyeon realized the awkwardness of the situation. Since he needed to watch a UserTube video to copy the skill, he couldn't exactly explain the truth. Instead, he doubled down, saying it was a very urgent bathroom situation. As he walked off, he silently admitted that he was already starting off by completely ruining his image. Before long, a group of eagles swooped in, clutching a massive rock. They flew directly toward the group, dropping the rock overhead. Fortunately, Hyeji's brother, being a strong tank, was able to block the impact with his shield. Juyeon noted that the eagles seemed to be using strategy now, likely because they knew they would be roasted if they got too close. He mused that they were smarter than he'd expected. But before he could reflect further, a pack of double-horned rhinos charged at them. As the double-horned rhino approached, Hyeji leapt in front of him. She gave him a quick wink before springing into action. She summoned a firewall to block the monster's approach, followed by fire rain to incinerate the eagles above, and fire spear to impale the double-horned rhino on the ground. All three spells were cast simultaneously, eradicating every enemy in their vicinity with ease. Once the battle was over, she cheerfully informed the others that the area was clear. Her brother, however, reminded her that he had told her not to charge in recklessly. She brushed off the warning, simply replying that since they had dealt with the enemies, everything was fine. Juyeon stood in silence, realizing that there was no room left for him to shine here. He complimented her performance, asking if S-Class users usually had that many skills. He then wondered aloud how many skills an EX-Class user would have if even S-Class could do so much. Hyeji confirmed that most S-Class users indeed possessed a wide arsenal of skills, explaining that the majority were learned by purchasing skill books. That insight hit him. This was all about money. They continued deeper into the field and eventually reached the ocean. There they encountered a two-mouthed crocodile monster. The siblings coordinated smoothly to block its attacks while Juyeon remained behind, quietly raising his hand. He cast a fireball at the creature, and to the siblings' astonishment, it wasn't the usual basketball-sized sphere. His fireball was the size of an entire court, engulfing the crocodile in flames and instantly searing it. Juyeon stood in shock, watching his fireball explode with far greater intensity than expected. He hadn't anticipated such a massive display of power. Hyeji, equally surprised, asked if his magic power was actually higher than hers, and questioned whether he was truly a healer. He responded nonchalantly, saying it was normal, though internally he realized that one of his random unique traits must have activated, significantly amplifying the spell's size. Unfortunately, he also noticed that the increased mana consumption outweighed the damage boost, making the cure worse than the disease. Still, he justified himself by thinking that even though healers were treated like nobles in most raid parties, having strong defensive skills was essential for leveling efficiently. Bro really can't make up a lie. Hyeji pressed further, demanding to know how much mana he had. He simply replied that it was a decent amount, careful not to reveal the truth, which was that he still had 1,408 mana remaining. He reminded himself that while there was no downside to having high mana, he was supposed to be the party's healer, not a mage, and would need to be cautious moving forward. Then he noticed Hyeji's brother was clearly not buying the lie. Juyeon also became aware of the other users nearby and realized that he needed to be much more discreet with his skill usage. A short while later, other users were idly killing the harmless-looking slimes in the area. One of them groaned, asking how much longer they had to keep doing such monotonous tasks. Another advised him not to let his guard down and to keep watch for airborne monsters. The first man responded sarcastically, claiming he was keeping an eye out, though clearly unimpressed. He grumbled that coming all the way to Sky Island just to chip away at weaklings was an insult to his pride. A nearby woman jokingly suggested he go fight one of the big ones and die like the others had. Suddenly, the system issued a field-wide notification. The number of deceased lifeforms on Sky Island had met the conditions for summoning the boss. The men, seemingly unfazed, assumed it would be an easy fight and planned to finish quickly so they could leave. Moments later, another message appeared. The Lord of Sky Island awakens. A figure materialized in the sky, and the users squinted upward, trying to identify it. At first it seemed like there were multiple figures, but they quickly realized it was only one. An angelic-looking man with massive wings. Golden chains began to unravel around him as the boss activated a skill. Sword of the Heavens, Grade SS. The system explained the skill's terrifying effects. One sword would be summoned for every lifeform that had died on Sky Island. Each sword increased the total damage by 1%. If the caster possessed the unique trait Sky Island, the number of summoned swords would double. Additionally, if the Sky Island trait was active, all swords would gain the condemnation effect, Grade E. Despite its power, the skill required only 60 mana and did not drain additional resources. Juyeon froze, stunned by the overwhelming nature of the skill. Quickly regaining focus, he shouted to warn the others that the attack was area-wide. The sky darkened as the swords rained down. Hyeji's brother managed to raise his shield just in time, bracing himself to protect them from certain death. The others, however, were not as fortunate. Each one was pierced by swords in different parts of their bodies, unable to dodge or defend in time. After the onslaught, Hyeji's brother could no longer stand. Hyeji knelt beside him, clearly alarmed. He explained that blocking the swords had inflicted a debilitating debuff. His health, attack, defense, and all stats had been significantly reduced. Juyeon stepped in and used Light of Healing on him, restoring some of his strength. He informed them that the debuff appeared to last about 10 minutes. Peeking back toward the airborne boss, he confirmed the identity. It was Canal, level 57, and its unique trait was Sky Island Grade A. It also had Sword of the Heavens, Grade S, Medium Speed Enhancement, Grade A, and Descent, Grade A. The boss's stats were exceptionally high. Juyeon was amazed by what he saw, but then turned to the group and asked if they should consider retreating. At that moment, the system displayed a new subquest. Grade B. Eliminate Kainel, the invader of Earth, and destroy the special field. The reward for defeating this special field boss included 5,000 SP and one of Kainel's skills. The next day, Juyeon was deeply immersed in researching Kanal on social media. Almost all the user reports described failure. Kanal would release blades in every direction and then vanish, leaving many to comment that the field should be called Sky Graveyard, not Sky Island. He came across a new video posted to a free board and decided to watch it. The footage showed Kanal reappearing in the sky, raising his hand as one of his white wings slowly darkened to black. Once the transformation was complete, Kanal summoned a downpour. At first, the users panicked, fearing another sword barrage, but when the water hit them, they relaxed, only to realize too late that their weapons had become heavy and their stats were falling rapidly. The rain wasn't ordinary, it was a hidden debuff. Soon after, the slimes nearby began trembling. Dark energy began to leak from their bodies. The users sensed something was wrong. Then, without warning, the slimes' bodies cracked open and monstrous insects erupted from within, charging at the users and tearing them apart. Juyeon stared at the video in horror, unable to believe that Kanal not only possessed overwhelming attack skills, but also the ability to strengthen nearby monsters. He was relieved that his group had retreated when they did. If this were just a game, spare lives might have softened the impact, but this was reality. Beyond SP, he now understood he also needed to raise his physical stats. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden ringing of his phone. The loud sound startled him, and when he checked the screen, he saw Hyeji's name, though he couldn't recall when he'd saved her number. He answered, and Hyeji introduced herself, just to confirm it was him. She asked if he had returned to Sky Island since their last party play. He told her no, and explained that while he had planned to go back, he was still struggling to grasp the boss's patterns. He added that there were now reports of Sky Island monsters descending into Seoul, similar to what had happened in Japan. Hyeji responded that the time to act had come. She informed him that a large-scale Kanal raid team had been formed and asked if he would like to join them. The announcement stunned him. A few days later, users had gathered in the D-Class swamp field at Seoul Grand Park. Among them were notable A-Class and B-Class users. Footage of the event was already circulating on UserTube. Off to the side, two F-rank users whispered among themselves. One of them asked why such high-ranking players were in a D-Class field. His friend replied that the gathering was for a preliminary meeting of the Kanal raid team. The D-Class field was just a warm-up. The first man expressed jealousy, wondering what kind of user could qualify to participate in such an elite group. Juyeon stood nearby, trembling with a mix of anxiety and embarrassment. He questioned whether he even belonged there. He awkwardly looked down at his clothes, thinking it was at least a smart move to wear something different than what he had worn as a mage. Suddenly, a cheerful voice called out his name. When he turned, he saw Hyeji and her brother. Seeing someone familiar immediately put him at ease, and he hurried over to greet them. He quietly asked if it was really okay for an F-Class like him to be present when the minimum requirement was B-Class. He remembered that he had registered with the user association as an F-Class healer to hide his real identity. Hyeji simply pointed out that no F-Class healer used a C-Class healing skill. She also noted that debuff removal was essential for this raid, so the team was accepting participants without strict conditions. She then remarked that it was about time for the raid leader to arrive. Moments later, they heard footsteps approaching at a steady pace. The entire field fell silent as a man walked into view. The users stared in awe. Hyeji, grinning, introduced the newcomer as the raid leader of the Kanal Conquest team and the SS-class warrior of the Rank 1 Guild Daehan, Lee Haesung. Haesung addressed the group, stating that before beginning the briefing for the Kanal raid, it was important to assess the individual capabilities of the raid members. He suggested starting with a warm-up and then turned to lead the way into the field. Hyeji beamed and remarked that the instructions were clear and concise. She asked if they were ready to get some revenge for what happened last time. Juyeon was struck by how no one questioned Haesung's blunt and somewhat rude tone. For him, though, it didn't feel rude. It was undeniably cool. A crazy kind of cool. Soon after, inside the D-Class field, lizard monsters charged toward them. Haesung swung his massive sword with ease, cutting them down effortlessly. Juyeon stared in admiration, thinking again how cool the man was. But he snapped back to reality when he realized that wielding a sword with his stats would be suicidal. With such low base stats, he was surviving largely thanks to the elemental ring. The magic route was clearly the safer choice. Still, there was something oddly familiar about holding a sword, even though he had no memories of ever doing so. He refocused on his role, healing injured users as they fought. He reminded himself that close-quarters combat was too dangerous for now, and that ranged magic was his safest option, at least until he found a way to raise his physical stats. And yet, his inner warrior teased him, asking if he really believed that. As Haesung fought at the front lines, a strong surge of magical presence filled the air, yet it wasn't coming from Haesung. Juyeon felt it inside himself. His inner warrior urged him not to waste his abilities in hiding. As they continued practicing, he saw what he was looking for. The Bloodstained Battle, Grade SS. The description explained that the skill was activated by drinking in the blood of defeated monsters. It absorbed the target's stats temporarily, though the effect disappeared 5 minutes after combat ended. If the user possessed an S-class or higher combat type unique trait, additional stats would be absorbed after the blood of 10 monsters was taken. Furthermore, if the user's strength reached 50 or higher, their magic power would increase by 10% of their strength. Juyeon grinned. He had just discovered a ridiculously powerful skill that could instantly raise his physical stats. Just a few minutes later, the field was littered with the corpses of defeated lizard monsters. But then, something began to stir beneath the lake. Without warning, a massive creature erupted from the water, the field boss of Seoul Grand Park's marshland, the Poison Lizard King. At the sight of the boss, the users immediately moved into position, preparing for battle. But before they could even launch an attack, Hyesung activated two powerful skills. First was Bloodstained Battle, and then Limit Break, a grade S skill that increased power attack by 1 rank for 60 seconds and boosted all stats by 5 if the user possessed an S rank or higher combat type unique trait. It required 580 mana and a minimum of 20 magic power. The Lizard King charged straight toward him, but just as it approached, Hyesung stepped forward, planting 1 foot firmly, and delivered a decisive slash with his sword. The strike landed before the boss could react, instantly killing the Poison Lizard King. Thanks to the kill, every user in the party received a permanent increase of 1 to their health. Juyeon's system panel updated as well, showing that Jade Beauty, grade B, had been registered in his boss skill list. Hyeji's brother stood in disbelief, stunned by how quickly the field boss had been taken down. Hyeji, with a grin, reminded him that she had nearly finished it off the last time. Her brother replied with exaggerated sarcasm, prompting her to lightly strike him with her staff in irritation. Juyeon, watching their exchange, asked Hyeji if users still received rewards even if they didn't actively hunt. She explained that, under normal circumstances, non-contributors wouldn't get any rewards. However, since Juyeon had been dispelling debuffs throughout the raid, his participation was deemed valid by the system. It finally clicked for him. This was how healers leveled up. He concluded that it was possibly the easiest job ever. Meanwhile, Hyesung calmly sheathed his sword and approached the group. Regaining his composure, he announced that he would now deliver the final briefing and organize the team before reward distribution. He began outlining the strategy. Previously, mages had been grouped together to launch simultaneous attacks. However, there was still uncertainty about whether the strengthened monsters had higher resistance to magic or physical attacks. Going forward, they would divide and deploy based on each user's primary damage type, magic or physical. But as Hyesung spoke, Juyeon found himself drifting. His attention shifted to a system panel showing a new skill. Catalyst Grade B. The skill amplified effects on poisoned enemies. When poison stacked 3 or more times, it would evolve into lethal poison. It had a mana cost of 800 and required 40 magic power. Although the boss had been defeated before Juyeon had a chance to see its skills, he figured Catalyst could still be useful in the future. He smiled to himself, not because of the poison skill, but because of the skills he'd just obtained. Limit Break, Grade S, and Bloodstained Battle, Grade SS. It felt like Santa Claus had arrived early, handing out SS rank skills as if they were holiday gifts. Hyesung turned toward him, addressing him as one of the raid's healers. Juyeon, still giddy with excitement, responded sweetly and eagerly, so much so that Hyesung was momentarily unsettled by the energy in his expression. But Juyeon didn't care. He had gotten everything he wanted, and all he wanted now was to go home quickly. A few days later, the long-awaited day 1 of the Kainal raid arrived. Juyeon, however, was slumped on his bed, so tired it felt like he could die. He opened his status window, groaning as he wondered how long it would take to collect everything he needed. The system displayed that he had exactly 4,000 SP. Relief washed over him. He had managed to gather everything he needed before the Kainal raid officially began. He recalled the daily quests that had occupied his time recently. Defeating 30 crustacean ministers, collecting 33 horned bullhorns, eliminating 30 ground-type monsters, and dispatching 30 monsters with fire attribute skills. All of them were grade E, and he hadn't even had time to rest. Still, he told himself that getting E-rank quests consecutively like that was unbelievably lucky. Sitting up in bed, he consoled himself and decided it was time to level up his most critical skill. If the heavens were helping, he might as well take advantage. The system asked if he wanted to level up skill copy. He immediately confirmed. The system deducted the 4,000 SP and displayed the result. Skill copy had reached level 3. Starting at midnight, he would be able to use 3 skills at the same time. Originally, his goal was to buff attack power using Brilliant Authority and Resistance to change, then unleash burst damage. But now that red-cloaked Santa, also known as Hyesung, had given him Bloodstained Battle, Grade SS. Having only 3 skill copies wasn't enough. He then wondered whether attaching Bloodstained Battle, Brilliant Authority, and Resistance to change together would create an additional attack synergy. He thought it would definitely generate a combo more powerful than the original setup. It would have been perfect if he could equip 4 skills. Still, for the day, he decided to copy Brilliant Authority, Fireball, and Resistance to change, since he could only use 3 skills simultaneously. Later, in the field, he faced a massive dog monster, but he simply smiled happily as he cast Fireball, eager to test his boosted attack power. A few minutes later, on UserTube, players were buzzing about a psychopath named Juyeon, who was one-shotting everything with Fireball in an F-rank field. They speculated that Juyeon was in Gapyeong, which had become a total mess thanks to him. A new video appeared titled, Gapyeong Field, Mountain Snake Getting Utterly Destroyed by Small Attacks. In the footage, users were seen preparing to attack a massive snake monster. However, the snake crawled past all of them, ignoring their presence entirely. They quickly realized its aggro was locked on someone else. The camera followed as the snake chased a hooded man, lunging with its mouth wide open to devour him, only for the man to hurl a massive fireball at it. Viewers were stunned, asking what kind of fireball could be that huge and whether that man was the psychopath. The panic rose as Juyeon sprinted in their direction with unbelievable speed. Viewers were amazed and wondered what his agility stat must be to move like that, and questioned if he was even a mage. The snake then appeared in front of the users, ready to devour them, but a fireball was thrown just in time, knocking the snake away. They turned to see Juyeon behind the blast. But once again, Juyeon sprinted off as the snake charged at him. They watched in disbelief as he repeatedly attacked the snake with fireballs, even shouting at it to just die already. The comment left everyone feeling awkward, unable to believe that someone was actually taking down a field boss using chip damage. A crazy bastard, they thought. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a luxury black car came to a stop. Suyeon opened the door and reported that the field inspection schedule was complete. She informed Al that he had 1 hour and 24 minutes of free time until his next appointment. But Al ignored her, smiling as he watched a video of the so-called psychopath defeating the mountain snake. Suyeon asked if he was concerned about the psychopath. Al replied yes, because he was the one who had received his precious elemental ring. She commented that he seemed quite sure the psychopath was Juyeon, but Al merely asked if she didn't find it interesting. He noted that it hadn't been long since he had given Juyeon the ring, and the ring didn't affect agility or stamina. Yet Juyeon had been dodging attacks with minimal movement as if he had long-trained combat instincts. Al stepped out of the car and asked Suyeon about the movements of the Raider Guild. She reported that, as predicted, sightings had been increasing near special fields. He then ordered her to keep a close watch on both the psychopath and the raiders, because with so much attention on Juyeon, bugs were bound to gather. Al proceeded toward the mansion, telling Suyeon that he hoped those bugs wouldn't cause trouble for his friend. Elsewhere, in an office room, a blonde man smirked horrifyingly as he watched the video of Juyeon fighting the mountain snake. He had taken a keen interest in the one known as Psychopath. The next day, in the special field, he saw a video of himself on another channel and noticed it had over 4 million views. He was furious, wondering if those people were crazy, and shouted aloud why they were the ones making money when he was the one who did all the work. He questioned whether his right of publicity was a joke, even if not a single speck of his face had been shown. He snapped, realizing that if things were going to be like this, it would be better to upload the footage himself. He shoved his phone back into his pocket and planned to get his channel verified this time and upload the bodycam footage too. He decided his first upload would be titled Level 10 Beginner Mage Soloing E-Rank Field Boss, Mountain Snake, and was certain that if he uploaded the Kainal raid footage as well, the views would skyrocket. He planned to create a separate account to avoid being identified as the same person as the psychopath and began wondering, what if he ended up with 1 million subscribers and received a gold button? He even thought about whether he should upload a verification video. Looking around, he asked aloud how he was supposed to gather materials in the pitch-black night. His daily quest was Grade B, and it required collecting 10 essences from the special field, defeating 20 monsters, and surviving in the field for more than 60 minutes. The reward was a quest buff Grade B and a random item box. He sighed in exhaustion, thinking that only E or F rank daily quests usually appeared. Had he seen the quest earlier, he wouldn't have had to come out at night. He still couldn't believe he had slept all day after catching just one measly snake. Determined to finish before the skill reset at midnight, he pressed on. Fortunately, a blue glowing crystal appeared in front of him. He wondered if it was the special essence, picked it up, and the system confirmed that he had 1 out of 10 essences. That confirmed it didn't drop from monsters, which meant he had to search every nook and cranny while running in circles around the field. He couldn't believe he was running again, and thought that if the quest hadn't been B rank, he would have abandoned it already, completely unaware of the eagle circling above him. Suddenly, the eagle lunges at him from behind. Fortunately, he sensed it just in time and managed to dodge at high speed. He then calmly looked down at the eagle, which had crashed into the ground. A moment later, the realization sank in and he shouted, demanding to know what just happened and how he had dodged it so instinctively. He watched the eagle struggle to free its beak from the tree and realized that his body had moved before he even had time to think. He wondered if it was the combined effect of using brilliant authority and resistance to change. Raising his finger, he decided to think about it later. He then cast Fireball, roasting both the eagle and the tree. Nearby, someone saw the explosion. The man remarked to his members that quite a few users were hunting even at such late hours. He asked them about Kainal. One of the masked men replied that the advance team had located it in the northwest. The man grinned, saying that just the thought of catching Kainal before that bastard Hyesung and watching him return empty-handed made him excited. His subordinate asked what they should do if other users barged into the raid. The man replied with a sinister smile and ordered them to kill everyone who barges in. A few hours later, Juyeon finished killing 20 monsters and was relieved to finally be done with one of his tasks. He then spotted another essence on the ground and was pleased to find that the essences were easier to locate than he had expected.
He figured he would be able to collect them all before midnight. The system then notified him that he had collected 9 out of 10 essences, which made him even happier, especially since he had already completed the requirement of surviving in the field for over an hour. Now, he needed just 1 more essence to finish the daily quest. Suddenly, he heard a loud explosion nearby. He turned around in shock and saw Kainal being attacked from the air. He scratched his head in confusion, knowing that their guild raid wasn't scheduled until early the next morning. He watched as a group of users launched arrows at Kainal, focusing their attacks on its wings. He panicked, wondering what to do. At this rate, Kainal might get taken down before his guild even arrived. He considered contacting his guild members but realized it was probably too late, given the situation. However, he calmed down when he recalled that his quest was simply to attempt conquering the F-rank special field and to defeat Kainal, the master of Sky Island. The quest hadn't specified who he had to defeat Kainal with or how much he needed to contribute. He asked himself whether he really needed to defeat Kainal personally, and within seconds, decided to just observe and hitch a free ride. One of the masked users successfully struck Kainal's black wing with an arrow, causing Kainal to fall from the air. The users shouted that this was their chance and charged at Kainal. Kainal rose in fury, but he simply watched as the system displayed a notification. If Kainal's health drops below 50%, it becomes unable to fly and will corrupt one of its wings, adding the Condemn Grade E effect to all its attacks. Kainal then corrupted another white wing and entered its 3rd phase. It summoned a second longsword and swung both swords rapidly, sending clouds of dust sweeping across the battlefield. Juyeon shielded his eyes from the dust. Then, to his surprise, he found another essence nearby. He casually approached it, humming to himself, and remarking that today's mission really was easy money. Unaware that Kainal had just released a powerful energy surge and stabbed both swords into the ground. The resulting force rippled outward, knocking the masked users away close to his location. He looked up and saw 3 users floating in the air, wondering why they were headed his way while he was still holding the essence. The users hit the ground but quickly got up despite the pain, determined to check for other scattered members and regroup. One of the men called out to Juyeon, who had also been hit by the man, and demanded to know who he was. The man, disoriented, added that he'd lost his mind trying to find the mage. Juyeon, now holding a mask, asked the man to repeat what he said. The man shouted at him to get a grip, but Juyeon ignored him, staring at the mask in his hand, wondering what it was. The man then angrily asked what he was doing and ordered him to get over there quickly. Juyeon stammered a yes in reply, put the mask on, and shouted to the others that they should go together. Thinking that as long as he didn't get caught, everything would be fine. He silently thanked the original owner of the mask, whoever they were. The system then notified him that he had collected 10 essences from the special field and completed the daily quest. His unclaimed random item had been stored in his temporary inventory, and his quest buff had been applied as a reward. A moment later, the masked users continued their assault on Kainal, with powerful blue fireballs suddenly being hurled at the boss, severely injuring it. However, the masked users began asking where those fireballs were coming from. They hadn't seen them before. He overheard them muttering that someone was going through hell up close, but someone else was just a pure damage dealer leeching from a distance, which felt like total crap. That's when it hit him. He was screwed. His firepower had gotten too strong thanks to the buffs. He knew that if he didn't use any skills, it would look suspicious. But if he did use them, he'd stand out. If they weren't in the middle of an intense fight, he would have already been caught for sure. Still, continuously pounding the sturdy punching bag that was Kainal with his current stats gave him a rush. He and the other users continued launching attacks at Kainal. He thought that since things had reached this point, he might as well blend in and rake in the rewards. The system then notified him, if Kainal does not lose more than 10% of its health during the battle, the summoning order Grade A will activate, summoning the monsters of Sky Island. Additionally, once the summoning order is activated, the subordination enhancement, Grade A effect, would be applied to those summoned monsters. Suddenly, Kainal raised one of his swords into the air and released a powerful energy. The energy spike caught the attention of eagles in the sky and even monsters far off in the distance who had been attacking other users. Those monsters abruptly stopped and began sprinting away. The users fighting them were left confused, wondering what was happening, and whether a raid had started nearby. They followed the trail of monsters and discovered the masked users engaged in combat with Kainal, but they knew full well that the announced raid wasn't supposed to happen that day. The masked leader grew frustrated seeing more and more people taking notice. When one of the ordinary users stepped forward to ask what they were doing, the masked man slashed him, and the man screamed as his blood splattered across the ground. The masked leader scowled and muttered that if Yesung found out, things would get irritating. He then ordered his men to deal with the outsiders as well. Panic spread among the onlookers as one of the ordinary users stammered, asking what was wrong with them, but the masked men gave no response. They simply cut them down without hesitation. Juyeon watched in horror. He couldn't believe it. These people weren't just stealing the boss, they were committing player killing. He realized he needed to get out of there immediately. These lunatics would kill anyone who got in their way. Just as one of the masked men was about to slash another user, a sword intercepted the attack. Hyesung had arrived, flanked by Hyeji, her brother, and others. Hyesung glared furiously at the masked men, and Juyeon knew right then he was completely and utterly screwed. The masked leader sneered and mocked Hyesung, saying a ragtag bunch like his couldn't possibly be the real raid party. He scoffed, asking what kind of lowlifes barge into a raid and act like they own it. That only enraged Hyesung further. He shouted back that they weren't just stealing the boss, they were killing innocent users. He declared that the masked group wouldn't have a leg to stand on, even if they died right then and there. With that, Hyesung lunged at them, yelling for them to die. The masked man behind Juyeon shoved him aside, shouting for him to get out of the way. Juyeon looked at them in shock as both groups clashed violently, and he panicked, wondering what he should do and where he should hide to survive the chaos. Suddenly, Kainal continued his assault, ordering his monsters to attack everyone indiscriminately. However, the masked men were more concerned about losing the final hit on Kainal. They grumbled that it was like cooking porridge only to feed it to a dog, and continued attacking the raid members, even as the summoned monsters attacked everyone without distinguishing between parties. Juyeon realized that they needed to bring Kainal down quickly to restore order, but with the raid's firepower scattered across the chaos, their overall damage output was lacking. At that moment, Hyesung activated Bloodstained Battle and began cutting down every masked user and monster in his path. Watching him, Juyeon suddenly got an idea on how to help finish off Kainal. Meanwhile, Hyeji was fighting at the back with her fire spear, slaying monsters while her brother protected her from the front. However, she didn't notice someone sneaking up behind her. Fortunately, just as the attacker was about to stab her, a powerful blue fireball struck the man and pushed him back. She turned quickly and saw it had come from a hooded man in a mask, wielding fire magic, without realizing it was Juyeon. Her brother, alarmed, rushed over and asked if she was okay and what had happened. Hyeji replied that the masked mage had attacked his own side to save her. Her brother looked at Juyeon with suspicion, unable to believe it. A few minutes later, Juyeon was dodging attacks from both allies and enemies, careful not to retaliate. He knew they had to hold on just a bit longer. As the clock neared 11:58, he told himself to wait just a little more. He continued killing monsters with fireballs, then bolted when one of the raid members attempted to attack him. The moment the system clock struck midnight, he sighed in relief and immediately activated Skill Copy to duplicate Hyesung's Bloodstained Battle, which instantly increased all of his stats by 20%. Pointing forward, he launched a massively enhanced fireball, incinerating the monsters in front of Hyesung. Thanks to that, he secured 20 kills and increased his Bloodstained Battle effect by another 2%. Hyesung shot him a glare, clearly irritated, but ultimately let it slide and turned to attack monsters on the opposite side. As Juyeon fought, he realized that if the monsters kept respawning, the skill's effect would continue to stack. Since Bloodstained Battle increased stats by 2% per kill, it was even more broken than Resistance to Change, which only increased stats by a fixed value. Juyeon then launched an advanced fireball at Kainal, bidding it farewell. The blast landed successfully, triggering a massive explosion that rocked the battlefield. Moments later, the monsters had been wiped out, and Kainal was down on one knee. The raid members, seeing Kainal motionless, asked whether they could go in for the kill. But Juyeon cursed loudly as he caught sight of Kainal's red, furious eye. He knew it was entering its final phase. Kainal drew a spear and gripped its handle tightly. Then, slamming it into the ground, a powerful force erupted and spread across the entire Sky Island. Juyeon did his best to shield himself, but the energy was too overwhelming. He knew that if they couldn't endure this, they were done for. Suddenly, Hyeji's brother appeared in front of him and activated a protective barrier, shielding Juyeon from the blast. As the force shattered Juyeon's mask, he stared at him in disbelief. But Hyeji's brother simply said calmly, "He owe him one." The ground around Kainal shattered into fragments as the boss scanned its surroundings for any remaining life forms. It was startled when the sound of a barrier breaking came from above and spotted Hyeji's brother and Juyeon nearby. Juyeon raised his hand, gathering magic, and began forming a fireball. Pouring in more mana, he expanded the fireball until it was as large as a globe. Without hesitation, he hurled it in Kainal's direction. Recognizing the threat, Kainal understood that defeat was imminent. Hyesung and the others braced themselves as the fireball struck, forcing Kainal back down to its knees. A moment later, the system confirmed the boss's death with a massive drop of loot items. Among the items, a glowing necklace stood out, clearly the indicator of a boss system reward. Tension escalated as Hyesung and the masked leader exchanged glances. Hyesung issued a cold warning, advising the masked man to step aside if he didn't want to die after being saved. The masked leader, visibly annoyed, questioned whether it wasn't obvious that their mage was the true MVP. His attention locked onto Juyeon, his thoughts turning to how he could eliminate the boy and reclaim the boss system prize. At that very moment, Juyeon received a system alert notifying him that he had completed his main quest and would be transferred to the tutorial field in 10 seconds to choose his rewards. He stared blankly at the message, then glanced at the masked leader, who clearly hadn't realized the extent of Juyeon's damage potential. Leaping from a nearby cliff, Juyeon landed directly on the pile of dropped items. Both Hyesung and the masked leader were stunned by his boldness. As Hyesung rushed forward, Juyeon called out to the group, asserting that they had clearly seen him finish off Kainal. He then picked up the necklace near the boss's corpse. The masked leader seethed, finally recognizing Juyeon as the psychopath user. With a triumphant grin, Juyeon declared the necklace his and thanked them all for the raid effort. Before anyone could stop him, he disappeared, leaving both Hyesung and the masked man grasping at air. Hyesung, feeling nothing but empty air where his sword had swung, cursed in frustration, accusing the boy of playing him. The masked leader, surprisingly calm, stated that they had been tricked. When Hyesung demanded an explanation, the man merely asked what else it could be, noting that everyone there had just been outsmarted by that psychopath. Still in disbelief, the masked leader couldn't accept that the boss system had been stolen from right under him. Meanwhile, Juyeon, now floating in space, was also trying to process what had just happened, unsure if he had truly pulled off such an outrageous move. The system then issued his rewards: 10,000 SP, one selectable detailed trait upgrade, and a random skill master reward box for completing the main quest. Additionally, he received 4,000 SP and activation of the fourth sub-trait of his unique trait for completing the tutorial quest. It also confirmed that he had absorbed the soul of the special field boss Kanal, classified as Grade F, which granted a stat increase of +1 across the board, and the boss skill descendant, Grade A. Juyeon, stunned, muttered to himself in disbelief, overwhelmed by the flood of system notifications. Abruptly, the notification panel slid away, revealing a small fairy who addressed him as the Brave One. Juyeon stared in shock, but the fairy introduced herself calmly as Ego, his tutorial assistant. Still confused, he asked for clarification, to which she affirmed her role. Ego explained that she had been summoned to guide him through the tutorial process. Juyeon remained baffled, having never heard of a tutorial assistant before and unable to recall seeing any mention of one online. He speculated that perhaps it was a feature exclusive to EX-grade unique traits. Ego then suggested they proceed with reward collection, and Juyeon, regaining his composure, agreed and thanked her. She twirled her hand in the air, and the system displayed the interface for choosing a detailed trait upgrade. Ego explained that trait upgrades functioned similarly to a second-class advancement, essentially adding detailed traits to existing ones. However, the explanation only left him more confused. She clarified further that he could select one of his current abilities and upgrade its detailed traits. She then displayed his skill master and skill copy traits in greater detail, asking which one he would prefer to enhance. He considered his options carefully. Upgrading income would increase the SP gained from his attacks, which would be beneficial in the long run. But he knew he was currently too weak. If the raid against Kanal had taken place before midnight, before his skills reset, he would have stood no chance of defeating it. He concluded that increasing the number of available skill copies was the smarter move. He informed Ego that he would select sample for skill copy, and she confirmed his choice by applying the detailed trait upgrade. As a result, he would now gain 2 charges for copied skills at midnight and 12 p.m. Additionally, when using skill copy, there would be a chance to either recharge 1 copy or upgrade the last copied skill by 1 grade. He was amazed at the result, though slightly disappointed that the charge was reduced to 2. Still, with 4 copies a day, it was more than manageable. He then realized that with some luck, he might even reach up to 8 copies per day. Ego asked if he would like to check his other unclaimed rewards, to which he immediately agreed. She opened his random item box and drew out a fire explosion sword, Grade C. The weapon provided an additional +7 strength, +3 magic, and increased fire attribute mana infusion and skill power by 7%. He stared at the sword, reflecting on how everything seemed to revolve around fire attributes, even this reward. Ego then handed him a chest, his Skillmaster reward box, Grade C, from the main quest. Upon opening it, he received a bonus quest, Grade C. The objectives were to defeat 2 field bosses, eliminate 100 monsters, and spend 5,000 SP. The reward included 10,000 SP and plus 3 intelligence stat points, Grade D. He questioned whether it was truly an item, since it felt more like a quest, but decided it was an excellent deal considering the SP return. Next, Ego proceeded to apply the new sub-trait reward, and he received the 4th sub-trait of his unique trait. It granted a random option, Grade F, to any copied skill. He interpreted it as an extra attribute added to copied abilities and considered it a decent addition. He then raised Kanel's cursed necklace and told Ego that what he had truly been looking forward to was this item. The cursed necklace, Grade SS, provided a boost of +33 magic, +333 mana, 13% increased mana recovery, 13% increased skill power, and a 10% reduction in skill mana cost. Additionally, if his health dropped below 20%, mana recovery would increase by 200%, magic would increase by 33%, and all stats would receive a +5 boost while the necklace was equipped. He shouted in amazement at the sheer power of the stat bonuses and asked about the boss skill. If the boss system item was this strong, he wondered what kind of ability the boss skill held. The system then revealed Kanal's descendant, Grade A. When health fell below 10%, the user would enter a descent state, increasing all stats by 50% of their magic stat. All attacks would gain the Corruption, Grade C effect, and both health and mana would be restored. The descent would last 10 minutes and had a cooldown of 30 days. Reading this, he was left speechless. He realized that Kanal had essentially been a being of light, and he suspected that this might have been the final phase skill he had witnessed earlier. He was both irritated and relieved. If he hadn't defeated Kanal with Ultra Burst DPS during Bloodstained battle, he would never have stood a chance against its post-descent form. He felt dizzy at the realization and reminded himself that this was effectively a reserve life with a 30-day cooldown. With 20,000 SP at his disposal, he decided to invest 15,000 SP into skill copy, increasing his sample level by 4. This upgrade allowed him to charge 3 skill copies at both midnight and noon, with continued chances to recharge one or upgrade a copied skill by 1 grade. Satisfied with this foundational enhancement, he moved on. He then spent 800 SP to upgrade efficiency, which reduced the mana cost of copied skills by 20%. He declared this as an investment in practical performance. Next, he invested 2,000 SP into the Blessing trait, which added 1 random unique trait, grade E, to each copied skill, enhancing overall robustness. Finally, he allocated 3,000 SP to improve his daily quest, which guaranteed quests of at least grade E every midnight. Energized by this investment in consistent growth, he celebrated his decisions, while Ego cheered in admiration. Moments later, he collapsed onto the floor of the spatial field in exhaustion, feeling satisfied that everything was finally settled. He asked Ego if there was anything left to do, expecting it to be the end. However, she told him that everything so far had simply been about claiming rewards. He stared at her in confusion. She calmly explained that what came next was the true start of the tutorial. Still unsure, he asked what she meant. She then asked if he remembered the final sentence of his main quest. Thinking for a moment, he recalled that it mentioned the survival of Earth and humanity. Sitting up abruptly, he asked what that meant. Ego responded with a chilling truth. This world was about to be destroyed by invaders from another dimension. The next day, a news reporter announced that Sky Island had naturally disappeared following the defeat of its boss, and the citizens in the affected area had once again reclaimed clear skies. She further reported that the gate connecting to Sky Island had vanished. However, a new spatial distortion phenomenon was now occurring, and experts could not rule out the possibility of the field mutating again. Hyesung addressed the media, acknowledging that while the incident may have already been leaked through video, their raid had suffered major setbacks due to a group that maliciously stole the boss. Despite that, the Kinal raid had been successfully completed. Immediately after the boss's defeat, the unidentified individuals had fled the scene. When asked by one of the reporters what the reward for defeating the special field boss had been, Hyesung stated that an increase in all stats was confirmed. Another reporter then asked if any boss items had dropped, a question that clearly agitated Hyesung. Without further comment, he turned away and told the press that he had nothing more to say. Elsewhere, Hyeji turned off the television and sighed in frustration. Her brother remarked that if the psychopath user were ever caught by Hyesung, the consequences might be deadly. Hyeji ignored him and attempted to call someone, but the call failed to connect. Her brother asked if she was still trying to reach that person and questioned whether her suspicion might be wrong. She replied that they should assume the robe was standard wizard equipment, but if the psychopath user's primary attack was fireball, then it changed everything. She called Juyeon again and grew visibly excited when he finally answered. Upon hearing his voice, she immediately got to the point and asked if he was the wizard who had helped during the Kinal raid. Shocked by the question, Juyeon nervously asked what she was talking about. Although he hadn't even set foot near the raid site, she explained that she had noticed the magic gear he was wearing closely resembled that of the psychopath. She had tried to approach him during the raid, but he disappeared before she had the chance. Worried, he insisted that he hadn't even gone near the raid and firmly denied being the psychopath. He expressed regret at not being able to join despite being invited. Then, citing that he was taking a shower, he told her he had to end the call and remarked that since the call couldn't come through the shower, it would be better to leave it there. Her reaction made it clear that she had already figured out he was acting suspiciously. Meanwhile, in a luxury hotel, Juyeon was relaxing in a bathtub, thinking she probably wouldn't call back now that he had answered. He checked the call history from Hyeji, wondering who had the stamina to keep calling once a minute. He hadn't wanted to answer earlier because he was already overwhelmed by everything, especially the disturbing reminder from Ego that the world was about to be invaded by entities from another dimension. Ego, however, had reassured him not to worry. She had reminded him that he possessed a special power, Skill Master. She explained that this power was a subordinate authority of reality-altering abilities granted only to divine beings. It was in essence a divine gift uniquely meant for him. Still skeptical, he questioned why he had such a power and whether he was supposed to be some kind of god or chosen one. It didn't sit right with him, especially since he had always lived a disciplined and honest life, including his time in the military. Ego admitted that the situation was indeed confusing, but told him not to overthink it. She pointed out that he had already achieved many things and had received numerous rewards for them. However, she added that now there was only one final choice left to make. When he asked what choice that was, Ego explained that the power he currently wielded was not yet the full strength of the divine shards. A true hero is someone burdened with the power to save the world. That power could either remain dormant or flourish, depending entirely on the choice he made. She then posed a pivotal question, whether he would be content with simply surviving and enjoying the weight of his power, or whether he would choose to rise up, bear the burden, and save the world himself. Unable to respond immediately, he remained silent. Ego then reassured him that salvation was not necessarily the hero's duty. It was merely one of many options available to him, as it had always been. Back in the present, he still couldn't believe that someone like him, who had been nothing more than a lazy bum until recently, was now contemplating salvation. He decided to forget about it for the time being, and instead planned to eat fried chicken and drink beer after finishing his bath. Meanwhile, at Hyeji's house, she lay sprawled on the sofa, feeling pleased with the work she had just completed. She reasoned that Juyeon definitely had psychopath tendencies based on her sharp intuition and genius-level analytical skills. However, she still lacked concrete proof, so no matter how much she speculated, she would need to meet Juyeon face-to-face to confirm it. Her brother noticed her deep calculation and asked why she was so obsessed with Juyeon. She ignored him and continued her investigation, prompting him to remind her that even S-rank users could die in field zones at any moment. She responded that if she was going to die anyway, then she at least wanted to be the best in that field. To achieve that, she would need someone exceptional, like a psychopath, in her party. Her brother sighed hopelessly and remarked that if she truly wanted to be the best, she should stop acting so recklessly all the time. She nodded, thinking fast. Juyeon caused trouble on Sky Island, then slipped away without a trace, careful to stay out of sight. She guessed he was under level 40, so he would skip busy places and look for a quiet D-grade field far from Seoul. Low on cash and without a car, he likely moved by bus or on foot. With all those deductions, she proudly told her brother that if she narrowed the range accordingly, she expected Juyeon would soon appear at a D-grade spider cave near the metropolitan area. Her brother, however, didn't share her enthusiasm. After her lengthy explanation, he simply asked if she was being dumb and pointed out that things never went as smoothly as she imagined. Unfortunately for him, a few days later, they actually encountered Juyeon at the D-grade spider cave. Hyeji's brother stared at him in disbelief, unable to process that he had truly shown up. Juyeon insisted that he wasn't really hunting and claimed he had only come to look for healing items, but Hyeji responded cheerfully, saying she already knew the truth and told him to stop pretending. She then asked what he was hiding. Juyeon firmly replied that he was just a regular healer, but she pressed him again, questioning whether he was seriously going to continue the act. Juyeon, clearly frustrated, asked why she was acting that way toward him. Meanwhile, Hyeji's brother watched the exchange with mild disdain, thinking it was pathetic that a citizen was getting played by a punk. Tired of the back and forth, Hyeji's brother raised 5 fingers and told Juyeon he'd pay him 500 won per hour, suggesting they just get moving. He placed a hand on Juyeon's shoulder, thinking it was pointless to waste time trying to convince Hyeji to change her mind. As Juyeon was about to object, the brother reminded him that they had agreed he'd pay off his debt. Juyeon looked at him in disbelief, pushed the man's hand off his shoulder, and sighed in frustration. Reluctantly, he agreed to go along with them, admitting that he didn't really understand what all this talk of light meant. But he was going because they were offering 500 won. Hyeji, thrilled by his response, said they should head straight to the field. Juyeon stopped them and said to wait a moment. When Hyeji asked what it was this time, he explained that he needed to use the bathroom. Hyeji smiled knowingly, while her brother silently recalled her deduction about Juyeon possibly having irritable bowel syndrome. He began to wonder if she had just confirmed it. Meanwhile, Juyeon felt deeply embarrassed, guessing that they had now branded him as some kind of poop freak, completely unaware that, in reality, they had already labeled him as the psychopath. A moment later, Hyeji continued to press him, asking again whether he was the mage who had scampered off after helping in the Kynal raid, and if he was, in fact, the psychopath. She smiled brightly at him, but he feigned confusion, asking her to repeat what she had said as though he hadn't heard it clearly. Her expression shifted into frustration, annoyed that he was still being so evasive. They were nearing the entrance to the spider cave, yet Hyeji wouldn't let up. She insisted that if he truly was the psychopath, she wanted to repay him for his help. Since they worked in the same industry, she promised to keep his identity a secret no matter what. He wiped the sweat from his face, uneasy, but began piecing things together. Based on what they were saying, it seemed obvious now that they were convinced the scammer mage was him. He recalled Hyeji's brother mentioning that they had agreed to repay him, and it confirmed that there was no use denying it any longer. Admitting defeat, he confessed that the psychopath and the crazy mage were both him, but he urged them not to tell anyone. Hyeji was astonished but quickly connected the dots. That explained why his magic output seemed greater than hers. He clarified that the difference came down to gear bonuses, stressing that equipment was the key. She agreed and asked him what skill books he used for buffs or healing, considering he was a mage. Before he could answer, her brother stopped walking and reminded her that they were in a fairly high-level D-grade field with a lot of monsters. He asked if she wasn't tired of messing around, and her reluctant agreement seemed to ease her brother's concerns. He then said that since they had earned their 500 won, he would go ahead and clear the path. Drawing his fire flame sword, he prepared for combat. Hyeji was surprised to see he used a magic sword, something she hadn't known about. He simply explained that he couldn't afford a staff, so he had settled for a sword instead. He considered that due to his magic power stat, the sword was better than nothing. Since he was already equipped, he decided it was a good chance to test out his skills. To Hyeji's confusion, the sword emitted ice instead of fire. Remaining silent, he activated Ice Spear, grade E, which summoned a spear made of ice capable of attacking enemies within a 20-meter radius. He appreciated that being a skill master gave him the advantage of using various types of skills and combining them freely. He then layered a poison, grade D effect, onto the ice spear, which would inflict poison on any struck targets. He launched the spears at the spiders blocking the path, intending to poison them to death. After confirming the spears had pierced the targets, he clenched his fist tightly and activated Catalyst, which amplified the effects on poisoned enemies. When the poison stacks exceeded 3, it transformed into critical poison. They all watched as the spiders' insides exploded from the reaction, killing them instantly. He acknowledged once again that magic wasn't bad at all, but if he were spotted using such flashy attacks, he'd be in trouble. That made him conclude that he should avoid using Fireball for a while. Hyeji, who hadn't expected him to have different magic affinities, asked if he wasn't actually a flame mage. He didn't respond, having realized that Fireball's damage now felt lacking compared to the other magic he had tried. Hyeji stared at him in growing confusion, beginning to wonder what he truly was. Later that day, at a Sampyeongsal restaurant, Hyeji chatted happily while drinking beer. They raised their glasses to toast, but he kept his gaze low, planning to sneak off right after the meal. A short while earlier, he had killed the queen spider, grade D boss, and absorbed its soul. He was pleased with the one-shot kill and the successful skill test and had been ready to head home, until he was startled by Hyeji's loud scream. Hyeji and her brother had just discovered they couldn't acquire the boss's soul due to insufficient contribution. She commented that although she had earned the 501, all she had done was provide minor support. And now the soul had gone entirely to him. Frustrated yet amazed, she said she might as well buy him a sip of wine to make up for it. He quickly agreed out of fear and offered that they should eat some meat instead. It finally sank in that this was a party hunt, not a solo run, and that maybe disappearing right away wasn't such a smooth move after all. Back in the present, he took a sip of his beer and figured he might as well relax and enjoy the drink. But just then, Hyeji slammed her beer glass on the table and called out to him loudly. She announced that she had a proposal that would turn him into bones and flesh, leaving him with the sudden realization that things were about to get messy. She explained that in the field, monsters weren't the only danger. Conflicts with other players often broke out, as seen during the final raid. Some people believed that getting stronger would naturally resolve everything, but the truth was that players didn't hunt boss monsters alone. Even if the enemies were humans instead of monsters, the risk and difficulty remained the same. The weight of her words made him tremble slightly as he understood what she was getting at. Remaining composed, she emphasized that there was no point in hunting alone. It was far too dangerous. She questioned how exhausting it must be to deal with high-level fields without a tank, a proper schedule, or even the hassle of managing taxes from item sales. She then handed him a joint contract, offering to handle everything on his behalf so that he could focus entirely on hunting. He asked if she was serious about signing a contract with him, and she confirmed it. She explained that there weren't many reliable users in the field hunting industry, but he was strong, and they shared a secret. Monsters left behind items when they died, and people left behind their names. If one couldn't become the best alone, then rising to the top with the help of others was the next best path. She added that she hated being a side character more than dying itself. Holding the contract closer to his face, she promised that signing it would grant him access to a free office tel exclusively for users, with the world's most beautiful woman living next door. Her brother, watching the exchange, thought Hyeji was trying a bit too hard. When he asked who is the most beautiful woman, Hyeji proudly and confidently pointed at herself. Both he and her brother were left speechless. Choosing to pretend he hadn't seen it, he commented that the contract conditions were too good to refuse. Hyeji, overjoyed, said they should sign it immediately and celebrated loudly, much to her brother's embarrassment. He told her to sit down and eat. A few hours later, the contract was officially signed. Hyeji explained that the field schedule would prioritize his preferences, and she would manage everything outside of combat, including his daily routine. She handed him a black card and told him to buy whatever he needed. She would handle all the money he earned from field hunts. He accepted the card as she added that if he needed anything clarified, he should just let her know anytime. He looked around, thinking how unbelievable the whole situation was, but replied that her explanation had been perfectly clear. Internally, he was thrilled. It was awesome. He was now living in a penthouse. The contract was a dream for Juyeon. Hunting had never felt easier. More than that, despite trying to avoid unnecessary attachments because of the circumstances, he couldn't help but admit that Hyeji was undeniably attractive. For someone like her to voluntarily become his manager made him feel like even Muhammad Ali had nothing on him. And ever since acquiring Catalyst, everything had been going smoothly. A few days later, the system notified him that his copied Blood Combat, grade SS, had leveled up. He was stunned by the upgrade and shouted with excitement, relieved that he no longer had to rely on Hisung's skills. He decided it was time to test it out with Ice Spear and recalled Hyeji telling him that he was strong. He imagined using Fireball alongside Blood Combat, estimating that the attack power would be overwhelming. Rushing off to find Hyeji, he told her to prepare for the field. Today, he planned to give them a proper ride on the metaphorical bus. Yet in the back of his mind, he wondered if this excitement had made him too relaxed. Maybe, just maybe, he was starting to get careless. Just a moment later, Hyeji and her brother were both fully dressed for the field. Her brother, a rank 37 user, expressed concern, asking if they were really going to a C rank field with just the three of them. Hyeji, who was level 36, replied that they had wanted to check it out at least once. Juyeon chimed in, noting that the recommended level range for C rank fields was between 31 and 40. Despite this, he confidently claimed there would be no problem, even though he himself was only level 15. Hyeji's brother, however, was most worried about him. Hyeji's brother explained that while the system displayed a suggested level, the actual recommended level could vary significantly depending on party composition and field conditions. But Juyeon reassured them both that everything would be fine. He said he had a plan and confidently declared that he would sweep up all the experience for them, convinced that with blood combat grade X, there was nothing he couldn't handle. Later, in the C-rank field at Mount Unak Natural Recreation Forest, a field infamous for its mobile, plant-type monsters, they arrived prepared. Since the area used to be a public forest, it was filled with mutated trees, making it essential to bring at least 2 AoE skill dealers. Juyeon, however, believed today would be different. He launched a fireball at a nearby plant monster that attempted to attack them. The siblings watched in amazement as he took it down with a single strike. Juyeon already knew that fire was the most effective element against tree-type monsters. The system notified him that his fireball had received a 10% skill effect boost thanks to his enhance grade E trait. Excited, he took it as a good omen for today's hunt. He decided to copy only the buff portion of blood combat so he could track its stat increases accurately, and also copied a backup skill in case of emergencies. Wanting to test whether blood combat could be copied with his body cam footage as well, he activated his explosion technique to stylishly incinerate a cluster of tree monsters, finishing them off with a flashy last hit. Hyeji's brother looked at him suspiciously, while Juyeon smirked, thinking he had just triggered a bonus effect. Now he could copy up to 5 skills in total. As he laughed softly and continued burning the trees, Hyeji listened and watched in silence. She saw how confidently he moved, shouting at the monsters to die as he released waves of fire. In that moment, she realized why users referred to him as the psychopath. While Juyeon remained focused on skill testing and hunting, he failed to notice a man in a suit watching him from a distance. The man reported through a device that the target's location had been confirmed and that the skill appearance matched the psychopath. Elsewhere, in an office, a sharp knife was hurled in a fit of anger. It struck the screen displaying Juyeon's image. The person watching demanded to know how Juyeon had dared to appear again so soon, especially with so little time having passed. The knife embedded in the screen marked the center of Juyeon's face, and the man seethed with fury, convinced that Juyeon had completely lost his sense of fear. The masked leader then spoke, his voice cold and full of menace. He said Juyeon had walked to his death on his own, and if that was his wish, then it would be granted. A moment later, they had made their way deeper into the C-rank field, and had just finished defeating another monster. Juyeon was busy picking up the dropped items, proudly declaring that his level was skyrocketing after jumping from level 15 to 17. As he sifted through the remains, he noticed something unusual inside the boss. A bone. Curiously, he picked it up, initially assuming it was an item, but froze in place the moment he realized it was a human bone. Horror overtook him, and he screamed, instantly drawing the siblings' attention. Hyeji asked what had happened, and he stuttered while explaining that he had found a corpse. Still in shock, he admitted he had let his guard down, thinking no one else was around, and nervously asked if he might have hit someone by accident. Hyeji bent down to examine the bone, calmly reassuring him while inspecting it. She explained that fire alone wouldn't reduce someone to a clean skeleton unless they were entirely incinerated into bone dust. She pointed out that there was no way someone would come into the field without armor or a weapon, suggesting instead that the person had likely been player killed and looted. She concluded that they should report it to the cleanup squad. He asked her why she was so calm about it, and she told him that murder happened far more often in the field than people realized. It was difficult to distinguish from cult activity, making it hard to track. When he asked if she had ever come close to being player killed herself, she brightly replied that she had, and that it was by someone from her own party. That revelation stunned him. She continued, explaining that while they were out hunting, a party member had suddenly tried to strike her from behind. She remarked that it was easier to tell enemies apart when fighting monsters since monsters were always enemies. Humans, on the other hand, could never be fully trusted. One never knew when someone might turn and loot a corpse. Then she smiled at him warmly and proudly asked if he agreed that she was pretty. The unexpected shift in topic confused him. She clarified that when she was attacked, it wasn't just the items they were after. That incident had been her first time killing someone. Her brother, already familiar with her stories, simply listened in silence. She then shouted that the trash who came at her basically begged to be killed, so the aftermath hadn't been as traumatic as she expected. She warned Juyeon to be careful, noting that there were plenty of lunatics roaming the field. She also reminded him that if things ever got dangerous, he should hide behind her brother. Juyeon, who knew he couldn't exactly reveal that his average physical stat was over 35, responded confidently, saying he didn't think he'd die even if Kainal showed up right now. Hyeji gave him points for his boldness and agreed with a nod. He tried to tell her that he was being serious, but just then, a small metallic device rolled to his feet. Confused, he looked down and saw the system notify him that it was a pheromone bomb, grade B, a device filled with pheromones that applied a charm, grade B effect, upon detonation. The bomb exploded moments later, releasing a cloud of potent pheromone powder into the air. Suddenly, tree monsters emerged from all directions and began converging on their location. Yeji's brother quickly recognized the danger and shouted that it was a monster wave, moving in front to defend them. He instructed the others to stay behind him for now. But Juyeon didn't listen. Ignoring the warning, he charged ahead, proclaiming that he could handle the monsters on his own. In his excitement, he didn't realize that someone had aimed an arrow at him. Just as he distanced himself from the siblings, the arrow was released and struck him in the nape. Though it didn't pierce his skin and fell to the ground harmlessly, he immediately realized it was an ambush. He scoffed, calling his attackers idiots for only using one arrow, clearly unaware of his physical stats. Unfortunately, the arrow had applied slow and pain, grade A effects, both of which would last for 3 minutes. His knees buckled beneath him, and he collapsed, trembling from the pain. As the world blurred around him, a man stepped out from the shadows with a broad grin, declaring with malicious glee that it was hunting time. The siblings rushed toward Juyeon, but a tree monster charged at them before they could reach him. Fortunately, Hyeji noticed in time. She used her fire spear to incinerate it. The other tree monsters became more enraged and closed in quickly. Hyeji cursed under her breath, knowing that even on a normal day, these monsters were difficult to manage, and protecting Juyeon at the same time was nearly impossible. She realized she had to act fast. She instructed her brother to clear a path. He responded by lifting Juyeon onto his shoulder and told her to follow him. With sheer force, he began pushing through the tree monsters, shielding them while Hyeji continued burning the creatures from behind. Another pheromone bomb was thrown at them, but Hyeji reacted quickly and destroyed it with a burst of firestorm before it could detonate. She succeeded, but just then, the masked leader appeared. The masked figure confronted them, questioning where they thought they were going and accusing them of trying to flee without putting up a fight. Hyeji's brother demanded to know who he was. The man stated that he had business with the one her brother was carrying, referring to Juyeon, and claimed that if they handed him over, he might let the others live. The comment angered Hyeji's brother. Hyeji launched another fire spear at the intruder, but he remained still and effortlessly deflected the attack. She recognized his movement and suspected he had been present during the Kainel raid. The man taunted her, noting that while she was attractive, she was clearly clueless. He concluded that she would have to die as well and ordered his men to trigger another pheromone bomb. As the bomb detonated, the nearby tree monsters were drawn in once more. The man remarked that they couldn't rely on pheromone bombs forever and suggested they try to survive a little longer. Hyeji's brother did everything he could to protect Juyeon, pressing forward with his shield. Hyeji behind them rapidly cast fire magic to burn down the charging monsters. Juyeon trembled in pain, his body overwhelmed by the effects of the arrow. His limbs no longer responded properly, and everything felt like it was burning. He questioned how it had come to this and wondered if this would be the end. Then, distant screams from Hyeji and her brother reached his ears. Slowly, he opened his eyes. A splash of warm blood struck his face. In front of him were the corpses of slain monsters. Disoriented, he tried to comprehend what had just happened. His mind drifted back to Hyeji's earlier warning about hiding behind her brother when things became dangerous. That memory fueled his anger as everything that had just happened came rushing back to him. Hyeji, noticing him stir, asked if he was regaining consciousness and whether he could stand. Rather than respond, he reached for his phone. He admitted that it was shameless of him, but said he had a favor to ask. He pleaded with both of them to keep what they were about to witness a secret. Meanwhile, the masked man approached with his group, mocking the siblings for still holding up while carrying Juyeon. As a twisted reward, he promised to ensure it wouldn't hurt much. Hyeji cursed at him, but he ignored her, turning to Juyeon. He remarked that Juyeon had finally risen and sarcastically asked if it hurt badly. Juyeon admitted that it did. The man laughed at his pain, claiming Juyeon was pathetic for whining when he was about to be reduced to bones anyway. Juyeon remained silent and slowly raised one finger into the air. The attackers immediately raised their shields, expecting a fireball, and called him a fool for thinking it would work. Juyeon calmly questioned their certainty. Multiple magic circles appeared above them. The group looked up and quickly realized it wasn't a fireball. Recognition dawned on them. This was the mage who had taken Al's ring. Before they could act, Juyeon lowered his finger. The meteor rain skill activated. Meteors rained from the sky. The attackers scattered in panic. The masked man charged toward Juyeon, yelling that he was insane and questioning whether he planned to die along with everyone else. He tried to insult him, but before he could get close, Juyeon activated Bloody Fury, instantly tearing the man apart. As the meteors struck the ground, explosions erupted all around them. A few seconds later, the ground was shattered, and nothing was moving. However, Juyeon and the siblings were safe, standing clear of the devastated area. He looked down at his hand, then let himself collapse onto the ground in relief. After confirming they had survived, he realized that without the teleport skill, he would have died. Earlier, just past midnight, while adjusting his setup, he had copied Fireball and Explosion into Bloodstained Battle and noticed he had one skill slot left. He wondered what to fill it with and then saw a video of a user attempting to shoot an arrow at a bald man before teleporting away. He told himself it wasn't about lacking confidence in hunting but about preparing for emergencies. Everyone needed insurance. Without hesitation, he copied the teleport skill. The skill designated a mark on a target and when activated, allowed him to teleport to the marked location. He shouted in excitement at the discovery. It was essentially mass teleportation. Then, the system granted him additional bonuses, which thrilled him even more. With bonus slots now available, he couldn't help but dance, convinced that today must be his lucky day. Back in the present, the siblings looked at him suspiciously. He told them he would explain everything later. Hyeji agreed and, energized, encouraged them to pick up the items the attackers had dropped. But before they could move, they heard gasps from below. Users had gathered, staring up at the massive crater left in the ground, speculating whether Al had come through it because of the pit's enormous size. Juyeon, watching from above, realized he had saved his own life, but also knew it was now only a matter of time before his identity was discovered. He felt a wave of dread. He was truly in trouble. Just then, the system displayed a notification. He had reached level 20, and his unique subtrait had been unlocked. It was skill storage, graded at S. Later, inside the penthouse, he explained everything to the siblings. However, they stared at him in confusion. Hyeji asked if he had said Skill Master. He confirmed and clarified that it was an EX class that allowed him to copy and use all types of skills. Hyeji, surprised, asked if that was why he could use healing, damage, and buffs all at once, and if he could even use her skills. He told her it was possible. She pointed at her brother in disbelief and asked if he could copy even the skills her brother possessed. He confirmed again, but noted that being a tank without the right gear was still difficult. Intrigued, she questioned whether such a class was even possible and asked how many skills he could copy. He told her that the details were a secret, leaving her disappointed. Her brother then shifted the conversation to a more serious note, asking if Juyeon knew anything about the group that had attacked them. Juyeon responded that he believed they were the same people involved in the Kainal raid. Hyeji added that she had a hunch about their origin. When her brother asked where she thought they were from, she answered, "The Raider Guild." She went on to explain that he had probably heard of them, as there were rumors of a group collecting boss-level items. Juyeon agreed and mentioned that he had even encountered them once. Hyeji revealed that the group had once offered to recruit them, but only under the condition that they hand over any boss drops. That group had been the Raider Guild. He then asked how that connected to the player-killing group. Hyeji explained that among the items recovered from their attackers were several boss-tier items. Given the low drop rates of such items, it was rare, if not impossible, for multiple groups to gather them unless something else was at play. She added that the Raider Guild was a global organization with branches all over the world, and that they didn't even know who their true leader was. Upon hearing that he had made enemies with such a group, Juyeon turned pale with fear. A moment later, he finally lay down on Hyeji's large, soft bed, realizing that he had stirred up far too many incidents. His identity was on the verge of being exposed. He reminded himself that he needed to become stronger before that happened, and his best chance would be through skill rank-ups. He opened his status window. It displayed a total of 30,000 SP. He felt relieved. His steady accumulation of SP from daily quests had paid off. He knew he needed to ensure a consistent supply of SP, just in case completing daily quests became difficult in the future. He used 5,000 SP to level up his unique trait, Skill Master, to level 1. This upgrade increased his passive income to level 4, now giving him 1,000 SP every 24 hours at midnight. Still, he quietly wished SP would accumulate on its own while he was simply lying down. To reward the skill that had contributed the most during the recent battle, he used his remaining 25,000 SP on enhancing the blessing of his Skill Master trait. It leveled up from 2 to 3. With the upgrade, it now randomly granted 2 unique traits to a copied skill, allowing one of them to be selected and applied. Feeling refreshed, he leaned back and considered whether D-grade traits must be incredible, especially since even E-grade traits had already proven significantly effective. Next, he accessed his new unique trait, Skill Storage, rated grade S. The description indicated that it allowed him to use 1 copy count to store a skill. Stored skills would retain trait grants and maintain blue level effects or higher until replaced. However, storing a new skill would consume 1 copy count, and copy count recharge would not apply. He sighed, thinking that if only he had unlocked this earlier, he could have permanently saved Bloodstained Battle at grade EX. He also knew that copying via video only replicated the skill at its original grade. Despite that, he already knew what skill he wanted to store. He chose Resistance to Change. The skill storage applied an amplification effect at grade D and added an F-grade optional trait. Now that the skill was stored, he could use it unlimited times from storage. He also decided to store Radiant Power and Bloodstained Battle. His plan was to keep rolling for rank-up bonuses through copying and to spend the next few days resting while doing so. Unfortunately for him, that rest was short-lived. Just a few hours later, he found himself standing beside the siblings in front of Muhammad Al. Al greeted them warmly, noting that it was their first time meeting in person. Juyeon panicked internally, wondering why Al had come to their house. He recalled that just as he had decided to rest, a visitor arrived, and to his surprise, it had been Al once again. Al acknowledged that Juyeon had caused quite a stir this time. However, he assured them that the rumors linking Juyeon to both the mage from the Kainal battle and the notorious Psycho had been quietly handled so they wouldn't spread. Juyeon was about to express his thanks, but before he could, Hyeji thanked Al on his behalf and asked what his true reason for visiting was. Al responded that there was no need for suspicion. He simply wanted to hear his friend's thoughts. He informed them that the ones who had attacked them were from a global-scale guild known as Raider. Hyeji noted that Al knew of them too. Al continued, revealing that he was already at war with the Raider Guild and, through that conflict, had obtained some interesting intelligence. He explained that the Raider group was secretly gathering at the Ganjiam Resort ski field in search of a hidden treasure left behind by their mysterious leader. This revelation shocked Juyeon, but the Kim siblings remained wary. Hyeji asked why Al was sharing such critical information and questioned why he couldn't take action himself. Al apologized, explaining that although he was willing to share intel through casual conversations, his actions attracted far too much attention for direct involvement. Suyeon then reminded Al of his upcoming schedule, prompting him to prepare to leave. Al stood and lamented how the best moments always seem to end too quickly. He expressed his wish for a more relaxed conversation next time. Before departing, Al looked at Juyeon and told him that how they chose to use the information was entirely up to them. He expressed his hope to hear their decision, whether they would choose to wipe out the enemy together or prioritize their own safety. Meanwhile, in front of the open special field, Tower of Destruction Grade A, masked individuals gathered at the side, waiting for someone. Eventually, a figure emerged from the field, carrying something behind them. It was the Raider Guild leader, Lin Xiaolong, who calmly walked out, dragging the red corpse of a dragon behind her. One of the masked men respectfully greeted her and addressed her. In response, she raised a finger, slamming him against the wall with force. She corrected him, stating that the former guildmaster was dead, which meant she was now the head of the Raider Guild. From that moment forward, they were to refer to her as boss. She released the dragon's corpse and reported that the monster's attack patterns had been identified up to the 20th floor. She ordered them to begin analyzing the monster materials immediately. She then turned to one of her subordinates and asked about the suppression progress of the old man's faction. The man reported that 98% of the followers from the previous generation had been eliminated, with the remaining remnants scheduled for disposal soon. She commended him on the good work and stated that the old man's hidden treasure in Korea must still be untouched. She instructed them to proceed with retrieving it as planned. Everyone accepted her command without hesitation. As she walked, her thoughts turned to the changing era. The time of making money like powerless, monkey-like users was over. Now was the age of superpowers. Those who conquered special fields and seized boss items would hold true power. She was certain that the throne belonged to her. Meanwhile, Juyeon and the Kim siblings arrived at the ski resort. Juyeon was in awe. It was his first time seeing the place. Hyeji asked if the view wasn't stunning and commented that it was a shame they couldn't enjoy themselves because of the monsters. Hyeji excitedly declared that they should finish their task quickly and return later to have fun. However, her brother expressed concern, still uncertain whether it had been a good idea for just the three of them to come alone. Days earlier, Hyeji had proposed that they strike the Raider Guild first. She revealed that she had sold the boss item dropped by one of the attackers under her own name when disposing of it. Her brother had been shocked, asking what she had done. She had calmly replied that she was already almost certainly a target, and that she and Juyeon now shared the same fate. Back in the present, her brother slapped his own face in frustration, realizing he had let his guard down, assuming things would resolve themselves naturally. Hyeji gently asked what he was worried about, and assured him that everything would be fine. They were three veterans who had already been through thick and thin. Hyeji then sprinted toward the field entrance, informing the others that to enter they needed to head in the direction visible from the lift on that side. However, a man stepped in their way and warned them that the field was under the control of the Enjoy Guild. He told them to leave unless they wanted to die. Hyeji questioned whether they were part of the user association or what gave them the right to claim control over an open field. Her words stopped abruptly as the man casually swung his sword, slicing off a few strands of her hair. The man chuckled and reminded her again that the ski resort field belonged to their guild. Juyeon, watching from behind, felt anger rise within him. He knew he wasn't a hero, not yet. But he questioned whether he shouldn't be the one to protect the things he cared about. The man teasingly told Hyeji that if she was upset, she could come over for a hug, promising to soothe her personally since she was pretty. Hyeji's brother cursed under his breath and prepared to confront the man, but before he could move, Juyeon pulled up his hood and released his fire magic. He told himself that if someone pointed a sword at one of his people and he had the power to break that sword, then there was no reason to stay idle. He approached the group, fireball in hand, and those nearby began whispering in recognition. This was the infamous psychopath. He asked the group at the entrance whether control wasn't something that only those with real power could claim, and if they wanted a taste of what it really felt like to be controlled. The arrogant man stammered, insisting that their guild had arrived first, so the area was theirs. Juyeon responded by hurling a fireball in front of them as a warning. The man was shocked that he had actually thrown it. Juyeon warned them that if he ever saw them again, he would kill them. The men, now trembling, quickly nodded and ran off in fear. Hyeji looked at her brother and remarked that Juyeon seemed different from usual. Her brother, however, kept his eyes fixed on Juyeon. Hyeji then called out to Juyeon and told him that his display of dominance was insane. Juyeon glanced back awkwardly and replied, a little shyly, that perhaps he could be quite dominant. Juyeon found it strange himself. It had been his first time threatening someone, but he had done it flawlessly. He wondered if intimidation might actually be his hidden talent. At the same time, inside the field, the Enjoy Guild was battling monsters. After several minutes, they defeated the last wave. One of the members laughed and shouted how refreshing it felt to not have to share contribution points with anyone else. He remarked that they should have taken control of the field sooner.
Just then, a powerful fireball was hurled at him. Fortunately, he managed to leap out of the way. Furious, he demanded to know who had attacked. The attacker, calm and unwavering, simply asked who he thought he was and said he was just someone there to hunt. The Enjoy Guild member, still angry, asked if the newcomer hadn't heard anything from outside and reminded him that the field was under their control. The stranger responded with only a smile, which made the guild member uneasy. He tried to de-escalate by suggesting the stranger leave, warning him that the area was filled with level 40 monsters and it wasn't worth the effort, as there were plenty of other fields. The stranger continued to walk closer, and then an older man appeared from behind, stating that they should see who actually ends up leaving. The old man's forces charged without hesitation and began slaughtering the Enjoy Guild members. The old man turned to his right-hand man and remarked on the abundance of useless trash. The right-hand man apologized for failing to detect the guild's presence earlier and reported that the Enjoy Guild had apparently started controlling the field. The old man gave a new order. He instructed his right-hand man to divide the team into 2 groups, to search and eliminate all obstacles so their mission wouldn't be disrupted. Looking up at the mountain in the distance, the old man declared that they must reach the deepest and highest point within the field. They had to find the imitation bracelet, and they had to do it quickly. On the other hand, Hyeji and Juyeon were both excited as they entered the field. However, Kim Sang-wook remained cautious and reminded them that they needed to start thinking about their next move, as the raider side was not a small group like theirs, which meant that a preemptive strike was essential. Sang-wook then asked how they planned to distinguish between the Enjoy Guild and the Raider Guild. Juyeon replied that since both guilds had the same goal, treasure hunting, they wouldn't care about monster experience points. Because of that, Juyeon had a wild plan in mind. In the middle of the field, a guild was scanning the surroundings, remaining alert. One of them heard something approaching, and when he looked back, he saw a group of monsters rushing toward them. At the same time, Juyeon and his group observed from a cliff, watching the monsters attack the guild. He was satisfied to see that the pheromone bomb skill the guild had used was now working against them. Sang-wook pointed out that they still didn't know whether this was a raider guild, but Juyeon replied that if the guild didn't avoid the monster horde, it meant one of 2 things. He explained that those 2 possibilities were either a party prepared for experience grinding or a group with business important enough to take the hit. Hyeji noticed that the men were all above the field's recommended level based on the skills they were using. This made Sang-wook realize that they had entered the field despite being unable to gain experience points, which meant they were there for very important business. They decided to follow the guild, and as they walked, Juyeon dropped something on the ground for the guild. Hyeji was surprised by his action and began to wonder if he had always been like that, as he seemed like a different person. A moment later, the guild reached the summit and rushed into a cave. Juyeon was relieved they had followed the right group, and when Hyeji asked about their next move, he laughed darkly and replied that he had saved something just for moments like that. However, he suddenly felt something strange and asked himself why he felt so calm, even though he was about to retaliate against the people who had once tried to kill him. He snapped out of his thoughts when Hyeji called out to him, and he explained that he had just been momentarily lost in thought. He took out his crossbow and reminded himself that it wasn't the time for distractions. They then began to slowly approach the guild. Meanwhile, the guild members were discussing their progress, unaware that Juyeon was already aiming his crossbow at them. He released the arrows and successfully hit his targets. The bow of weakening inflicted a stun, slowed their movements, and caused pain for 3 minutes. Upon seeing their reaction, he deduced that their stamina and strength were above 30. They approached the debuffed men and decided to beat them down until their health was nearly 0. One of the men trembled and begged for mercy, but it was already too late for him. Deeper in the cave, other guild members were retrieving the treasure. When one of them tried to contact the guards, they realized communication was lost and assumed they had been discovered. They rushed to the cave entrance, ready to protect the treasure at all costs. When they arrived, they found both guards collapsed on the ground. Hyeji immediately launched her firestorm to gain the upper hand, but the lead enemy blocked the attack with a shield, shocking her. The enemy mage counterattacked with a thunder spell, and when Sang-wook tried to block it, he failed and was neutralized. The enemy mage shouted to his team to subdue their opponents before the tank's paralysis wore off. Both the enemy tank and fighter charged at them. However, Juyeon calmly asked if they really thought they were pushovers just because their tank was down. He activated his splendid authority, which broke his limit and applied random buffs, increasing his power rank by 1 for a minute. He unleashed a barrage of large fireballs, but the enemy mage mocked him, claiming his E-rank skills were useless against their shield. Juyeon ignored the taunt and released his overpowering fireballs, which instantly blasted the enemy tank and fighter back and severely burned them. The enemy mage was in disbelief, realizing his power shouldn't have been reduced by 95%. In response, Juyeon simply thanked him and promised to put the treasure to good use.
He then raised his hand, clenched his fist, and triggered a massive explosion that engulfed the enemy in flames and destruction. Elsewhere, the old man and his group had just finished dealing with a monster horde and were preparing to follow the retrieval team. Suddenly, they witnessed the explosion erupting from the summit. The old man immediately ordered everyone to stop what they were doing and head toward the summit. Back at the summit, Juyeon and his team were busy taking the treasures from the men one by one. Just a few minutes later, he was excited as he collected a large amount of loot. However, Hyeji noted that disposing of the items would be troublesome, as she didn't want the guilds to track their location. Just then, Sang-wook showed her the enemy tanker's shield with admiration on his face, and she told him with a smile that he could keep it as long as he wanted. She then handed a bracelet to Juyeon. It was the Mimic's bracelet, grade SS. It was a special piece of equipment that didn't count toward the accessory limit, capable of copying one equipped item and duplicating 20% of that item's effect. He was shocked and asked if he could really have it. She winked and replied that they didn't have any great item worth copying, so it was better to give it to someone with an SS rank item. She added that he was the ace of their party, which touched him deeply. He thanked her repeatedly for her kindness. Sang-wook then reminded them that they should leave once the item distribution was finished, as reinforcements could arrive at any moment. They both agreed. After gathering everything and preparing to leave, Juyeon noticed something on one of the men. It was a mini body camera. For their safety, he decided to destroy them all. Later at the Raiders Guild, a vase was hurled at a man but missed. An enraged Xiaolong asked if she had heard him correctly. The man knelt and bowed his head deeply, stammering as he apologized and explained that the Mimic's bracelet had been stolen. This enraged her even more. She couldn't believe they had failed despite sending an elite squad capable of taking down a field boss. The man further explained that the group holding off the monster wave had survived, while their advance party, sent to retrieve the treasure, was annihilated. He added that after analyzing the survivors' body cam footage, they discovered evidence that the monster wave had been triggered by pheromone bombs. She then asked about the cameras from the annihilated team, and he replied that they were all completely destroyed. Xiaolong composed herself and sat down, realizing that their opponent had used skills and items to redirect the battle footage and had even managed to disable the body cameras, making the area untraceable. She stepped toward the trembling man and told him that traces of explosives meant the culprit must be Psycho-Pass. Then stepping on his head, she firmly ordered him to analyze Psycho-Pass thoroughly to avoid making the same mistake again, and to bring back both the bracelet and Psycho-Pass's head. Meanwhile, at the siblings' home, Hyeji informed them that she planned to store the boss items instead of selling them. Juyeon warned that if she did that, they could have stacked up a lot of defensive gear. However, she explained that this was to avoid being tracked. She had already let a few clues slip intentionally, but anything more would have been too risky. Sang-wook was irritated, realizing that had been her plan from the beginning. She assured them she had no intention of giving up hunting and asked Juyeon if his level was 20, to which he replied yes. She explained that field levels are divided into units of 10, and asked him what the level limit was for earning rewards in F-rank fields. He eagerly raised his hand and answered that it was 20. She then asked how many F-rank field bosses he had collected so far. He began counting them in order of rank to be sure. He recalled that he had fought the D-rank Queen Spider and Lizard King, the E-rank Mountain Shadow Wolf, and the F-rank Black Grizzly, Mudflat Crab, One-Eyed Crow, and Mouse Mole. He knew that Canal was a special field and therefore didn't count toward the field limit. Based on this, he realized he was still one F-rank short. Hyeji explained that if his level went beyond the acquisition limit, he might not be able to return, so they needed to gather the remaining boss souls quickly. As a solution, their upcoming spec-up plan would involve raiding bosses in low-profile fields that wouldn't attract too much attention. She then excitedly suggested that they sweep all the way up through E-rank fields. Without hesitation, they headed straight to the E-rank field, Sinduri Coastal Zone. There, Juyeon faced off against the field boss, the Sand Giant, and just a few minutes later, he defeated it, gaining stamina and becoming thrilled. Hyeji was impressed by his speed and asked how long it had taken him to defeat the boss. He replied that it had been exactly 5 minutes and 45 seconds. She grabbed his arm in excitement, congratulated him on completing the E-rank soul collection, and suggested they throw a party to celebrate. He was shy, but felt confident that the Mimic's bracelet was insanely effective. He assumed that Hyeji believed he had bested the elemental ring thanks to the bracelet. The system then showed that his stats had increased and granted him an additional stat effect. He lovingly kissed the bracelet, realizing that his stats had gone up by 15 points because of it. He began to wonder if he could become even stronger than Al. As he continued walking, he noticed other people nearby and wondered if a juicy skill point jackpot quest might appear. Ego seemed to hear his wish. Suddenly, a system panel popped up in front of him. It was a main quest, to conquer the E-rank special field. His mission was to eliminate the invaders threatening Earth and purify the plagued land of Hell. The rewards were 99,999 skill points, 1 trait upgrade selector, and 1 random skill trait enhancement ticket. Hyeji noticed his surprise and asked if he had received some kind of skill upgrade. He replied that he had gotten a quest that would boost his specs if completed. Hyeji was confused, not knowing quests like that even existed, but he didn't care. All he could think about was the whopping 1 million skill point reward. He immediately pulled out his phone to check where the E-rank special field was located and found that it was a 3-hour flight away. However, he was shocked to see that the weather in the special field was minus 40 degrees. After explaining everything to Hyeji and Sangwook, she reminded Juyeon of all the E-rank field boss information, and he agreed with her that the quest was insane. She told him that even though he had completed a spec up, he still lacked the experience needed to operate an airship, especially in a special field overseas, and warned him that it would be difficult to gain entry without proper recognition. She then considered someone who could receive permission as an individual rather than a guild unit, and the only person who came to mind was Hyesung. Still, both she and Sangwook quickly decided to think about it later. She then informed Juyeon that it was time to move on to Spec Up Stage 2. She pointed out that he tended to buff and then blast everything with fireballs instead of combining various skills, which surprised him. He hadn't expected her to notice. She suggested he increase the number of S rank or higher skills he could copy, but he replied that high-level users usually hid their skills and that he had to dig through UserTube to find anything useful. She agreed, explaining that not everyone was an attention seeker like Muhammad Al. Most users kept their skills hidden, but he considered her words to be near blasphemous. She reminded him about buff vendors, noting that he used to be a healer vendor selling buffs for money. However, she admitted that she couldn't think of anyone who sold S-rank or higher buffs. Juyeon thought for a moment and then remembered Hyoju, who had said she'd accompany him any time. He quickly got their attention and showed them his phone, telling them he knew someone who could provide S-rank buffs. Meanwhile, Ego informed her lord that the hero had accepted the second main quest, and the powerful being responded that Juyeon's memories were gradually returning, and with them, Earth was drawing closer to salvation. The being asked Ego if she longed for something else, and she honestly answered that she wanted to meet the hero who once saved her world. Ego then asked if Juyeon was truly the same person she once knew, since his past memories, essential to identity, were lost. Her lord replied that Ego's true self was now being used to maintain dimensional balance, meaning the version speaking now was just a fragment. Her lord then asked if it was really her or not, to which Ego replied that she was still a god no matter what. Her lord responded that it was the same with Juyeon. Ego again asked if Juyeon had made the same choice as before. Her lord replied that it was never forced. Everything was determined by Juyeon's choices. That had been the promise between him and the world she had created. Her lord then told Ego that Juyeon was indeed the hero she missed, and whether she chose to help him or not was up to her. Ego then transformed into human form and answered Juyeon's call as Hyoju. The next day, the three of them were waiting at the park. Hyeji was suspicious when he said that Hyoju had come from Seoul Grand Park without even paying the travel fee, when people were usually charged at least 800 won. Juyeon proudly claimed that it meant he was popular, but Sangwook agreed with Hyeji, saying that Hyoju seemed suspicious too. Suddenly, Hyoju appeared and clung to Juyeon's arm, telling him he had called her way too late. Hyeji, unnoticed, grew jealous. Blushing, Juyeon explained that he had been busy, and Hyoju teased him about how red his face was. Hyeji quickly interrupted by greeting Hyoju and asking if she was an SS rank buffer. Hyoju greeted her back, sarcastically referring to her as Juyeon's friend, but Hyeji didn't back down, asserting that she and Juyeon were closer than just friends. Juyeon tried to introduce Hyeji as someone who managed him, but before he could finish, Hyeji smacked him on the back, causing him to collapse briefly. Sangwook turned to Hyoju and explained that they needed buffs for a reinforcement plan. She asked how much they were thinking of spending, and Sangwook pushed Juyeon forward, saying he should consult with the finance manager, meaning Juyeon. As both women stared at him, Juyeon realized he hadn't thought things through. He awkwardly tried to explain that they needed something like a full bundle deal, a buff that could boost everything at once, just like a full set at the mart. He eventually trailed off, realizing that everything he had just said was nonsense. Fortunately for him, Hyoju understood what he meant and revealed her skill. Heavenly Melody, SS grade, a song filled with blessings. It increased all stats and had enhanced effects if the user possessed a trait of SS rank or higher in buff type skills. Juyeon was stunned when he felt the powerful buff enter his body. The system showed that all his skill effects had increased by 20%, his buff duration had doubled, and mana requirements had decreased by 10%. Hyoju smiled proudly and recalled a memory. When she had once asked the old Juyeon if he was satisfied with a defensive buff, he had replied that the best defense was a good offense. Just like before, the present Juyeon thanked her and assured her that the buff was more than enough. Meanwhile, in the user gallery, a user named Egg Sheet from Hell withdrew his support for Psycho Pass, in other words, Juyeon, and accused him of monopolizing the field just to leech off others and boost his guild. The same user also uploaded a video of Juyeon wiping out monsters while smiling, trying to ruin his reputation online. E-Rank Special Field, Plagued Land of Hell, a region with an average temperature of -30 degrees and harsh weather conditions that make long-term training and combat operations impossible. It is a vast area where locating the field boss is extremely difficult, leading to the sacrifice of countless users. As time passed, the nation implemented special measures. Meanwhile, in some fields, the news showed that people were waiting for the field boss to appear. Juyeon knew that after a certain amount of time in a special field, regular monsters would begin to invade outside its boundaries. Hyeji guessed that those people believed the boss would appear if they just waited, and Sangwook agreed, saying the theory made sense if repeated attacks inside the field had already failed. Sangwook then slammed his shield into the ground and expressed his opposition to entering special fields without full preparation. He warned them not to forget that they only had one life, regardless of how important the quest was. Hyeji asked who in their right mind would take on such a quest, but Juyeon simply sighed as the system notified him that he had acquired the SS grade skill Focused Combat, with one prior attempt. As Hyeji continued ranting to Sangwook about how people shouldn't be users if they only care about safety, she noticed that Juyeon wasn't listening. When she asked what he was doing, he replied that he was testing out the gacha system since the copy cooldown had reset. He hadn't expected to level up, but when he attempted to copy again, he acquired only Focused Combat and lost his balance in frustration. Cursing the system, he then saw that Focused Combat had leveled up, and now he had copied Focused Combat EX. While Sangwook was still trying to talk Hyeji out of going to the E-Rank special field, Juyeon suddenly shouted that he had copied Focused Combat EX and had seen Haesung's face enough already, cutting off their discussion. Hyeji reminded them that as foreigners, they couldn't enter overseas fields. But just then, she received a call. When Sangwook tried to stop her, she turned and quickly answered it. Moments later, she hung up and excitedly announced that the call was from Haesung. She revealed that the E-Rank special field, Plagued Land of Hell, had opened to foreigners, with priority given to mages, and that assault teams were being recruited. Juyeon was thrilled, but Sangwook looked visibly dissatisfied. While the siblings argued about it, Juyeon realized that even if mages were being prioritized, people were still glaring at him, as if being a healer made him unwelcome. He opened the system and moved Focused Combat to skill storage, thinking it was time to put it to use. Later, in the theater, Juyeon was amazed that they had rented an entire concert hall. Hyeji explained that the members were elites who no longer needed ability tests, and meetings in the field had become pointless. Teasing her, Juyeon asked why they had even called her, since she hadn't done anything last time. That irritated her, and she pinched his cheeks in retaliation. Suddenly, Haesung appeared on stage, introducing himself as the raid leader for the Plagued Land of Hell. He announced that the raid was scheduled to begin in 10 days, once survival supplies were ready, and they would depart immediately after. To boost morale, Haesung declared that the gathered members were the finest raiders carefully selected from Sky Island, and if they trusted his command and showed their true strength, they would conquer the Plagued Land of Hell together. Juyeon applauded along with the others. Then Haesung's gaze shifted toward the audience, specifically glaring at Juyeon, as he asked everyone to briefly introduce themselves before field information was shared. Haesung went first, introducing himself as a level 39 melee dealer with the SS rank advanced trait Assassinate. One by one, the others introduced themselves. Juyeon found it strange, wondering why they were having classroom-style introductions and if it was just him or if Haesung was truly glaring at him. The man in front of Juyeon confessed to being a fan of Haesung, but Haesung didn't even look at him, his glare still fixed on Juyeon. Eventually, the introductions reached Sangwook and Hyeji. No matter how Juyeon looked at it, it felt like everyone was trying to show him up. Realizing he couldn't avoid it, he decided to meet expectations. He launched a powerful fireball into the air and introduced himself confidently as Psycho Pass, an SS rank mage, finally earning Haesung's approval. After the meeting, as they were getting ready to leave for dinner, Haesung approached and bluntly asked Juyeon if he was the one who had stolen the boss's item, along with the masked individual from Sky Island. The question caught them off guard, but Juyeon calmly responded that he was definitely the weakest mage there, and that he hadn't started with those men, nor had he stolen anything. He explained that he had noticed suspicious individuals capturing Kainel. Since the raid was already underway and couldn't be stopped, he joined in, hoping to help. They had mistaken him for one of their own, and the item had gone to whoever had the highest contribution. He added that if his involvement was a problem, he wouldn't join the raid team at all. Juyeon knew it was important to clear things up if they were going to work together. If not, he would find another path. Haesung then revealed that 2 of their guild members had died during the battle against Kainel. He clarified that they only needed to confirm whether Juyeon had collaborated with the enemy. Satisfied with the explanation, Hyesung turned away and said he wouldn't object to Juyeon's participation if that wasn't the case. Juyeon understood that Hyesung still didn't fully trust him, but he also knew that he would act the same if their roles were reversed. Hyeji proudly slapped his back, telling him he was so cool. Juyeon, meanwhile, was just relieved that the situation had been resolved. Sangwook sighed in relief, admitting it went smoother than expected. Hyeji asked if he was disappointed that Hyesung hadn't objected. Sangwook replied that he was more worried that Hyesung might have player-killed Juyeon, but fortunately, it had gone well. As they prepared to leave, Sangwook, still looking troubled, said they should go. Hyeji noticed his expression and asked if something was bothering him. He replied that he was wondering whether it would have been better to reveal his true identity earlier instead of hiding it. Juyeon had expected people to be shocked to learn he was psychopath, but instead, their reactions were indifferent. Later, he checked the user community and saw that news had spread about his involvement in the plagued Land of Hell raid and his confrontation with Hyesung. He fumed, realizing that the audience in the theater had just been spectators, and he shouldn't have said anything. Meanwhile, at the Raiders Guild, several men knelt before Xiaolong. She was pleased that Psycho-Pass had stopped hiding. She informed her followers that their leader would also be joining the main raid to bring Psycho-Pass into the cult. She ordered them to investigate the other participating raid teams in detail. They needed to eliminate as many variables as possible. Days later, Juyeon and the users arrived at the location of the special field. After an hour-long flight followed by another hour on a bus, they finally reached the overseas raid site. Juyeon's first impression was that it was freaking cold. He jokingly asked Hyeji if throwing a few fireballs would warm the place up. Hyeji laughed, thinking it was a joke. But Juyeon wasn't joking. An old man approached and informed them that the area wasn't always this cold, but due to the special field's influence, the abnormal weather had taken over. The climate contamination was spreading, and ghost towns like theirs were increasing in number. The old man bowed and pleaded with them to eliminate the plagued land, saying they were the town's only hope. Juyeon was momentarily speechless, not expecting such desperation. Suddenly, someone arrived and reassured the old man, claiming they had come at the call of God for his salvation. A woman and her followers encouraged the old man to place his trust in them. They were the Truth Order, a guild formed by users with holy attributes. In the beginning, they used cheap, low-level skills and were little more than a small cult with a few believers. But one user changed everything, a miracle healer of presumed S-class or higher, known as Saintess Lim Suha. Hyeji was amazed to see the famed Saintess, but Juyeon was still trying to remember where he had seen her before. Once he did, he casually referred to Suha's group as cultists. Hyeji immediately covered his mouth in panic. Suha, offended, turned away, but the leader of the Truth Order only laughed, calling Juyeon a little lamb who had yet to witness a miracle. He added that the Lord loves even someone like him. Suha walked away angrily, and before leaving, the leader told them that the Truth Order would enter the field first. They needed rest until the land was purified. After the Truth Order left, Hyeji repeatedly slapped Juyeon, yelling at him to watch his mouth. Juyeon defended himself, saying he was just telling the truth. A man nearby agreed with him, telling Hyeji that Juyeon wasn't wrong. The Truth Order's habit of gathering followers and leeching off them was a well-known story. However, it remained a mystery why someone like the Saintess would stay in such a place. Hyesung stepped forward and asked who the man was. The man introduced himself as the raid leader of the Raider Guild, joining as part of the second unit. He offered a handshake, but Hyesung refused, simply introducing himself in return. The Raider leader mentioned the unfortunate incident at the Kainal battlefield, but expressed a desire to avoid unnecessary conflict until the boss raid. He suggested that both sides proceed with their own strategies. As he glanced toward Juyeon, he added that as long as no one crossed the line or caused trouble, everything would go smoothly. With that, the Raider leader turned and left with his masked members, who continued to glare as they walked away. Juyeon told Hyeji that he already knew the Raiders would be involved, but he also knew they would be a pain. Hyeji reassured him that the Raiders wouldn't do anything reckless in a public area, but they should still be cautious and never go off alone. Hyesung gathered everyone and emphasized the importance of finding and defeating the boss as quickly as possible. With 3 teams attacking the field, they needed to unpack and begin the briefing immediately. Field Raid, D-Day. Before entering, Hyesung ordered everyone to do a final gear check. Once everyone confirmed their readiness, Hyesung announced the start of the operation and pushed open the gate to the field. Juyeon was immediately struck by the intensified snowstorms within the plagued Land of Hell. Up ahead, they saw figures in the distance and assumed they were users who had gone ahead. But as the shadows grew closer, it became clear they were a pack of undead. The archers quickly took formation and fired arrows, while Sangwook and the other tankers pushed the undead away from the melee fighters. The group soon realized that while the undead had fragile, paper-like bodies, all their stats had been heavily invested in attack power. Fortunately, they discovered the undead's weakness, their heads, and began focusing all efforts on decapitation. That night, after the clash, they decided to rest for the night. Hyeji was relieved she had brought a large number of mana potions and warned everyone to keep an eye on their teammates. She noted that Hyesung's skills were well suited for handling large groups and asked Juyeon why he looked so smug. Juyeon proudly replied that he was milking the blood battle bonus as well. The system then notified him that he had gained Blood Frenzy, a skill that temporarily absorbed a large portion of the target's stats. After absorbing the blood of 50 monsters, he could unlock the EX grade version of the skill. Juyeon explained that he had previously experienced the high of using an EX grade skill, but hadn't been able to fully enjoy it due to interference from the raiders. Now, by combining his Radiant Power, Celestial Melody, and Blessing of Buffs, his magic power had risen to 1,500. For every 150 magic power, he gained an additional attack power boost equal to 1 rank. He excitedly added that there was more. In the past, he had overlooked this fact, but all buffs from Radiant Authority only activated at A rank or higher. This time he was ready to take full advantage of them. Sangwook warned him not to get overconfident and land himself in trouble like last time. But Juyeon waved him off, telling him not to act like a dad, and reassuring him that he had already copied the teleportation skill earlier for emergencies. Hyesung called for everyone's attention. He explained that the field had very few safe zones and that most monsters traveled in groups. As a result, even a single battle would quickly deplete their weapons and supplies. He reminded them that their goal was to defeat the field boss, not to farm experience points. This meant they needed to minimize resource consumption as much as possible. But Juyeon, clearly bored, just yawned. Hyesung then announced that he would be organizing a scouting party to locate the field boss and asked if anyone would volunteer. 2 days ago, Juyeon was glad to feel warm when they entered their accommodation, but Hyeji firmly told him that it was not the time for him to rest because they needed to discuss how to set his skills. Hyeji informed him that she had been thinking about his power for a while and explained that users usually care a lot about the concept of the field they will hunt in. Even at low levels, they mostly go to places that give good experience points, and as they level up, they head to fields with higher ranks. She added that whether it is a field where the user can make good use of their skills or not is the key to survival, and that the higher the field rank goes, the more distinct the monster's characteristics become. She asked him if he remembered Sky Island, where the monsters specialized in flying, and he replied that the melee fighters could not even touch them. She informed him that it might be a disadvantage to someone without specific skills, but for someone else, it could be an advantage. And even if his level was a bit lacking, being specialized meant that with the right skill setup, he could become a super counter. Sangwook added that the unique trait of the multiverse, which allows skill swapping, meant Juyeon could always bring a skill setup that fit any field he entered, and both siblings agreed that his ability was overpowering. Hyeji then explained that the plagued land of hell was mainly filled with undead-type monsters, and that his basic non-elemental skills could work, but they were not exactly counter skills. Juyeon sarcastically commented that the game was really a fantasy world, but Sangwook replied that it was not like that. Juyeon then thought for a moment and searched for something on his phone. He showed them the skill he had been looking for, Spear of Judgment. It was a divine attribute spear imbued with holy power that dealt 100% additional damage to its targets, and if his divine power was 100 or higher, it applied a B-grade judgment effect that instantly killed enemies whose health was 10% or lower. However, it required 44 divine power and cost 150 mana. Back on the field raid day, the undead were rushing to attack, but before they could get closer, fireballs appeared above them. They were coming from Juyeon, who proudly shouted that he had descended. He then released the fireballs at the undead, burning them to death instantly. The siblings were both shocked upon seeing it, and Hyeji asked him how much mana he had, to which he reminded her that he had not even told their parents about it. Hyeji repeatedly poked him in disappointment and asked him if they were not getting closer. But in truth, Juyeon was wondering what to do after realizing that divine power was needed to use the skill. Thanks to the multiverse trait, however, it automatically converted divine power into charm. Sangwook informed them that the patrol had been there for 2 hours straight, and that if they went any deeper, it would be hard to retreat. He added that they did not see any more monsters either, and suggested heading back. But then, Juyeon noticed another assault squad and asked if the guild was the Truth Order. Hyeji just asked him back if he was checking whether there was a skill worth copying, which he did not deny, and he responded that Spear of Judgment was not bad, but flashy and dramatic skills were always the best. They then saw the Raider Guild as well, and Hyeji told them that the Raiders' leader might not have much talent, but he was still holding his own in the fight. They watched as the undead broke through the Raiders' defense and inflicted a heavy blow. Juyeon told his friends that the raiders had taken quite a few casualties. However, Sangwook was sure that in the end, the raid leader's side was going to win because field raids usually unfolded in that kind of chaotic form. The reason their side had handled the same wave of monsters so much better was all because of Juyeon, but Sangwook did not admit that to Juyeon's face, knowing that relying on one person was very risky. Hyeji called Juyeon to get his attention and told him to watch the other guilds fight carefully so he could see what their raiding party looked like when he was not around. She then turned around and told him that they should head back quickly because there was nothing more to see. However, before they could walk away, they saw the hand of a dead raider member move, and the system warned them about Slave of the Plague Grade S, which meant that when someone with the Army of the Plague skill died, they were revived as a Slave of the Plague and converted into an undead type. The undead raiders then attacked their own surviving teammates, which shocked the three of them. Later, they reported what they had witnessed to Hyesung, and Hyesung could not believe that dead users were coming back as monsters as well, but Juyeon was sure that dead monsters resurrected after a certain period of time. Hyesung then asked them what had happened to the raiders, and Sangwook replied that the damage had been severe, but they had made sure to deal with the bodies so they would not resurrect and confirmed that the group had left the area. Hyesung figured out that even in death, they either had to burn them or blow their heads off. While they were talking, the other members were listening nearby. Hyesung asked about the scouts, and two men replied that there was no one on the northern side of the mountain and that there was a massive cliff they could not cross with their current gear. Hyesung thought for a moment, and with no other choice, decided they needed to scout a bit more. Eventually, after 3 days had passed, Hyesung realized that their scouting range was expanding too drastically and that they would be in trouble if it spread any farther. He guessed it was time for him to step in, but before he could, one of his members shouted that he had found something and showed a video. The man explained that the details were still unclear since it had been recorded from a distance, but he was sure that it was not an ordinary monster. Juyeon watched the video the man was showing and asked if it was the field boss. Hyesung knew that among all SS rank unique traits, the one that unleashed the highest attack power was blood combat, but it came with a fatal drawback. To build stacks, the user had to personally land the final blow on each monster. 5 hours earlier, Hyesung had informed everyone that they had analyzed the monster suspected of being the boss using body cam footage, and multiple monsters appeared to be obeying its commands. He added that the monster was presumed to have high defense based on the armor it was wearing. Hyeji suggested that all ranged damage dealers focus their fire on Bull to chip away at its health and defense. However, Sangwook opposed his sister's suggestion, explaining that they did not have enough tanks to hold off the mobs if they concentrated all firepower on the boss. The other members had their own concerns and opinions, while Hyesung carefully considered the plan. In the end, he decided to handle Bull himself. He explained to everyone that he would build stacks by hunting regular monsters for 5 hours. Then they would rotate shifts to rest briefly while maintaining his stacks, and immediately begin the field boss raid afterward. Back in the present, Hyesung was busy stacking against the mobs. He knew he had always taken it upon himself to fight alone at the forefront because it was the only survival strategy allowed by his unique trait. That was why it was the first time he had ever entrusted his back to someone else, and he thought it was not bad. Once more, Hyesung rushed forward, entrusting a part of his life to his support, Juyeon. Fortunately, Juyeon felt great as well, watching his own stacks rise rapidly. He was genuinely excited at the thought of becoming the MVP of the boss fight, thanks to his Judgment Spear unique trait, Pierce Grade D, which ignored armor and landed clean hits. He was quietly absorbing the blood of dead monsters without anyone noticing, but he knew he could not make it too obvious that he was using blood combat. He then shouted to Hyesung to take the last hits on 3 of the mobs, even though he wanted to keep building his own stacks. Unexpectedly, Hyesung gave him a thumbs up and praised him for doing great. The reaction caught Juyeon off guard and made him wonder what was behind Hyesung's sudden compliment. A shiver ran down Juyeon's spine when he saw the cheesy look in Hyesung's eyes, and he began to wonder if he should stop helping. A few hours later, they arrived at a new terrain, and Hyesung informed them that Bull was estimated to be inside the canyon based on reconnaissance data. What worried Hyesung most was the time-limited quest, as they were running out of time. He told his team that they would proceed according to the preset strategy. He ordered them to lure the surrounding monsters within the planned time frame, and to carefully provoke the weaker ones in order to reset their aggro. Hyesung then confidently pointed his sword forward and swore that Bull would be pulled and defeated. Another hour passed, and everyone was busy fighting the undead. Eventually, the time for Bull's appearance arrived. As predicted, they heard a loud, powerful growl, and within a minute, a massive monster was charging toward them at full speed. Hyesung rushed to the front and shouted to everyone to prepare themselves, making the entire group tense and excited at the same time. Bull finally revealed itself and charged forward, destroying everything in its path. Everyone was terrified because it was even larger than they had expected. However, Hyesung forcefully shouted that they had to escape the compressed zone and ordered everyone to retreat. They ran with all their strength and Hyesung followed behind, cutting down the mobs trying to chase them. When they reached the other side, they were confused to see Bull stop and refuse to pursue. Unfortunately, Bull had its own plan. It released a thunderous roar that pierced their ears, then went silent and stared at them. Suddenly, someone shouted for Hyesung to look back. In the distance, they saw a swarm of undead rushing toward them, leaving Hyesung cursing under his breath. Everyone knew that charging straight into the monster wave would be suicidal, and if they tried, they would almost certainly die. While everyone else panicked in fear, Juyeon remained quiet and calm, focused on finding a way out. Juyeon saw two choices in front of him: face the tough-looking field boss or be swallowed by the endless wave of monsters. He noticed that the current field was shaped like a long cliff between a plain and a rocky area, and after grasping the terrain, he made his decision. Hyesung was startled when he suddenly felt heat behind him and was shocked to see Juyeon rushing forward with his fireballs. Hyesung asked what he was doing, but then realized Juyeon was attacking the boss, and it was working as Bull was being pushed back by the impact of the fireballs. Juyeon shouted to Hyesung that it was better to beat down one of the threats, and if it had armor, they could break through it. Hyesung immediately understood and ordered everyone to focus their attacks on the field boss. The others followed his command, rushing forward while the undead continued to chase after them. When the undead drew near the team, a powerful fireball wiped them out and shattered the bridge, cutting off the undead from advancing further. Juyeon was relieved that the chase had stopped but cursed under his breath when he saw Bull now positioned at the head of a formation of beasts. Hyesung informed everyone that although their positions had changed, the raid strategy remained the same. Even if Bull was larger than expected, it was still just a monster with a pattern. He then ordered the tankers to hold off the remaining mobs in the rocky area and instructed the agile melee fighters to draw the boss's aggro and lure its charge. They followed the plan successfully and managed to make Bull crash into the wall. Hyesung then quickly ordered the mages to unleash their full firepower, and every single one of them attacked Bull with everything they had, severely injuring the boss. Hyesung was pleased that the strategy was working and thought they just needed to maintain their assault. Bull roared in rage and attacked with its head, but the tankers managed to block the strike together. However, Sangwook warned them that something felt off, and before they realized it, the tankers had been driven close to the cliff's edge. One of the tankers realized that Bull was deliberately pushing them toward the cliff. But before he could finish speaking, Bull sent him flying over the edge and then turned to shove the others as well. Fortunately, Hyesung reacted quickly and blocked the boss's next attack with his sword. Hyesung shouted that a boss that stayed in one place was nothing but a punching bag and announced that he would use his skill. But before he could, Juyeon launched a powerful fireball and hurled it at Bull repeatedly. The attacks tore into Bull, and when Juyeon finally hit its nape, the monster screamed in agony. Most people assumed that Bull's exposed face and neck, its obvious vital points, were its main weakness. However, in a situation where they needed to pin it down, Juyeon remembered that Bull's left leg was weak. He immediately targeted it with his fireballs, stopping the monster from moving. Hyesung saw the opening and activated his limit break skill. As he rushed forward, he realized that Juyeon had been attacking the leg no one else had paid attention to, deliberately disrupting the boss's balance. Hyesung raised his sword, determined not to simply stand back and lose, and prepared to show them the S-rank skill he had earned upon reaching level 35. With a clean, all-in-one S-rank strike, he severed one of Bull's legs, causing the monster to collapse to the ground, screaming in pain, while Hyesung confidently believed he was the MVP. Hyesung warned them that the boss's leg might regenerate and told everyone not to lower their guard, urging them to continue attacking. Yet the others stood frozen, leaving him confused. When he turned back to look, he was shocked to see Bull standing upright on a single leg. The system notified them that Bull had activated Wide Area Strike and Ignore Weakness, prompting Juyeon to comment that special field bosses acted like transforming robots. Suddenly, Bull pulled something long from its mouth, a massive axe. Unfortunately for them, the Grade A Wide Area Strike skill increased all of Bull's stats by 30 and raised its attack power and defense by 1 tier. It also applied Ignore Weakness, allowing Bull to disregard damage from lower-level enemies and reduce incoming damage based on the attacker's level. No one could believe what they were seeing. For Juyeon, who was only level 21, his damage output was reduced by 70%, making him realize he would only be dealing 30% of his usual power, which also meant the fight was going to be even more explosive. Bull then rushed at them, and everyone panicked. However, Hyesung was sure that its mobility was reduced because it only had one leg, and thought that taking it down would be easier. Hyesung informed everyone that they had to aim for its other leg, but before he could finish, Juyeon rushed forward, thinking the same thing as expected. Juyeon then threw a fireball at the boss's remaining leg, and Hyesung shouted to everyone that the attack was working, but Juyeon already expected that and wondered if it was really the end. Bull then raised its axe and slammed it hard onto the ground, shaking the entire cliff. Hyesung thought it was reducing the space because it couldn't hold out with just one leg and was digging its own grave. But he remembered that Bull was only just beginning and that Phase 2 was about to start. Bull then broke its own axe and suddenly stabbed itself with half of it. After that, Bull shattered the ground with both of its fists, and they all panicked when they felt the floor collapsing. Hyesung warned everyone to be careful because the cliff was widening and that they needed to stand properly, while Bull was jumping around and slamming the ground repeatedly, trying to make it collapse. Hyeji, who was trying to stand firm with the help of her brother, complained that her brother was not good at balancing. And when Sangwook tried to reach out to help Juyeon, it was too late, as Juyeon fell down the cliff, leaving Sangwook in shock. Days ago, Juyeon had been complaining about having to excuse himself to go to the bathroom every time he needed to copy a skill. He then sat down to begin, starting by equipping the already saved blood combat and transformation resistance as his default, and copied them one by one. He successfully did it, but he was surprised when 3 bonus copies were activated and was excited, thinking that the system was setting the table for him to go on a rampage. Back in the present, the siblings were shocked when they saw him floating in the air, and it was thanks to his skill, Fly Grade A, which granted the power to fly by will. Juyeon knew that fly was an extremely inefficient skill that consumed 300 mana per minute. However, he thought it was better to use all his remaining mana to take down Bull since his damage output had been reduced. Suddenly the ground shook even more violently, and Hyeji lost her balance, but she managed to grab Juyeon's hand and pull herself up. She then hugged him to steady herself and thanked him for letting her feel alive again. But Sangwook was annoyed seeing them so close together and asked if they weren't going to get off quickly. Juyeon just asked Sangwook if he wanted to come too, clearly enjoying the situation. However, Hyeji shouted to Sangwook that he couldn't because he was too heavy and would exceed the limit. With no other choice, Sangwook backed down and warned them to just wait until the fight was over. Juyeon then calmed down and asked what they should do. He released fireballs in Bull's direction to help the others from above. However, he couldn't attack Bull like before, and Hyeji noticed that his aura was weaker than earlier as well. He explained that he had used one-stroke sever, which consumed almost all his blood combat stacks, and most of the mobs he could use to refill his stacks were beyond the cliff. Hyeji also pointed out that his balance was off, so his attacks wouldn't land properly, which he agreed with. And he told her that they needed one big hit, but the boss's magic defense was pretty high. She asked why he was thinking so hard and pointed at his chest, reminding him that he had something better. On the other hand, Hyesung, who was trying his best to attack Bull, knew that they would all die if the situation continued. Yet he reminded himself to stay calm as the raid leader. Bull grabbed its broken axe from the ground and raised it above Hyesung. He noticed it but knew it was too late to dodge, and all he could do was curse. Luckily for him, Juyeon appeared in front of him just in time. Juyeon figured that even though they said Bull's weak point was its left leg, in the end, to take down a beast, he should aim for its neck. Juyeon activated the imported effect, which partially adjusted the options to fit him and allowed him to use one-stroke sever. He then swung his sword across the boss's neck, cutting it perfectly off with the help of his one-stroke sever SS grade skill, leaving everyone open-mouthed in shock. Bull's head fell to the ground and its lifeless body collapsed. Everyone fell silent, staring at the once unbeatable boss, while Juyeon was simply proud that he had taken care of it. Hyesung was sure Juyeon had used his skill, but it had been far stronger than before, leaving him wondering how Juyeon had managed it, while Juyeon himself was wondering the same thing. The bull's corpse then lit up, and Juyeon did not think they would release the ranked draw at that timing. Hyeji whispered to him to stick to the plan and that everything would work out fine, but he whispered back that Hyesung was not an idiot and there was no way their excuse would work. Hyesung then rushed toward him and was about to ask about the skill he had used, but Juyeon acted amazed and shouted that Windcutter was amazing, deciding to go along with the plan because he had no other choice. Hyesung was about to ask him again, but before he could, Juyeon explained that the skill he had just used was Windcutter, an SS rank skill that was insanely strong. Sangwook could not believe Juyeon was calling that an excuse, and Hyesung clearly did not believe him either, telling him that no matter how he looked at it, the skill Juyeon had used was his. Fortunately, someone shouted that the soul was not entering, which drew Hyesung's attention away. He gripped his sword tightly and wondered if the bull was not actually dead. However, he confirmed that the bull was definitely dead because even a weapon that clearly looked like a boss item had dropped cleanly. Everyone was confused because their stats remained unchanged. Juyeon confirmed it and noticed that even the quest window to conquer the field had not disappeared, making everyone wonder if the bull was not the actual field boss. Hyesung picked up the bull's axe and shared the item status window with everyone. The system showed that the axe was called Barton's Twin Blades, ranked S, used by the White Captain Barton. Everyone realized that the bull's name had been White Captain Barton and felt that the whole situation was insane. They then turned to their leader and asked what he planned to do next. Hyesung approached Juyeon and told him to choose one item because he was the MVP of the raid. There was a rule in the Lee Hyesung raid team. When defeating a field boss, the MVP who contributed the most was granted priority purchase rights for one item. Hyesung wanted the axe, but he was a man of principle and rules were rules. Without a doubt, Juyeon had been the MVP. However, Juyeon asked Hyesung if he needed the axe and offered to sell his priority purchase rights to him. Hyesung asked if he was sure, and Juyeon confidently replied that he was an SS rank mage, so he did not need the axe, but he could not simply throw away the priority purchase right he had earned. Hyesung asked what his terms were, and Juyeon replied that he wanted unconditional priority purchase rights for an item dropped by the real field boss and 50% of the axe's cost. Hyesung understood that this gave him the chance to purchase Barton's twin blades with priority, and even then, he would still have to pay half of its appraised value, which would easily exceed 10 billion won. On top of that, he would still owe 50% of the appraisal price for an item from a true field boss. However, Hyesung wondered what would happen if the boss item did not drop at all, and told Juyeon that they did not even know what might appear. Juyeon replied that if no item dropped, there was nothing he could do about it, and asked Hyesung if it was not a gamble worth taking. Hyesung raised the axe and agreed, shocking everyone. Hyesung then announced that the contract between him and Juyeon had been established with all of them as witnesses. Hyeji asked Juyeon if he was really okay with giving up the axe. He replied that even the rupture sword was cumbersome, and that there was still the main boss left, so he could not just snatch another item and instead had decided to buy insurance. Hyeji then said she hoped the boss would drop a staff. Juyeon asked why when she already had a good staff, and she replied that she would use it while taking turns with him. He reminded her that they were not that close. She pushed back, saying they could start being that close from that day onward, but all he sensed from her was impure, selfish desire, so he refused her suggestion. As they teased each other, the resentment of the White Captain Barton melted away, and Stage 1 plague seeped into the land of plague, causing the poisoned rank E effect to be applied. Meanwhile, on the other side of the field, the Raider Guild was exploring, and one of them complained that his health kept draining because the poison effect triggered once every hour. The leader responded that they could not keep wasting the healer's mana and that they needed to quickly find Juyeon, also known as Psychopath, to take him down and retrieve the boss's treasure. One of his men commented that it would have been easier if they had killed Juyeon when they first encountered him, but the leader reminded them that the order was to eliminate Juyeon quietly, so there was no need to draw attention. His men then noticed one unidentifiable entity ahead of them, and when they looked closely, they saw a Grim Reaper. They assumed it was just a user who had been separated from their group and decided it would be a piece of cake, choosing to finish the fight quickly, unaware of what they were about to face. Meanwhile, on another side of the field, the Truth Order Guild was facing a huge spider monster. Kim Cholman, the leader of the Truth Order Guild, ordered everyone to cast Cleanse because the poison cooldown was back, and the members obeyed despite being low on mana. The spider targeted one of the men and used its webbing to grab him, but fortunately, Suha stepped in and used her cross-barrier A-rank skill to protect him. However, Cholman was angered by this and ordered everyone who had applied debuffs to use their holy elemental attack skills. A few hours later, they defeated the grudge of Captain Boro, and Stage 2 Plague seeped into the Land of Plague, which increased the poisoned effect from rank E to rank D. Suddenly, Cholman appeared behind Suha and sarcastically thanked her, saying they could win the Holy War again thanks to her, yet reminded her that she had refused his suggestion to stay in the rear and had chosen to go out alone. She explained that the believers would have died if she had not acted. However, Cholman threateningly reminded her that the protection and grace of God and his leadership were what kept her safe, and asked what would have happened if her holiness had been isolated. He also asked her whether she could really have come out unharmed from that bizarre space called the field before, and his words sent a chill of fear through her. Cholman firmly gripped her shoulder and warned her not to forget that an individual human's power was insignificant and powerless, and that all believers, including herself, were merely parts of God's design. He added that the one she was meant to assist, the God-given hero, was not the followers but himself. He insisted that she should not make judgments on her own and that she needed only to follow his decisions. Only then would her mother wake up again. Cholman continued to manipulate her, telling her to trust only his words and that everything would unfold according to God's will, while the hearts of the members around her were steadily corrupted by greed.
On the other side, where the Raider Guild was, blood stained the white ground, and the leader swayed together with his corpses and the controlled members who were now following the Grim Reaper. Meanwhile, on the other side, Hyesung's team was busy moving forward, and in the distance, Sangwook noticed the Raider Guild. Hyeji guessed that the raiders had taken down a mid-boss monster and handed a recovery potion to Juyeon while asking what kind of field boss threw out debuffs like crazy when they fought it. and pointed out that they did not even know if it was really a field boss, so it was not like they could just ignore it. Hyeji then asked if they were just racking up debuffs nonstop, but Juyeon knew that since both the right and left arms of the boss were dead, the boss would be coming personally. Suddenly, they saw a bright, holy magic power in the distance and wondered if it was the Truth Order Guild. Haesung informed them that there was a high chance it was the Truth Order in the middle of a boss fight and that they should join in before it was too late. They all rushed toward the source of the holy magic, but before they could get closer, they saw the raiders standing in their way and wondered if those raider bastards were planning to sneak in and take the boss without telling them. Suddenly, the Grim Reaper appeared and controlled the corpses of the raiders, turning them against Hyeseung's team. The system then appeared and revealed a subquest ranked A, a quest to defeat Havrid, the master of the Land of Plague and Hell, with a reward of 50,000 skill points and a Seed of Plague ranked S. It also showed that Havrid the Plague was level 66, with the Plague rank SS unique trait and 3 SS rank skills. Juyeon excused himself to get his friends' attention and informed them that the Grim Reaper in front of them was the field boss. Haesung realized that the raiders were Havrid's familiars and walked forward, still not fully aware that Havrid was the field boss, but certain that he could not let the Truth Order take the credit. Suddenly, Havrid screamed, taking everyone by surprise, including Juyeon. He felt fear creeping inside him but forced himself to stand his ground, and he managed to do so. He then saw Havrid's blood-red eyes and felt the overwhelming aura radiating from it. He thought it was insane and tried to warn the Truth Order that they were being targeted, but it was too late, as one of their members was struck by Havrid's scream and became consumed by fear. The other members rushed to help their comrade and tried to move him to a safe zone, but the man's body was stiff like stone. Suddenly, Havrid appeared in front of them and raised its scythe to finish him off. The others instinctively raised their arms to protect their heads, but nothing happened. When they realized Havrid was not moving, they wondered why it was not attacking. Sangwook asked if they should be attacking, but Hyeji replied that her skill was an area of effect skill, which meant it would hit others as well. She called out to Juyeon, urging him to use his Spear of Judgment. However, Juyeon did not move and explained that Havrid's skill could not be broken with normal attacks. He also told them that the man would die in 20 seconds. Chilman used divine magic to push Havrid away, not caring about his members caught in the path, but Havrid blocked the attack with Plague Shield. Chilman repeatedly hurled divine power at Havrid, hoping to kill it, but Havrid simply spun its scythe around to clear everyone nearby and then used its instant execution skill, ranked SS, to cut off the heads of 3 men in a single, clean strike. Everyone was stunned by what they had just witnessed, but Hyeji was furious and demanded to know what that skill was. Her reaction caught Havrid's attention, and it moved closer to her. Fortunately, Juyeon noticed and immediately pulled her back. Unfortunately, Havrid appeared near her again and unleashed another scream. When Juyeon tried to drag her outside the 100-meter radius, she collapsed, sending him and her brother into a panic. Havrid had successfully inflicted fear on her and begun draining her life. Havrid then stared at Juyeon in a mocking way, as if it were playing with him, and it infuriated him. Sangwook tried to wake Hyeji, but Juyeon knew that in order to break an S-rank abnormal status, they needed at least a 5-star purification skill, and he had only 20 seconds. He was certain that there was no time to slowly dispel the effect, and he had only one option left. He rushed toward Suha and appeared in front of her in just a second. Without hesitation, he grabbed her arm and asked if he was right in thinking that she had an S-rank abnormal status purification skill. Chilman ordered his men to stop Juyeon and demanded to know how he dared to be so rude to the Saintess, but Juyeon simply pulled her away and told her that he needed her. He then tightened his grip on her hand and flew off with her, while the others desperately tried and failed to take her back. Suha looked down at her people, then at him, and the sight of both made her feel warm and blush. She snapped out of it when he shouted that they did not have time and that she was the only one who could save Hyeji. He then begged her to do it, startling her even more. She pressed her hands together and called upon her goddess, invoking Tears of the Goddess ranked SS, a skill that healed and purified everything, regenerated severed and fractured parts, and recovered all fatigue. The tears fell onto Hyeji and snapped her back to reality. Juyeon shouted to Sangwook to move, and Sangwook saw that Havrid was about to take both their heads off in one swing. He immediately grabbed his sister and pulled her away just in time, narrowly escaping death and saving both of their lives. Juyeon landed back on the ground and thanked Suha for helping him. He told her that he owed her for it, but she replied that it had all been God's will and that she had done nothing, even as her members approached her. He explained that religion was not his thing, so he did not really understand, but he was certain that it had been her choice to help them. For that, he said, he was grateful to her, not her God, which startled her. Chilman rushed in, grabbed her away from him, and shouted that Juyeon deserved heavenly punishment, but Juyeon simply flew back into the air. Before leaving, he gave Suha a thumbs up and praised her skill.
leaving her stunned. Juyeon then returned to his friends and asked Yeji how she was feeling. She replied that she did not know what had happened because her memory was blank from a certain point. Sangwook told her there was nothing particularly wrong now and asked what kind of skill Havrid had used. Juyeon explained that it was an instant execution skill that randomly inflicted the status ailment Fear Rank S on one living creature within a 100-meter radius. If the status ailment was maintained for 20 seconds, it penetrated 500% of physical and magical defense and dealt additional damage, allowing Havrid to cast instant execution rank SS. He added that if they defeated the boss before instant execution was cast, the effect would be resolved, but with Shield of Pestilence rank S, there was a constant 55% damage reduction, and that shield converted damage taken into mana consumption. That meant, unless it was a fully stacked skill of the 7th rank, the shield would not break. Juyeon was sure there was still one skill slot remaining, and the description did not mention any cooldown for instant execution. He guessed it might be a skill that could be reused immediately, and thought that copying Tears of the Goddess would be the right move. However, it was not even a multi-target skill, yet it consumed a huge amount of mana. And with just a purification skill alone, Havrid could not be defeated. He looked at Hyesung, searching for a way to break the shield with a single strike. Hyesung was surprised when they rejoined the fight and told them they had been resting for too long, but Hyeji assured him that she would work several times harder than the time she had rested, while Juyeon decided to save his remaining skill slot for a decisive blow. Sangwook pushed the undead back and Hyeji burned them to death once more. On the other side, Hyesung fought the undead head-on, while Juyeon supported him from behind. Juyeon finally stopped, judging that his stacks were sufficient, and when Havrid sent the undead at them again, he released stronger fireballs. He was confident that his magic power now exceeded that of the field boss. He hurled his fireballs toward Havrid, who immediately used Plague Shield to defend himself, but when Juyeon's fireballs struck the shield, cracks formed, and eventually the shield shattered. One of them noticed that the shield had broken and was about to press the attack, but Havrid reacted first, screaming loudly as he dissolved the ground around him with his scythe. The undead were swallowed by the liquid he created, and Hyesung ordered everyone to fall back because it was a new pattern. The poisonous liquid spread further, and when the undead were completely dissolved, the system showed that they were now exposed to the Land of Plague, where the Poison Grade B effect was applied. Juyeon was shocked to see that Land of Plague rank SS turned the area within a 100-meter radius into a Land of Plague, and that all targets who did not possess the Undead Legion skill were exposed to the Plague effect. In addition, if a target died due to the Plague, there was a 50% chance that a mark would be created on a nearby living creature. He cursed in panic and was startled when one of their allies coughed up blood. He wondered if he should copy Tears of the Goddess, but he knew it would only buy them time. Suddenly, he heard Cheolman berating Suha again, asking how many times he had to tell her to stay in the back. She tried to resist but was too afraid, until she finally snapped and used her divine power to push Cheolman's hand away. She shouted that she had not come there to watch people die meaninglessly, and that even though she knew she was powerless on her own, if she could choose anything, she wanted to save people without hiding. She then released a powerful divine light around them, and in that instant, Juyeon copied her skill without any hesitation. Everyone thanked her for her help and felt their health fully restored, but she had pushed herself too much and lost her balance because the goddess's sacrifice rank S skill was too much for her. Cheolman was not pleased with her actions, however her people were excited and grateful that she had helped them. Hyesung shouted to his team that they could not afford to lose either, and that they had to defeat Havrid before the buff wore off. They all attacked Havrid with full health and renewed energy, but even then, they still could not bring it down, and Hyesung was trembling from exhaustion. Ever since the new phase had begun and the minor enemies had nearly vanished, Hyesung had been unable to maintain his stacked stats. Suddenly, Havrid appeared in front of him and moved to stab his head with its scythe. Fortunately, Hyesung managed to block the blow, while the others continued struggling just to hold on. However, as time passed, one by one, they fell and were killed by the boss. Cheolman decided that the raid was a failure and planned to use Hyesung as a decoy so they could escape. He called out to Suha to leave with him, which made her burst into tears as she desperately prayed to her god for help. Suddenly, a powerful divine energy spread around them again. It was the exact same goddess's sacrifice skill. Hyesung and even the field boss were stunned when they saw Juyeon flying above them with wings, declaring that he had arrived. Years ago, instead of dealing with divine revelations, Suha had small worries like school homework. Her family wasn't rich, but they were not unhappy. However, one day her father rushed in, panicking as he relayed terrible news from outside. Her family was terrified, and before they could react or plan anything, a powerful force struck them even inside the safety of their own home. Suha remembered hearing that God only gave people trials they could endure, but her father passed away and her mother ended up on her deathbed, making her believe that God was not there for her. With no other choice, she worked as a dishwasher, and the people around her treated her like a monster. Still, she kept hoping that things would get better someday, that everything would be okay, and that she would be able to be happy again. She pushed herself, believing that if she continued working hard, her mother would definitely return to her someday. But reality only grew harsher. Her hopes were shattered again and again. One day, she was walking down the street, silently begging someone, anyone, to save her and her mother. Lost in thought as she crossed the road, she did not notice that a truck driver had fallen asleep at the wheel. As the truck was about to hit her, she cried out to God that she wanted to live. At that moment, a bright light appeared in front of her and saved her from being run over. The people who saw it realized she had awakened, and that was when Chilman found her. He pushed everyone aside and proclaimed that she was the saintess sent by their god. After that, she used her divine power on her mother and healed her severe burns. She believed that God had given her a second chance, and thanks to that miracle, her mother's death was delayed. But even then, she couldn't wake her from her coma. The cult leader, Chilman, told her that to wake her mother, whose brain had been damaged by the field's poison, she had to unlock a skill called Miracle. To do that, he said, she had to help the agent of God, chosen to save the world, the one called the hero. Now in the present, she watched Juyeon raise his sword and unleash a swarm of blades around Havrid. The swords shot forward, shattered Havrid's shield, and pierced straight through its body. In novels or movies, sacrifice is expressed as something very noble. And when Juyeon saw the skill called Goddess's Sacrifice, he thought Suha would save everyone with her death. He was relieved when he realized that Goddess's Sacrifice was not a skill that would kill him. Juyeon knew that it was right to use such a skill by risking death if it consumed 95% of one's life force in the middle of a chaotic battle, but that was not the case for him. He had a Descent Rank A skill from Kainal, which activated when his life dropped to 10% or less. When that happened, the fallen angel Kainal descended, and once his life force reached 0% after the descent was immediately released, and both his life force and mana were restored to 100%. He was very satisfied with it, and for him, the best part was that he could activate the skill by willingly consuming his life force rather than being forced to. He had only kept it, hoping it would activate just once, right before he died someday. But he never expected he would use it like that, or that he would even summon the Sword of Heaven that Kainal used. He then summoned the Spear of Judgment and was amazed to see that it worked. Juyeon felt like he could do anything and unleashed a swarm of swords toward Havrid. He laughed as he ordered it to die, then composed himself and repeated the command in a cooler tone. Just then, he felt a bright gaze on his back, and when he looked over his shoulder, he saw Suha staring at him with hope and awe, making a chill run down his spine. Havrid was already beaten down but still tried to stand and fight. Juyeon appeared in front of it and teasingly asked if it wanted to try one last move because it wanted to live that badly. Juyeon raised his sword and, angered, reminded Havrid that it had to pay the price for touching Hyeji. He then activated his blood explosion skill, which wrapped flames around his sword and swung it at Havrid, slicing it in half like paper. His attack was so powerful that it sent a shockwave of energy through everyone. When the flames disappeared, he was the only one left standing, and the system confirmed that Havrid was dead as it began absorbing the soul of the special field boss Havrid, rank B. Everyone could not believe that Juyeon had defeated the field boss so easily, a boss that had not taken so much as a scratch no matter how much they attacked it before. They began to wonder just how strong he really was. Juyeon acted cool on the outside, but he reverted to his usual self when the system notified him that he had acquired the skill Purified Mind, rank E. He could not believe that the skill granted immunity to all status effects of E rank or lower. Everyone received the same skill and was so delighted that they were ready to serve him. The men then wondered what kind of boss item reward they would get when even the basic reward was that good. Hyesung stepped forward and Chulman did the same. The two guild leaders faced each other and formally introduced themselves. Chulman told Hyesung that they should avoid unnecessary conflict and discuss the distribution based on each side's contribution. Hyesung agreed and assumed that Chulman was feeling confident because the battle had been easier thanks to the Saintess. Chulman then pointed out that, thanks to their Saint's status effect removal skill, it was a relief that the damage had been minimal. Hyesung thanked Chulman for his combat support, saying it had allowed him to display his full strength, which irritated Chulman, since Hyesung was implying that his team had landed the last hit. Chulman then pointed at the items on the ground and asked where the boss's item was and where the user who had been there earlier had gone. Hyesung felt a sense of déjà vu at the combination of a missing boss item and Juyeon's disappearance. He quickly put it together and cursed Juyeon in frustration. Juyeon then appeared behind Sangwook and asked Hyesung if he had called for him, and Hyesung angrily asked what he was doing there. Juyeon replied that he had simply defeated the boss and returned to his spot. He then acted pitiful, saying that he was not the type who liked attention, yet Hyesung was giving him even more attention. Hyesung asked where the boss's item was and Juyeon did not answer immediately. Hyesung was sure he was being reminded of the acts from before and that Juyeon expected him to do something about the boss item. Cheolmin walked closer, calling Juyeon utterly wicked and claiming that the resentment of the dead had gathered around him. Cheolmin then pointed at Juyeon, declaring that a very unholy energy was coming from him and that he had the field boss's item. But Juyeon only responded with a proud smirk. A few minutes earlier, after Juyeon killed the field boss, he saw the item drops and couldn't believe that it was a hybrid boss system. He was sure that a valuable item should be taken by the raid's MVP and remembered that he had a contract with Hyesung, so there shouldn't be any issues with them. However, his problem was the Truth Order Guild, and he was certain they were going to argue about contribution levels, citing the buff the Saintess had given. He did not deny that he owed Suha one, but he could not bring himself to let go of the special drop. He began hiding the special item among the corpses and acted as if the boss had kept insisting that he be the one to take the special item, leaving him with no choice. He then looked around to make sure there were no witnesses and walked away with a wicked expression, completely unaware that Suha had been watching him the entire time. Back in the present, Cheolmin asked Juyeon what he had been doing near the item drops right after the boss died, and Juyeon answered that he had died and simply returned there. Cheolmin released his divine magic in anger and demanded to know who Juyeon thought he was lying to. He could not believe that Juyeon was trying to deceive him, the representative of their god, and his members nervously drew their weapons to support their leader. However, Hyesung and the others were not about to stand by and watch one of their own get beaten up. Juyeon called Cheolmin out for pretending to be the good guy and asked if he had any proof that Juyeon had taken the boss's item. He explained that his own sword had broken, so he had simply picked up the weapon of a dead player, and asked whether Cheolmin was seriously claiming that even a dead person's sword still had ownership rights. Hyesung stepped in to calm them both, agreeing that taking an item without an agreement could be a problem. He then asked Juyeon directly if he had taken the boss's item, and Juyeon firmly answered no. Hyesung then asked if he could reveal the options of the sword he had picked up. Juyeon was about to show the sword, but Cheolmin provoked him further, telling him to prove his innocence. Juyeon, frustrated, said that the current situation was quite unpleasant for him, considering his level of contribution in the battle. Cheolmin mockingly told him that he simply had to prove that his displeasure was justified. Before showing the sword, Juyeon stated that it would only be fair for Cheolmin to grant him priority ownership of one of the other dropped items if the sword turned out not to be the boss item, as compensation for his rude attitude. Cheolmin confidently agreed. He even swore that if the sword was not an item dropped by the field boss, they would unconditionally concede one boss item to Juyeon. Smirking, Juyeon took the sword out and let Cheolmin inspect it. Suddenly, Suha intervened and stepped forward. Everyone was stunned, and Juyeon became worried that she might have seen him hiding the boss's special item. Suha took a breath and announced that, regardless of the sword's identity, they would unconditionally concede one item to Juyeon. Cheolmin tried to stop her, insisting that it was not the will of the gods, but she pushed him away and looked to Juyeon as if drawing strength from him. She then declared that if a hero is someone who saves people and leads the world to peace, they must possess power worthy of that title, and exposed the fact that Cheolmin had done nothing when everyone was in danger. She firmly told him that he was not the hero and reminded him that he had always called her a powerless being, but she no longer believed that about herself. Suha stopped in front of Juyeon and said that if her power was bestowed by the gods, then the one she chose to use that power for must also be the god's choice. She then announced that Juyeon was the hero and that she would follow him, shocking the siblings and everyone present. Cheolmin snapped and shouted in rage that he had kept a clueless little wench like her alive all this time, and this was how she repaid him. He then declared that Suha was no longer a member of their order, and that therefore her declaration to forfeit the item was not the will of the Truth Order Guild. He snatched the sword from Juyeon's hand and checked it, only to be confused when the system identified it as Handle of Self-Destruction. Rank C. Juyeon teased him, saying that he was done confirming things, then rushed over to the corpses and pretended to be picking through the items. He grabbed the sword he had been eyeing from the beginning and announced that he would be taking it. Juyeon then sprinted away at full speed, and Hyeji shouted angrily, asking where he thought he was going. The siblings immediately chased after him, and Suha, noticing that he was getting away, followed as well. Meanwhile, Hyesung was left behind, wondering what on earth was happening, while Cheolmin remained on the ground in despair. Hyesung then told Cheolmin that they should at least settle the rest. On the other hand, Juyeon stopped running once he was sure they were far enough away and realized he really needed to start working out, because without buffs it was so hard for him to run for long. Hyeji then caught up to him and asked if he was going to explain everything. He excitedly replied that he had found the boss item right after killing the field boss. He explained that even though he landed the last hit, the Truth Order Guild would definitely make a fuss, so at first he thought about just taking the sword, but that would only make things more annoying. So he decided to hide it among the raider corpses, planning to sneak it out later. He added that if the hidden item was discovered, it would be a problem, so he just picked up some random sword and pretended it was the boss item instead. Hyeji asked him if he had not planned anything in advance with the Saintess, but he answered that he could barely handle himself, which made Hyeji ask again what on earth the situation was right now, pointing at Suha, who was also catching her breath in exhaustion. Yet Juyeon himself was wondering the same thing. Suha then cheerfully introduced herself to him, and he introduced himself back. Suha informed him that she had come to serve him, the hero. However, the three of them agreed that getting involved with her would not be a good idea. Juyeon again reminded Suha that he did not believe in religion and started to walk away with his friends, but Suha rushed to follow them again, which creeped him out and made him shout, asking how long she was going to follow him when he did not even believe in her god. Suha warned him that the chaos of the world would be calmed by God's chosen representative, and that while Cheolman might not always be right, seeing Juyeon convinced her that if a hero existed, it had to be him. Suddenly, she tripped and landed face first in the snow. Yet she did not back down and swore that she could be of help to him. Tears welled up in her eyes as she reminded him that she had left the Truth Order, so now the only place she could return to was by his side. He pitied her and offered her his hand, but firmly told her that he was not looking for help and was simply paying back his debt. He asked if she understood, and she happily agreed. She then swore that until the world found peace, she would stay with him, making him think that he had picked up a strange one. The next day, they were all on the plane, and Juyeon was glad that all the items obtained in the special field were legally recognized as theirs thanks to the raid exemption, because he had been nervous he might be stopped at security in the departure hall. Hyeji was also amazed that they were allowed to bring blades onto the plane, and Sangwook explained that it was partly because it was their chartered flight, and, for overseas expeditions, high-grade personal equipment was required to be carried by the owner. Juyeon sighed in relief, and told them he had never traveled abroad with such expensive items before. Hyeji teased him by reminding him that it was his first time going overseas, and he shouted at her to be quiet because she was ruining his image. Juyeon then decided to relax for a while as a reward for all the trouble he had gone through. Meanwhile, news spread that Hyesung's team had cleared the E-rank special field, that Suha had quit the Truth Order Guild, that body camera footage from Hyesung's raid team had been released, and that the Raider Guild, which had been regarded as a top-tier combat group, had been completely wiped out. The news reached Xiaolong, and she received documents confirming her deceased members from the field. She could not believe it, since she had sent more than 100 elites under level 50, each equipped with at least one D-rank boss item. Yet they had been wiped out again, while Juyeon was perfectly fine and alive. She threw the documents at her member in anger, and one of them received a small cut on the neck. She told them that it was no longer just about obtaining the treasure. Too many of their guild members had died, and now it was a matter of their honor. An old man suggested that they should push harder, but she disagreed and told him that there was something he needed to do instead. She ordered them to put a bounty on the dark web, no matter the cost, and to bring her Juyeon's head, because the treasure could wait. Her men carried out her orders and posted Juyeon's head with a reward of 200 Bitcoin, to be executed within 72 hours. On the other hand, at the airport, Hyesung arrived and was greeted by a swarm of reporters. One reporter asked how he felt about being the first in the world to conquer both F-rank and E-rank special fields, and Hyesung replied that this achievement was only the beginning, and that even in a world where levels meant everything, he would prove there was more to it. Hyesung then thanked everyone who had always supported him, but was caught off guard when a reporter asked if the decisive factor had once again been Psycho-Pass like before. He confidently answered that the Saintess of the Truth Order had played the biggest role in the field boss raid, but if he had to pick an MVP as raid leader, he would definitely choose Psycho-Pass from his team. He explained to everyone that Psycho-Pass had been confirmed as an SS rank mage, and that from that day onward, the world would have the thrill of watching two rising SS rank stars. At the same time, the plane carrying Juyeon and his friends landed, and Juyeon was peacefully sleeping with his brand new Cursed Plague Holy Sword SS rank, leaving the siblings feeling relieved. Meanwhile, the special E-rank field vanished, and Havred's restraint disappeared. Its soulbind was released, and Ego saw it lying on the ground. Ego knew it was an important reward, and decided to patch it in. And without Juyeon knowing, he obtained a new Cursed Plague Holy Sword and Plague Seed. Ego also knew that the seed would long for Juyeon as well. A few hours later, Juyeon was back at his apartment, but before he entered, he turned around and asked Suha how far she was planning to follow him. She explained that since she had sworn to serve him and save the world, she had to stay by his side wherever he went, and he immediately turned her down without hesitation. He nervously explained that he had said something weird in front of people last time and had been completely misunderstood, to the point that he was so scared he could not even open his browser. He was about to ask her why she was trying to freeload when she must be rich, but before he could finish, she pulled out a bundle of money and explained that she was not staying for free. She only had cash and asked him if it was not enough. He then proudly opened his apartment door and said that he also received requests like that sometimes. Suha happily stepped inside while Hyeji hit him and demanded to know if he was crazy. He tried to explain that he had been thinking about letting Suha in, but Sangwook already knew he had seen the money and casually told Suha to come in without hesitation. Juyeon told them that there was no benefit in making an enemy out of an S-class healer and that they should at least hear what Suha had to say, and if it was weird, they would send her back. In truth, however, he was curious about Suha's intentions and thought there was no way such a beauty would like him for no reason. He stared at her, wondering what she was thinking, until she confidently and honestly told him that she had fallen for him, shocking everyone in the room. Suha blushed and explained that seeing him save people had made her admire him. She added that he had looked so cool when he descended in divine form to vanquish evil, and he agreed with her, because he thought he had been pretty cool then, too. He thought that was convincing enough, but Hyeji punched him away in disagreement and warned Suha to stop joking and tell them her real intention. However, Suha swore she was telling the truth and pointed out to Hyeji that she and Juyeon were not even that close. That angered Hyeji, and she insisted that she and Juyeon were very close partners. Suha countered that they were just business partners and said she would hear it directly from Juyeon. Suha then asked him what his relationship with Hyeji was, and Hyeji warned him to explain it properly. He felt scared and pressured, watching the two women argue over him, and tried to call for Sangwook's help. Unfortunately, Sangwook did not want to get involved and ran away, hoping he could make it out alive. Minutes later, Juyeon finally lay down on his bed, but before that, Hyeji had dragged Suha away from him, shouting that there was no way a grown man and woman were going to live under the same roof. He was, however, secretly relieved that Hyeji had taken Suha to live with her. He then sat down, knowing it was time for settlement, and opened his status window. He saw that he had 150,000 skill points and wondered which skill he should raise first. He remembered that he had already used the quest rewards, the detailed trait upgrade ticket, and the random skills detailed trait enhancement ticket, which had been useful. He then took something out of his pocket. It was the seed of plague, a seed imbued with the power of plague. If planted and raised well, something containing the power of plague would sprout. However, there were no instructions on where to plant it, and he thought it would not grow with just any fertilizer, since it was an S-rank item. He put the seed back in his pocket, deciding not to think about it for a while, and wondered which trait he should upgrade next. Expanding the sample to increase usable skills was like broadening a shop's inventory. Boss characters that granted boss skills were like buying premium ingredients, and a skill repository that let them permanently use enhanced skills was like leaving a special recipe behind in the shop. Juyeon then decided to use his detailed trait upgrade ticket on the skill repository. The system began processing it, and as it did, he begged it to just increase the count by 1. The system then showed that when the stored skills grade was SS or higher, the stored skills effect increased by 30%. He was surprised that the effect had increased further, which meant he should only store SS rank or higher skills. He complained that unless it was EX rank, there was no reason to use the skill repository. Suddenly, the system showed that the average rank of the stored skills was EX and activated a hidden option, which increased the stored skills effects by 50%, and it made him go silent in shock. He then knelt on the ground in happiness and wondered if he should start believing in God now. Satisfied, he decided to try using the random skill enhancement ticket. He used it immediately, knowing it did not matter which skill was enhanced, since he only had skill copy and advent. The system enhanced his advent skill, and he wondered what exactly had changed, since it looked the same, until the system showed that its cooldown time had been reduced from 30 days to 10 days. He decided to let it slide since the skill repository was amazing, and wondered what he should do with his remaining 150,000 skill points. Then the system showed his daily quest level 4, which required him to obtain 2 quests of F rank or higher every day at midnight, and another quest, Blue Eyes level 2, which granted 1 random option of rank E to copied skills. The next day, in the Inshin Fish Farm Field, B rank, the water splashed out strongly, and it powered Juyeon up. He planned to test out the new weapon he had obtained, and a huge monster fish leaped out of the water to attack. Hyeji rushed to cast a fireball, but before she could, Juyeon swung his sword at the fish, surprising her. She wondered when Juyeon had gotten so fast and thought he had focused his stats on magic. Suddenly, Suha excitedly shouted that she would support Juyeon and activated her prayer of recovery, prayer of healing, prayer of life, and prayer of strength all at once to help him. He felt his body grow lighter and thanked Suha for it. He then continued to slice through the fish with Suha's support, without noticing that Hyeji was growing angry. On the other hand, the men on the boat were surprised that Juyeon was using a sword when he was supposed to be a mage. Even so, they assumed his defense was still paper thin and decided to execute their plan to lure him in and finish him off. They also thought it would be best to use the truth order to separate Suha from Juyeon. Later, in the reward-claiming office, they were all confused about why the field loot settlement was not going through. The employee explained that there was no separate settlement amount for the healer, and that the contract stated the amount was to be settled to the Truth Order Guild, to which Suha belonged. Suha argued that she had clearly requested to withdraw from the guild through the user association. However, the employee informed her that the Truth Order had not processed her withdrawal yet, and the paperwork had not even reached the agency. Juyeon asked if they would have to give the guild money too if they joined one, and Sangwook explained that most large guilds operated more like sponsors, and that Lee Hee-sung from the Daehan Guild was a prime example, which was why Haesung filmed all those silly commercials. Sangwook added that Suha had probably signed a similar contract too, and at that rate, all earnings from the field would flow straight to the Truth Order. Suha calmed herself and told them she would have to cancel the contract face-to-face in person, not just through paperwork. Juyeon worriedly asked if she was okay with that, and she proudly replied that the Truth Order had only used her as their saintess to grow their power, but now that she was gone, they would just fall apart and were nothing but a worthless place, making Juyeon clap for her bravery. Juyeon then told Suha that her buffs were really great and that he felt empty when she was not around. Suha responded that if it helped him, she would be more than happy, and told him he did not need to use honorifics because he was older than her, unaware that Hyeji was jealous of their relationship. The next day, in the National Arboretum field, a monster boar rushed in to attack, and Hyeji immediately cast her fire, but Juyeon appeared in time and reinforced her spell, burning the boar to death. Juyeon then told her that having a buffer-type healer was definitely safer than just having dealers, which angered her, and she replied that she was not really necessary. He panicked at her words and tried to reassure her, saying he felt more at ease with her there, but she told him she was fine and that there had not been much she could contribute lately. She reminded him that she had become a user because she wanted to be the best, but before she knew it, she had become someone just following behind him. He explained that she did not have to put herself in danger and that if she had subordinates, she did not have to exhaust herself. However, that only made her angrier, and she shouted that she was not needed because he was fine with just Suha. He tried to explain that all he meant was that a ranged dealer did not have to be on the front line, and that she should not get hurt either, but she demanded to know if he had ever considered how she felt, and shouted that she was not just someone who cheered from the sidelines because she wanted to fight right beside him. Hyeji then snapped back to herself, realized what she was doing, and turned away to cool her head for a bit, leaving Juyeon standing there, stunned. Sangwook assured him that he would try to comfort Hyeji and immediately followed after his sister, leaving Juyeon alone and worried. Sangwook eventually caught up to Hyeji and told her that he knew she was upset, but reminded her that the place was not even a safe zone. He agreed with Juyeon that if she stormed off in front and ran into a monster wave, it would be really dangerous. She looked back at her brother with tears in her eyes and asked if she was pathetic. She knew she was an S-rank dealer, but the one really helping was Suha's buff, and she admitted she had never wanted to say something like that. She then felt embarrassed by her outburst, and Sangwook reminded her that dealing damage in battle was not everything, and that Juyeon was clumsy, which meant he could not do without her. She asked her brother what was wrong with her these days, and Sangwook patted her back and answered that it was because she was human. He explained that it was not so bad to be the best together, rather than being the best alone. She wiped her tears away and asked where Juyeon was. Sangwook answered that Juyeon was off thinking by himself, which worried her, and he tried to assure her that a B-rank field should not pose any real danger to Juyeon. However, she told him that the real danger to Juyeon was not the monsters, but the other users, because Juyeon had been marked on the raiders' list. That fact began to worry Sangwook as well. At the same time, Juyeon was busy thinking that he had failed to notice Hyeji's feelings and assumed it was about the last hits. He figured that Hyeji needed to feel like she had a clear role in the fight to feel fulfilled and wondered what would happen if she got so angry she asked to cancel the contract. Juyeon felt uneasy and noticed that the surroundings were getting darker. He was then startled when the area actually dimmed, even though it had been bright midday just moments earlier. The system notified him that it was the effect of extra-cost fog, which generated fog within a 50-meter radius and applied debuffs to his magic power, mana recovery, and mana consumption. He was trying to figure out what was happening when he heard a laugh nearby and someone telling him that wielding a sword was pointless when he was a mage, and that even Muhammad Al would struggle to survive the extra-cost fog skill, so he should consider it an honor. He asked if they were raiders, but they replied that they did not like belonging anywhere, and that someone about to die did not need to know. Suddenly, a man appeared with a huge hammer and tried to smash his head. Fortunately, Juyeon managed to block it with his sword and push the man back. The man felt the repelling force and was confused because a mage should not have invested points into strength. Suddenly, another man appeared, holding a sword, and shouted at Juyeon to die. Juyeon forcefully shoved the first man away and blocked the second man's attack. He then knocked the sword from the man's hand and struck him under the chin with the back of his own blade. The men retreated in shock, now certain that their intel was wrong, because Juyeon fought like a swordsman, which only left him even more confused as he stared at his own hands in surprise. Juyeon then tried to stab one of the men, feeling as if he had been holding a sword for a long time, and remembered that the memories he could not recall had been surfacing more often lately, making him wonder if he was a genius. The first man jumped back to put some distance between them and tried to calm himself, telling himself that Juyeon being a swordsman did not change anything. The man then dashed toward him again and shouted that he would have to squeeze some extra pay out of the client, yet when Juyeon swung to slash him, the man narrowly avoided the attack and escaped, leaving Juyeon startled and confused. He knew that if those men had used a skill, the status window should have popped up. He turned around and realized it was the illusion veil skill, which created illusions within a fixed radius of 20 meters around enemies, reducing their attack accuracy by 30%. He had not expected a debuffer and knew there was no time for him to copy a counter skill, so he decided to simply attack in a way they could not dodge. He released a powerful burst of flame around himself and successfully hit the debuffer, who had been hiding at a distance. However, he knew the mana consumption was high and he could not use it often, so he decided to target another enemy. At that moment, the debuffer appeared behind him and used mana reflux, which gave a 50% chance to inflict reflected damage. Juyeon turned around and saw the attack closing in on him, and he knew he was completely screwed. Luckily, Sangwook appeared in time and blocked the attack for him, and the siblings stepped forward to protect him. The first man was frustrated that the others had noticed them and decided to kill all of them. He dashed at Juyeon and swung his hammer down, but Juyeon blocked it with his sword. Hyeji began casting her flames, but before she could release the spell, Juyeon warned her that the debuffer bastard had a damage reflection skill. She replied that she might be lacking in raw power as a mage compared to him, but her experience was on another level. Hyeji then pointed her staff at the debuffer, causing the second man to panic. He asked the debuffer what they should do, and the debuffer replied that Hyeji was weaker than Juyeon, so they could stop her with the defensive gear they had. Hyeji heard the debuffer and called him rude. She then wrapped a tornado of flame around him and explained that it was different when they were facing people, because she did not need to hit them directly, she just had to burn the air they were breathing. The debuffer began choking as he struggled to breathe within the flames, and both men were shocked by the sight. Before they could react, Juyeon rushed in and slashed them down with speed, and when all of them were on the ground, Sangwook pinned the debuffer with his heavy shield. Juyeon learned that in battles against people, overwhelming damage alone was not enough, and as he had expected, experience created a completely different way of thinking. Hyeji angrily asked Sangwook if he really thought she would be gone that long, and how he could leave the kid alone, no matter how strong Juyeon was. While Hyeji was busy scolding her big brother, Juyeon watched them. It was a new scene for him, because usually the roles were reversed. Juyeon then thought about their situation and called out to Hyeji to get her attention, but she was still fuming with worry and shouted that he was going to get an earful too, so he should just wait his turn. Juyeon apologized for interrupting her scolding but said he had to speak before he missed his chance. He then informed her that he wanted to switch classes to swordsman, which left Hyeji both surprised and confused. Meanwhile, in the user company's meeting room, the representative informed the superiors that the detection from the DMZ side indicated a treasure dungeon. A senior superior suggested handling it as a private commission, since it could lead to conflict if nations got involved. The representative added that North Korea was already showing movement as well, so they had to move in first. Another man suggested assigning elite users to the mission. The representative explained that the team would be formed around S-rank users, and the candidates were Hisung and Juyeon. The senior superior was surprised to hear Juyeon's name and asked if Juyeon was registered as an F-rank healer with the association. The representative confirmed it and explained that this was exactly why they would be summoning Juyeon to the association. A woman then pointed out that it was not just an ordinary dungeon raid. If they lost the international competition, their entire user industry would fall behind, which meant they had to recruit Juyeon to act as an SS rank user for the association. At the same time, Suha happily informed Juyeon that the Truth Order Guild issue had been fully resolved and that she now belonged completely to him. But he told her that was a dangerous way to phrase it in many ways. Suha then told them that something suspicious had happened. After they visited the E-rank special field, an anonymous sponsor had made a huge donation, but the sponsor had threatened to cut funding unless the Saintess stayed. Because of that, Chilman had kept dragging things out to continue receiving money, and she guessed they were trying to separate her from Juyeon on purpose to weaken them. Suha was sure that bad people would soon invade, but Juyeon calmly told her that they had already come and gone, which amazed her even more. However, he went on to say that most of the credit belonged to Hyeji, because after adjusting his skill setup, He realized that magic relying only on pure damage had its limits, and that experience made all the difference. Hyeji blushed at his compliments and asked if he wanted her to buy him something, since he had been flattering her so much. Juyeon then said they should clearly define their party roles. He clarified that Sangwook was the tank, Hyeji was ranged DPS, and he was a melee swordsman. Suha liked the division and told him that he had been amazing with the sword, even back at the fish farm, which he agreed with without hesitation. Hyeji noticed him blushing, but instead of feeling jealous like before, she felt happy for him. Hyeji told everyone that they should avoid any suspicious contact for the time being because of the recent attack, and since Juyeon still needed time to get used to the sword, Sangwook agreed. Just then, someone called Juyeon, and he answered. The caller introduced himself as Han Chanjung, the head of Awakener Management at the association headquarters. A few hours earlier, one of the men had warned Chanjung that Juyeon was really psychopath and asked him again if he was sure it was okay to summon Juyeon to the association. The man told Chanjung that Juyeon had quite an extreme personality based on the posts he had read online, and asked what they would do if Juyeon refused to follow orders or disobeyed the association. Yet Chanjung assured his subordinate that since Juyeon had falsely reported himself as an F-rank healer, that alone gave the association enough leverage. Chanjung confidently said that Juyeon was just a rookie who had awakened recently and that putting a leash on him would not be hard. However, Chanjung was left speechless and nervous when he saw 3 S-rankers gathered in one place. He knew that Sangwook was the unbreakable shield, Hyeji the Witch of Scorching Heat, and Suha the SS rank healer, who had recently taken a bold step away from the Truth Order. Chanjung informed them that they had requested Juyeon come alone due to the sensitivity of the matter, and when Juyeon was about to explain, Hyeji cut in and introduced herself as the one holding Juyeon's management contract. She explained to Chanjung that the contract included confidentiality and agency clauses. Therefore, she could guarantee there would be no issue sharing information at the association level, and she could provide copies of the relevant documents immediately if he needed them. Hyeji then introduced the other 2 as Juyeon's fixed party members and told him that she and Juyeon could resolve the matter on their own. However, Suha disagreed and insisted that Juyeon was everyone's hope and that Hyeji could not exclude her from such an important matter. Hyeji teased Suha by saying it was just policy, no contract, no deal, but Suha refused to back down. Sangwook then told Chanjung that they understood the association's position, but Juyeon had only recently awakened, so it was too early to leave him alone. Sangwook pressed Chanjung to understand their situation, and with no other choice, Chanjung decided to begin by confirming a few things as part of the procedure, with all of them present. Chanjung asked Hyeji if she was aware of the major discrepancy between Juyeon's registered rank and his actual field performance, but she replied that it was already being coordinated and would all be covered through the official contract and party records. Chanjung was pushed back a little by her answer, but tried again to persuade her, saying that once Juyeon officially registered with the association, he would receive support and protection. Hyeji responded that support was not an issue because Juyeon was already under personal protection clauses. Chanjung accepted that, but then asked if it was not true that Juyeon's own wishes should come first. He tried to convince Juyeon that if he joined hands with the association, it would not end with just support. He would gain access to S-rank rare equipment, priority for dungeon raids, and even national-level legal protection, meaning he could obtain things he would never be able to get on his own. However, Juyeon was not interested. As he casually picked his nose, he asked Chanjung if the association just gave away S-rank gear like that. Chanjung hurriedly clarified that he had explained poorly and meant that if Juyeon was affiliated with the association, he would be given first purchasing rights for equipment. Juyeon still found it bothersome and immediately turned Chanjung's offer down, shocking him to the core. Juyeon was already focused on boss items with stars, and what he needed more than gear was good skills. He also noticed that Chanjung had other plans, so he stood up and asked if that was all he needed to say. However, Chanjung stopped him and asked if he could issue a request directly to Juyeon, not as a representative of the association. That confirmed Juyeon's suspicion that there was more to it. Chanjung then explained that an energy wave had been detected during a field generation near the DMZ, and according to the advanced team's report, they had found a cave filled with items inside, so they had temporarily named it the Treasure Dungeon. Juyeon asked if it would not be enough for the advanced team to just retrieve the treasure, but Chanjung replied that the last transmission from the advanced team had been cut off, and no contact had been made afterward. Not even with the second team. Chanjung informed them that the operation had to be handled secretly, on an individual level, since it was a sensitive zone. If something went wrong, they would be able to claim that the person had acted alone, which would give them a convenient excuse. Sangwook realized it was extremely dangerous, since it was an unclassified field, and asked Chanjung why they should accept the request. Chanjung told them that they would be granted priority rights to the items found in the treasure dungeon and that the association would guarantee monetary compensation according to their value. Sangwook grew worried upon hearing this,
knowing it would completely capture Juyeon's attention. And when Chanjung added that they could each take one item of their choice, the matter was effectively decided. They then came out of the office while Juyeon excitedly asked how many contracts they had to sign just to go to one field and told them that it was not some voice phishing scam. Sangwook, irritated, asked if that was really something to be happy about and warned him that DMZ meant North Korea. He had already had enough of North Korea during his military service and now had to go there again. Juyeon told Sangwook not to think of it as the army but as a walk and pointed out that they would not be the only ones going. Hyesung would be there too. He also assured them that there was a clause stating that if things went south, they would not be held responsible for abandoning the request. Hyeji noticed his excitement and told him he did not exactly look like someone planning to give up. She was right, because Juyeon was already plotting to get back all the taxes he had paid with interest by taking the rewards and hoping they would be something worthwhile. Eventually, the day of their special mission arrived, and they reached the treasure field. Hyesung and his team arrived soon after, and were glad that Juyeon had come as well. Juyeon remarked that someone could not stop bragging everywhere about an SS rank, but Hyesung pretended it was not him. Juyeon then asked Hyesung if they were only going with 9 people, since he had thought they would at least be given a few more seats, and Hyesung replied that the association's notice had said there should have been more. Suddenly, a woman appeared, and Juyeon recognized her. Ego, also known as Hyoju, respectfully introduced herself to everyone and greeted them all with a bright smile. When they were all ready, they entered the field, and Juyeon was surprised when they were greeted by the cold, which immediately reduced their movement and attack speed by 20%. Their vision was reduced by 15%, mana recovery by 30%, healing efficiency by 50%, and after 15 minutes, parts of their bodies would begin to freeze. Juyeon thought it was insane, and Suha asked him if she should remove the debuffs, but Hyesung told her there was no need and explained that it was a permanent effect, which meant that even if they removed it, it would reapply immediately. Juyeon reassured Suha that it was fine and told her to save her divine power. Hyesung then informed them that the last cutoff signal should have been somewhere around there, and Juyeon asked Sangwook if he had ever seen anything like a tiger while serving on the front line before. Sangwook just asked him back why there would be tigers there, and added that even if there were, they would just be stray tigers. Suddenly, Sangwook stopped walking, causing Juyeon to bump into his back and ask why he had suddenly stopped. Juyeon then looked ahead and saw a tiger growling at them, and reminded Sangwook that he had just said there were no tigers there. However, Sangwook repeated that it would just be a stray tiger. They moved into position while the stray tiger slowly approached. The tiger hissed loudly and leaped toward them. Fortunately, Sangwook, being a strong tank, blocked the tiger's claws. He then warned them to be careful because the tigers had ice attributes. Unfortunately, they saw more red eyes in the bushes, and an entire pack of stray tigers emerged to attack. Hyeji released her flames to support her brother, and the fire burned the stray tigers at the front. Hyesung shouted that hunting monsters was not their goal, and warned them that if the fight dragged on longer than 10 minutes, it would turn into a battle of attrition, so they needed to get out of the area. Everyone followed Hyesung's command and ran away from the stray tigers. However, along the way, another type of monster began chasing them. They still did not fight back and kept running forward. A few minutes later, they stopped to catch their breath, and Juyeon remarked that this field really was the DMZ, because even landmines had turned into monsters. They then all looked up and saw a shining, beautiful waterfall in front of them and felt disappointed that they could not record it due to security restrictions. Hyoju mentioned that the soil felt strange, almost as if it were alive. Suha asked if places like that were common in the DMZ, but Sangwook replied no and guessed that it was a field mutation that had expanded. Hyesung then told everyone that contact had been lost after the last report stating there was a cave beyond the waterfall, and they decided to investigate the area first. Eventually, they entered the cave, and it was just as Hyesung had expected. Suha grabbed his arm in fear and said it felt like they were walking into the stomach of something, yet they continued deeper inside. A few minutes later, they reached the end of the cave, but it was bright. Juyeon was surprised when his eyes adjusted to the light and he saw what lay before them, treasures piled up and shining brilliantly. One of the men reported to Hyesung that there were no physical traps, and upon hearing that, they all rushed to the treasure in excitement, including Juyeon, who was certain that at least one of the items would be his. Hyesung told everyone that he had already scanned everything with the detection skill, but still warned them to collect carefully. Hyeji found a gorgeous staff, Sangwook found a diamond ring, and our greedy MC picked up everything he wanted because he could not choose. They were all excited and busy when Hyoju noticed corpses behind a nearby tree and became certain that the enemy was coming. Suddenly, the system notified them that the sacrifice was insufficient and that the seal binding the grudge of the dead had been released. Juyeon immediately swung his sword when he saw the soul and successfully slashed its head off. However, the soul simply restored its head. Suha attacked the soul with her blessing of safety, and he thanked her for her help.
Juyeon had not expected things to end easily just because they had taken the treasure, but he still thought the treasure had been a cliché trap. And he could not believe that physical attacks would not work, especially now that he had just switched to swordsmanship. Hyesung took his axe out and cast a magic spell on it. He was glad that the expensive skill he had prepared was not useless. It was a holy armament, grade A, that granted a temporary blessing to the selected weapon for 5 minutes. Juyeon rushed to use his skill copy, and just as Hyesung was about to jump forward, Juyeon jumped ahead of him and successfully killed one soul. Hyesung was shocked and couldn't believe that a mage was using a sword. He also wondered how Juyeon had killed a soul when physical attacks were supposed to be ineffective. Juyeon excitedly swung his sword around and acted like a fool, saying that he was glad he had switched to the sword. Hyesung was sure that the skill Juyeon was using was the one he had bought and grew even more suspicious of him. On the other hand, Hyeji released her firestorm. However, she noticed that the souls were absorbing the magic. Hyeju found a solution and shouted to them that buffs were incoming as she used her Blessing of the Heavens, rank SS, for a duration of 1 hour and 30 minutes, increasing all their stats by 10. Hyeji's magic power grew much stronger, and she thanked Hyeju for the buff. However, Hyeju's hand trembled, and she looked worriedly at Juyeon, who was busy slashing the souls around him as if they were just sheets of paper. Then Juyeon's hand began to freeze, but luckily for him, Suha used her goddess's breath, rank A, which briefly enhanced his body and increased the speed of debuff recovery. Suha then shouted for everyone to speak up if they started freezing so she could buy them some time, and together they managed to kill every soul with each other's help. The system then warned them that the world tree, tainted by the Apostle of Ruin's grudge, had opened its eyes, and they all waited for its next action. The system showed that they were facing the Corrupted World Tree, level 70, and it activated Corrupted Bark, rank S, a defensive shell created by accumulated corruption that applied even more debuffs to its targets. Everyone panicked as their mana bottomed out and they felt weaker. The tree then released an even stronger smoke around them to kill them. Fortunately, Hyeju used Holy Authority, rank SS, and Heavenly Reservoir, rank S, to heal everyone. Juyeon was surprised that all his stats had increased dramatically, but he knew that the skill Hyeju had just used was supposed to be a non-area skill, and he confirmed he was right when he saw Hyeju stumbling in exhaustion. He rushed over to her, and Hyesung shouted to everyone that killing the tree was not their main objective, and that they needed to retreat before exposing themselves any further. Juyeon tried to help Hyeju stand up and told her that they should get out of there. However, she disagreed and told him that they had to defeat the world tree because it was the final core. He was confused and asked her what she meant by that. She explained that there was a child who truly longed for her older brother and was begging him to help her with it. Suddenly, Juyeon saw himself, much older, with a cat rubbing its head against his foot. Ego then called him hero and told him that she would wait for him, no matter how long it took. Sangwook called his name in worry and shouted at him to get a hold of himself. Juyeon snapped back to the present and stutteringly asked what that was, but before anyone could answer, the tree's branches moved and lunged toward them. Hyeju pushed him away and was caught by the branch in his place. The branch wrapped around Hyeju even more tightly and squeezed her life and mana away, making her scream in pain. Juyeon grew furious at the sight and used his sacrifice of the goddess skill, which left him at 10% of his life, and activated his Kainal Descent skill. At the same time, everyone's debuffs were removed, including those on Hyeju, who had passed out from the pain. Hyeji anxiously asked if he was being serious, but he calmly replied that it was the only usable skill and that he would borrow her power as well. He then raised her sword and unleashed an overwhelming firestorm toward the corrupted world tree, burning it until nothing was left but dust. Juyeon easily defeated the tree that had claimed so many lives, and everyone was left open-mouthed in shock as they witnessed his true power. Juyeon was relieved to see that Hyeju was safe and felt satisfied with the outcome of his actions. But suddenly, someone shouted and demanded to know what kind of chaotic mess this was. They all froze in horror when they saw North Korean soldiers aiming their guns at them. The commander warned that the field was under the control of the Korean People's Army and that if they did not surrender immediately, they would open fire. Juyeon raised both hands, knowing the situation was about to become troublesome. They were locked in a tense standoff when the system showed Juyeon that he had only 7 minutes and 45 seconds left before his descent skill ended. He was at least glad that it was enough time, but he still wondered what he should do next. As he observed the soldiers trembling while staring at him, someone intervened to stop the North Korean military. It was Chanjung, rushing in to help his people. Chanjung saw Hyesung standing there with both hands raised as well, and wanted to remind him that their top priority was resolving things quietly. However, Hyesung simply looked away in guilt. Then Chanjung noticed Juyeon smiling broadly with his 6 wings spread, and immediately knew who had caused all the trouble.
Chanjung explained to the commander that those users were citizens of the Republic of Korea and that their custody had to be handled by the user association. The commander, however, responded that the association did not matter because they were illegal intruders and had to be handed over. While Chanjung was speaking with the military commander, a system window appeared next to Juyeon, displaying several of his copy skills. He then lowered himself to the ground, which caused the soldiers to panic, but he simply glared at them, making them step back in fear. He calmly called out to Chanjung and reminded him that he had once said joining the association granted national legal protection rights. Juyeon asked if that was still valid, and Chanjung replied that it was, but added that it would be discussed after the situation was resolved. Instead, Juyeon informed Chanjung on the spot that he would join the association. As he said it, Suha, Hyesung, the Kim siblings, and Hyoju were all shocked when a green gem appeared above their heads. Juyeon then told Chanjung to handle the cleanup and teleported everyone away from the field, leaving Chanjung standing there, speechless and confused.